Imagine a universe where being born as a spooky necromancer basically transforms you into an invincible deity. Saju Donhan was unlucky to receive the absolute weakest skill known to mankind. While fancy high rollers boss around gigantic squads of chilling phantom warriors, this poor fellow is stuck summoning 3 tiny piles of clattering loose bones, brute bullied and beat up by the smallest green idiots in existence. He is quite clearly the biggest disappointment within this entire society of monster hunters, gambling his organs daily for spare change while everyone giggles at his very obvious potential. However, the general public has no clue that his trash job hides a legendary secret. By mindlessly spamming his weak monster spell exactly 10,000 times without ever taking breaks, he will soon unlock a super secret evolution that transforms his comedy squad into an unstoppable monstrous legion. Let us rewind time to see exactly how this bargain bin wizard eventually shatters the matrix. We crash right into a duel where sharp swords create a light show of friction, and the temperature of this chaotic brawl is rising way too fast. Total mayhem ensues as tiny green demons overwhelm a group of guys, while one soldier shouts about the sheer numbers as they get absolutely owned. The supervisor is losing his mind, howling for everyone to stay in line or die, while a terrified newbie lets out a whimper as the monsters advance. Higher up on a hill, a mysterious person in a dark sweater observes the mess, looking exactly like a typical protagonist waiting for his epic entrance theme. A knight glances over and bellows at the dead person manager, reminding him it is finally showtime, because his squad is truly banking on his skills being real. Our main man moves forward, looking slick with neon purple energy and a skull staff, being the prestigious class everyone wants in their team. He tells the dead to awaken as a massive explosion of purple fire forms a spooky floating skull, proving the spell is definitely high-grade quality stuff. The violet light clears to reveal 3 shiny skeletons holding sharp tools while emerging from darkness, looking ready to poke holes in everything with their eyes. Those bone minions do not waste a second, sprinting into the enemy pack and cutting them up, with one skeleton using 2 swords like a professional. The regular grunts are stunned, thinking they might be watching a literal top-tier still, since no high-ranking wizard ever visits these lowly ranked dungeons. The narrator mentions that snagging this talent is a direct ticket to becoming a top superstar, making it the most coveted power among all the sweaty fighters. The troops are practically having a nerd moment over the leader, finally understanding why he acted so chill, convinced they have basically won the lottery. Our hero, Ju Danun, wears a sneaky grin while soaking up the attention, looking like he finally found a decent filter for his professional hunter profile. We discover that only a tiny fraction of humanity possesses this rare career, which turns him into a prestigious legend capable of clearing out massive dungeons alone. The giant mountain of skeletal companions stands firm behind him, fearing truly lethal, until a massive but shows up to change the entire vibe of the scene. Flashback to his daily reality, where a lone and wobbly Bone Man is losing a fist fight against a shrimp, and Bone 1 is barely surviving. Bone number 2 is failing hard too, having its ribcage shattered by another gremlin, which is basically the opposite of the cool movie montage we saw earlier. Then there is Bone 3, a marksman who cannot even aim its own weapon, as Danhoon admits he is actually just a totally broken and defective necromancer. Currently he is wandering aimlessly through a nice garden looking totally miserable, pretending he is just normal while his face displays complete and utter despair. Some other adventurers notice him and inquire why he exclusively summons skeletal warriors, their tone more inquisitive than impressed. Danhan can only muster a flimsy excuse about them being adequate for E-rank dungeons, while secretly seething with envy over their superior capabilities. He checks his personal status, and it's a rather dismal affair. His designated occupation is labeled as Cursed Necromancer, and he's firmly cemented at a meager E-rank, solidifying his status as the unfortunate outcast of the Necromancer fraternity. The system's pronouncement practically mucks him, asserting that a genuine Necromancer commands formidable specters, yet he's being condemned to mere bone fragments. The poor chap looks ready to weep into his hood. The on-screen text hammers home the point that despite his supposed mastery over the deceased, he's stuck with rudimentary skeletons. It's the ultimate cosmic joke, possessing a grand title but absolutely zero the associated legendary might. He trudges homeward under the cloak of night, shoulders drooping as he grapples with the realization that he should be the one inspiring or, not drowning in a sea of others' achievements. The chasm between his potential and his current existence is a rather bitter pill to digest. The narrative zips back a decade, to the time when everyone, upon reaching 20, suddenly acquired unique extraordinary abilities. This marked the dawn of a supposed new epoch of amplified human potential for all. We're shown a bustling urban thoroughfare, depicting the mundane existence people enjoyed before the grand upheaval. It appears to be just another ordinary day, but the world was on the cusp of a significant fantastical transformation. It was essentially a celestial lottery where individuals were bestowed with random powers, ranging from potent weaponry to rather ordinary trades like blacksmithing or dressmaking. Some struck gold, while others, well, the tailoring. Others emerged as explorers, healers, or auxiliary personnel. However, given its purely chance-driven nature, this phenomenon fostered widespread feelings of profound injustice. Imagine rolling a magical die that consistently lands on a 1 while your neighbor's luck yields 6s daily. Despite the inherent inequity, these acquired skills proved indispensable for humanity's survival against the onslaught of monstrous entities. We observe a newspaper headline detailing the appearance of peculiar beasts, featuring a rather dashing azure dragon. The narration gracefully shifts focus inward, as we witness a sword being driven into the soil. Regardless of the system's inherent unfairness, this is a reality they now inhabit. Danhan vividly recalls the moment he first manifested his abilities, and how everyone looked upon him with admiration for becoming a necromancer. He was literally amidst a field of vanquished monsters, exuding an aura of destined greatness. Fellow adventurers enthusiastically applauded him, exclaiming that skeletons were the absolute best and proclaiming his awesomeness. He genuinely believed he was destined for the elite ranks back then. However, the stark reality is that his progress stagnated, leaving him confined to being a solitary combatant solely in low-tier E-rank dungeons. He gazes at a minuscule skull in his grasp, accepting that this might represent his ultimate achievement. We see him tapping on a desk, informing his supervisor that his day's work is complete. He's resigned himself to a monotonous cycle of mercenary tasks simply to make ends meet. The supervisor glances up, acknowledging Danhan's completion of his mercenary duties and the accompanying dungeon report. It presents a decidedly corporate and uninspired depiction of what should be a heroic lifestyle. He offers a courteous inclination of his head and announces his departure, leaving the office environment behind. Even with supernatural powers, he remains just another individual punching a time clock. As he exits the building, the supervisor wishes him a pleasant evening. It's a solitary image of him working off into the darkening night, his rucksack slung over his shoulder. He exhales a lengthy, frigid sigh, his breath missing in the chill air. It's evident he's thoroughly weary and deeply disheartened by his current life circumstances. Ambling along the city pavement, he mutters curses at the world under his breath. Despite being surrounded by illumination and throngs of people, he feels oddly isolated in his perceived failure. His thoughts drift back to his entirely ineffective skeletal minions, like the one wielding a sword that could barely fend off a mere goblin. He ponders why the universe bestowed him with powers that proved so utterly disappointing. Another memory surfaces, showing Bone 2 taking a rather clumsy blow to the cranium. Dunham reflects that if he were to be granted an ability, it should at least have been something genuinely practical rather than this crushing disillusionment. He observes Bone 3 fumbling another attempt, and muses that he wouldn't have even objected to being assigned a craft like blacksmithing. Anything would surely be preferable to being a flawed imitation of a hero. His mobile device chirps with a notification. He's just received 40,001 for the day's perilous dungeon expedition. That equates to roughly $30 for risking his life. Talk about a raw deal. He lets out a wry, self-deprecating chuckle while glancing at his phone, realizing he could earn more by working part-time at a convenience mart. It's a rather sobering assessment of his supposedly prestigious profession. Nevertheless, he concedes to himself that this is the sole pursuit he genuinely desires, though he cannot abandon it. He walks away from the camera's view, peering diminutive against the backdrop of the towering city structures. He halts abruptly, his attention seized by significant breaking news displayed on an enormous outdoor video screen. Someone is making a considerable impact in the world of adventurers. The news segment details the exploits of Dark Lord, a necromancer who successfully cleared the Moon Canyon dungeon and achieved rank of status within a mere 3 years. Korea now officially boasts 37 rankers, and this individual is the undeniable star. The screen showcases a striking depiction of the Dark Lord, complete with a skull resting on his shoulder. The news presenter remarks on how this phenomenon highlights a necromancer's formidable capabilities, which serves as painful irony for our protagonist. Dunham gazes upward at the screen, his expression a mixture of profound yearning and utter incredulity. Everyone considers having a necromancer in the nation a tremendous asset, yet he's enduring the nightmarish manifestation of that very dream. He grinds his teeth with pure annoyance, stewing over how his rival somehow managed to awaken on precisely the same day he did. This was like a me versus the guy she tells me not to worry about scenario, but for superpowers instead of dating. We cut to the Dark Lord, who is casually chilling inside a glowing red magic circle, radiating pure, unadulterated menace, resembling a literal deity of destruction. Comparing the power levels would be like comparing a damp sponge to a supernova. Dunham trembles with rage, while his 3 tiny skeletons float around his head, clearly bewildered by all the drama. He's stuck with a crummy necromancer curse, while his competitor is already a world-famous, top-tier ranker. He erupts in a fit of screams, questioning the universe's terrible choices as fire bursts forth around him, a physical manifestation of his internal fury. He has officially reached his limit with whatever high power is currently running this cosmic joke. He pushes onward, venturing deeper into a foreboding forest or perhaps a dungeon, where his pristine white sneakers look completely ridiculous against the rugged, overgrown landscape. It was a serious fashion faux pas for monster hunting. He pauses in a small clearing, peering insignificant and solitary beneath the moon's pale glow. He was desperately searching for an explanation, or at least a secluded spot to scream until his vocal cords gave out. He runs a hand through his hair, attempting to regain composure and embrace the harsh reality that life isn't fair, especially when the deck is stacked against you. He was resigned to his fate, even though accepting it felt like swallowing glass. The system prompt brutally interrupts again, reiterating that skeletons are his only summoning option. He firmly decides he won't let a cursed necromancer label turn him into a couch potato, despite the severe limitations. He spots a collection of wooden training dummies and declares it's showtime. He might be starting from rock bottom with barely any power, but he absolutely refuses to be a quitter. With a fierce expression, he calls forth his skeletal crew. His purple energy swirls around him and his staff. He looks ready for battle, even if his army consists solely of bone-based individuals. The system window for summoned skeleton appears, detailing its 10 energy cost and 2 quirky features. He can name each skeleton, and they resurrect after dying. The ability to give nicknames seems like an oddly sentimental detail for a brutal combat skill. He recalls his genuine surprise upon discovering the naming ability, feeling a tiny flicker of hope. It was a minuscule silver lining to find in his otherwise completely underwhelming and defective skill set. Gazing at the blue status window, he ponders if this seemingly useless naming ability might actually be a hidden, special power. He's truly desperate, grasping at the tiny straws for anything that distinguishes him from the crowd. He quickly squashes that line of reasoning, acknowledging it's almost certainly just wishful thinking. He's learned the hard way that hope, like a bad meme, eventually gets old and hurts you when you least expect it. He welcomes his skeletal companions warmly, telling them to shake off the stiffness in their joints before training. He's even careful not to jostle the delicate freckle bones, a gesture that is equal parts endearing and completely pathetic. The skeletons begin clattering around, readying themselves for practice. He observes that no matter how many times he summons them, these exact 3 always reappear, making them quite the persistent crew. He passes a huge broadsword to skeleton number 1, who grabs it firmly in its bony hand. At least with weapons, the skeletons manage to look marginally more threatening than just bare bones. Number 2 receives a lengthy spear, striking a surprisingly battle-ready pose with the weapon. Dunham is clearly treating his summoned skeletons less like expendable minions and more like a carefully trained special forces squad. Number 3 is assigned the bow, shown from behind as it takes aim at a distant target. He's clearly committed to giving them the full, diverse weapon treatment, covering all possible combat roles. Dunham declares that training officially begins, resting his staff on his shoulder like a seasoned drill sergeant. He acts as both their coach and commando, pouring an unrecognized effort to maximize his underperforming team. Perched on a rock, he observes the training session, realizing this manual approach is his only path to progress. He isn't just mindlessly grinding levels, he's painstakingly trying to teach a bunch of skeletons useful skills through repetition. The skeleton's sword slices into the wooden training dummy with a satisfying thwack. The intense practice appears to be yielding positive results, proving that even a skeleton can get better with enough dedication. A view of the forest at dawn highlights the initial progress he achieved. It seemed like he truly stumbled upon a viable, albeit exhausting, strategy with his personalized manual training method. The skeletons improved dramatically, going from barely managing to defeat one goblin to easily handling a trio. It was a massive leap forward, proving that all his hard work wasn't entirely pointless, which is always nice. But then he ran directly into a solid wall, realizing that ear rank is truly ear rank, no matter how hard you try to spin it. He laments that despite pushing them relentlessly or even bringing in a high-level hunter for supervision, his skeletons refused to improve. This was a soul-crushing plateau. He slouches over in the gloomy forest, calling his existence absolutely pitiful. He had poured endless hours into this endeavor for minimal returns, and the emotional exhaustion from that realization was finally hitting him full force. He stares off into the distance with a renewed sense of purpose, declaring he has no option but to keep moving forward. He resolves that chasing an impossible dream is still superior to living a life without any hope or aspirations. He sits in the tall grass, a tiny silhouette in the enormous, dark forest. He recites a quote about the value of pursuing impossible dreams, though it sounds like he's mostly attempting to convince himself of its truth more than anyone else. Abruptly, a set of glowing yellow eyes and a terrifying mouthful of sharp teeth emerge from the undergrowth with a bone-chilling screech. Something large and definitely far worse than a goblin has unexpectedly crashed his pity party. Danhan whirls around, completely taken aback and thoroughly confused. He certainly wasn't expecting visitors during his late-night self-help seminar, especially not one that looked like a nightmare. A choked, panicked gasp tore from his throat as the utterly horrifying revelation of his current predicament finally clicked, his utterly petrified face filling the frame in such an extreme close-up, you could almost smell his fear. The colossal, verdant foot, rippling with sinews, descended upon the earth with a ground-shaking thud, immediately signaling the arrival of something so gargantuan and robust, it probably bench-pressed mountains for fun. The behemoth let out a guttural rumble, revealing itself as a monstrous orc with glowering eyes and formidable tusks, clearly more accustomed to turning heroes into roadkill than our protagonist was to fighting. Dunham found himself utterly paralyzed, staring up at the towering orc which loomed over him like a bad financial decision, mentally screaming an orc, knowing full well his life insurance policy was inadequate for this. He scrambled backward, desperately clutching his skull staff, utterly flummoxed about why an orc, of all things, had decided to crash his day. This monster was definitely several weight classes above his pay grade. The system started having a digital meltdown, broadcasting urgent alerts that bones 1, 2, and 3 were all suppressed by an overwhelming presence, their stats plummeting by 20%, proving even skeletons can get the shivers. Dunhoon glared at his skeletal companions, branding them damn idiots for their palpable terror, utterly exasperated that his only line of defense was crumbling faster than a cookie in a blender. Before the real action even began, the orc looked utterly petrifying as it cast a monstrous shadow over him, and Dunhan's brain finally connected the dots. A dungeon break must have occurred, meaning monsters were now throwing a surprise party in reality. We received a lightning-fast explanation that a dungeon break happens when uncompleted dungeon inhabitants spill into the outside world, manifesting as a crimson, swirling vortex of pure, unadulterated nope. The orc hoisted a massive, rather crudely fashioned axe high into the air, its deadly blade glinting ominously, clearly planning to transform our hero into an unidentifiable puddle on the otherwise pristine grass. Dunhan found himself sweating profusely, contemplating his imminent demise, sporting that wide-eyed, desperate expression of someone who just realized they're about to meet the Mecha, perhaps with a side of axe. He shrieked for the creature to halt as the orc bored its massive axe down with a colossal whoosh, frantically barking commands at his skeletons, hoping they could somehow intercept the fatal blow. One poor skeleton was utterly obliterated by the axe, its skull literally flattening like a pancake as sparks flew dramatically, a brutal display of the orc's roar, undisputed, bone-shattering power. The orc unleashed a thunderous roar as it completely shattered the unfortunate skeleton, prompting a system alert that Bone 1 summon was cancelled, which in game terms means your bony buddy Jessica permadeated. Another piecing alert chimed in, announcing Bone 2 summon had also been cancelled, and Dunhan looked as if his entire world was crumbling, having lost 2/3 of his skeletal security detail in mere heartbeats. He whirled around and sprinted for his very life, clutching his diminutive skull staff, as a relentless orc gave chase through the dense forest, a desperate, adrenaline-fueled sprint for survival. A sharp spear or jagged shard whizzed past him with a sinister swish, missing his head by an uncomfortably close margin, proving this orc wasn't just immensely strung. It was also a master of projectile pain. He glanced back, seeing the orc rapidly gaining on him, letting out another menacing growl, so he desperately implored Bone 3 to do anything, absolutely anything, to buy him a few more precious seconds of existence. Bone 3 calmly drew its bow, appearing remarkably composed for a skeleton on the verge of becoming pulp, as Dunhan pleaded with it to hold the line, realizing he absolutely did not want to die, no matter how terribly his life was going. He ducked behind a sturdy tree, quickly checking his vital stats and noting his remaining energy stood at 70, a sudden realization hitting him that he could, if absolutely necessary, summon 7 more of his bony boys. He immediately activated the summon skeleton skill, and 2 more skeletal warriors burst forth in a shimmering explosion of purple energy, signaling that Bone 1 and Bone 2 were officially back for round 2, hopefully with less flattening. He began issuing rapid-fire orders, instructing Bone 1 and 2 to act as the primary tanks, while Bone 3 provided ranged support, a classic RPG strategy, but it remained to be seen if it worked against a monster that apparently eats tanks for breakfast. The orc roared once more, slamming its mighty axe into a skeleton's shield with a deafening thwack, the skeletal defenders barely managing to withstand the sheer, overwhelming force of the relentless assault. Dunhan observed from the sidelines, looking utterly fallen, panting and clenching his jaw, realizing his brilliant strategy wasn't exactly a guaranteed victory condition, more like a prolonged defeat. He was frantically recasting the summon skill, ordering Bone 1 and 2 to retreat just as they shattered, only to summon them again instantly, essentially using his precious energy reserves as a very fragile, renewable meat shield. Time itself seemed to stretch and distort as he pondered how much longer this desperate charade could possibly endure, utterly spent and gasping for air as he gazed up at the indifferent night sky. He clutched the staff with visibly trembling hands, his breathing coming in ragged, desperate gasps, having reached his absolute breaking point, while the orc, infuriatingly, seemed fresh as a daisy. The orc growled again, its glowing yellow eyes burning into him as it loomed menacingly, just as a system alert popped up with the single worst possible news. He had completely exhausted all his energy. The system, with its impeccable timing, offered a helpful tip, asking if he wished to recover energy and suggesting a nice rest. Dunhan was practically screaming that a quick nap was out of the question with an orc trying to rearrange his internal organs. He cast his gaze downward, his face shrouded in shadow, as the crushing realization that he was utterly out of options finally settled in. Sweating, kicking, he wore the grim expression of a man who knew his final curtain call was nigh. A huge green creature towers over him, looking like a muscular pantry with teeth, while this shot frames him as a soon-to-be historical statistic. The close-up shot focuses on red flashlight eyes and beige facial protrusions as the monster uses its vocal cords for a lawn scream. Dunhan tilts his head back with wide eyes and a hanging jaw, standing in his one armor while the green giant readies its swing. Out of nowhere, a high-intensity golden explosion happens with a bang, and the shiny rectangle shows up to discuss some requirements he just met. He stays locked in place under the yellow spotlight while observing the floating screen, his lips moving without any coherent sounds coming out. His left eye starts shining like a bright coin when he remembers an old notification he previously ignored, signaling a sudden increase in his survival chances. The yellow border confirms his dark magic user role has hit a milestone, specifically granting him the rule of 10,000 repetitions achievement. According to the Bucks, getting better involves spamming the Bone Buddy button 10,000 times, which he clearly did since he is now receiving a prize. A new ding sounds off to signal his promotion from rank E up to D, meaning his items and upgrades are on their way right now. He shouts at the floating screen to deliver the goods quickly as the green arm descends, hoping for a rescue at the very last moment. While the X is halfway down, his blue mana meter refills to the top, giving him a shiny new health bar and a sudden physical boost. His basic bone bud is transformed into awakened versions, now surrounded by yellow sparks and sporting gear that looks more expensive than their original equipment. He points his wooden stick toward the sky while it emits a blinding sun-like radiance, essentially starting the main character's victory theme sequence. The skeleton uses a fresh shield to stop the monster's weapon, generating enough reverse force to move the huge creature several feet away. He looks at his mana pool and finds it at precisely 100, then stands taller while waiting to see his bone squad in full action. He triggers the spell and 2 fresh recruits materialize in clouds of violet and cyan mist, wearing thick plate armor instead of just bare ribs. The display mentions that his minions are no longer barehanded as specific offensive items are being distributed across his entire miniature bone army. One of the bony soldiers holds a staff that is clearly electrified with magic, which is superior to a standard rusted garden tool. He vocalizes loudly about the pre-equipped gear, noticing that he finally possesses a diverse squad including both a heavy defender and a magic caster. The Calcium crew rushes forward in a tight formation, circling the monster like professionals while he acts like a tactical general for once. The main shield-wearing skeleton holds its ground against a giant swing, showing no physical movement despite the impact that previously would have leveled it. The clinking soldiers dance around with high-velocity agility, overwhelming the green opponent as it fails to land any hits on the faster bone targets. A warrior skeleton closes the distance to look directly into the monster's nostrils, forcing it to emit a low sound while the dynamic shifts entirely. The monster's mouth corners twitch downward as its posture stiffens, indicating it realizes the previous power balance has completely vanished before its eyes. The huge beast slams its weapon into the floor, generating a loud noise and white kinetic visual effects in a frantic bid to stop its momentum. The bone warriors zip through the air with ease, letting the metal hit the empty ground while the monster remains stuck in its recovery frame. Moisture beads on the monster's green forehead as a loud snap echoes, right before a vertical sheet of flame ignites inches from its chin. An intense audio boom marks the moment a high column of fire swallows the beast, turning the dark woods into a very bright arena. The skeleton designated as Unit 5 stands still with its magical tool, while the HUD reports a successful activation of its primary fireball attack. Engulfed in a sphere of heat and light, the creature sends out one final lung vocal vibration, signaling the end of the long-awaited showdown. As the smoke dissipated, Ding-Hoon stood over the defeated beast, wearing an expression of complete disbelief. He stared blankly, wondering what in the world had just occurred, still completely failing to process his sudden power increase. The triumphant system notification popped up, essentially high-fiving him for defeating the incredibly strong orc. The skeletons posed dramatically around him, looking like genuine badasses under the pale moonlight. Ding-Hoon's heartbeat thundered in his chest as he gorked at the fallen monster. Only moments ago, he had been absolutely certain that his life was about to end. He looked down at the charred and bloody mess that was left of the orc, a grim and messy reminder of how close he truly came to death. It was a visceral scene proving this wasn't a clean victory, but a genuine fight for survival. A wide, slightly unhinged grin spread across his face as he realized there might actually be hope for him after all. He had finally discovered his true purpose, and the defective Necromancer was only just beginning his journey to greatness. We find our hero, Ding-Hoon, celebrating his massive level up in the most glamorous way possible for a broke mercenary, with a steaming bowl of instant ramen. You could practically hear the slurping as he finally took a deep breath after that insane orc battle. He stared intensely at his computer screen with total disbelief, probably hitting refresh to confirm he wasn't dreaming. Even though he had seen it happen in the forest, seeing the data on screen finally made it feel real. The status window confirmed his suspicions. He was still ranked D, and his cursed Necromancer title remained, but the Awakened Skeleton Summon skill was a total game changer. He realized the most important thing of all, his supposedly defective ability actually had room to grow. He cheered, shoveling more noodles into his mouth. He was finally understanding that all those years of struggling hadn't been pointless. He had consistently put in the effort, and now the universe was finally giving him the results he earned. He glanced over at his newly improved squad, standing tall with shiny new weapons and shields. They weren't just clacking skeletons anymore. They looked like a proper, well-equipped elite security detail. Even while slurping his ramen, his mind was already planning 10 steps into the future. D rank was fantastic, but reaching C rank or higher was starting to seem less like an impossible fantasy and more like an achievable objective. He finished his meal and wiped his face, the new fire burning in his eyes. He reminded himself it was time to focus on fundamentals, knowing he couldn't get complacent just because he had achieved a new rank. He envisioned his skeletal army gaining even more power, their purple eyes glowing with greater intensity. If they were this formidable at D rank, he could only imagine the absolute monsters they would become through further evolution. He even started daydreaming about Bone 5 unleashing massive blizzard storms across entire armies. He had rapidly transitioned from I just hope I survive this to I hope my skeletons can eventually freeze the whole world, which was quite the ambitious career pivot. Ding-Hoon leaned back in his chair with a confident smirk, placing his hands behind his head. He was now eager to discover precisely how far this supposedly cursed path could take him. Back at the mercenary office, the atmosphere had become rather tense. Other hunters were murmuring about insurance costs and hazard pay, proving that the hunter profession involves just as much tedious paperwork as it does fighting monsters. Ding-Hoon worked inside and immediately sensed something strange was happening. There was a guy sitting on the couch who certainly didn't look like the usual E-rank riffraff he normally encountered here. He spotted the green nameplate on the man's belt, causing his heart to sink slightly. The green plate meant high-tier C rank, and he couldn't help but wonder why someone so powerful would be spending time in this low-level mercenary office. Our protagonist looked genuinely shocked, and his guard went up instantly. He wasn't accustomed to existing in the same vicinity as the big league hunters. The manager spotted him from across the room and practically teleported over, grasping his shoulder with an enormous grin. He yelled a greeting to Ding-Hoon, appearing far too enthusiastic for a typical Monday morning. The manager sat back down at his desk and leaned close, adopting a conspiratorial air. He asked Ding-Hoon if he had ever heard of the Blue Guild, which was essentially asking a child if they knew about Santa Claus. We see a graphic of the prestigious Blue Guild logo, founded by the renowned Manga pairing. It's one of the absolute top-tier guilds in Korea, and simply mentioning the name holds immense influence. The manager delivered the surprising news. The Blue Guild had actually submitted a request to the low-level mercenary office. They were planning to explore a newly discovered dungeon and require porters, and the best part, the compensation was absolutely enormous. He held up both hands to stress the point, noting it was 10 times the usual pay rate. For a guy who was just complaining about earning 40,001, this offer sounded like winning the actual lottery. Ding-Hoon's eyes widened dramatically, and you could almost see the dollar signs reflecting off his pupils. He exclaimed about the tenfold increase in pay, his brain already rapidly crunching the numbers. He tried to play it off as cool, rubbing his chin and pretending to consider his schedule. He remarked that nothing else on the agenda seemed particularly worthwhile today, but deep inside, he was already mentally packing his gear. He wasn't completely stupid, however. He informed the manager he needed to look into the type of dungeon first before officially signing away his life. The manager activated a hologram map displaying the newly discovered dungeon located near Parju. It appeared both high-tech and officially intimidating, which perfectly explained why the compensation was so incredibly high. Then came the inevitable catch. 5 separate teams had already attempted and failed to conquer it. Ding-Hoon's expression became much more somber, realizing this wasn't going to be a casual stroll in the park. The hologram displayed a massive warning sign and a danger label, with a rank explicitly listed as undetermined. That, in Honda terminology, typically serves as code for everyone who enters this area will die. The manager, with a smile as fake as a goblin's promise, waved off concerns, insisting the prior crews were mere beginners. He was certainly pushing that effortless wealth narrative, which, let's be honest, usually screams trouble louder than a banshee. He then reminded Dunham this was merely a glorified baggage handler dig for the illustrious Blue Guild. No monster mashing required, just shoving treasure and enjoying the main event from the sidelines. Like a very well-paid spectator, the manager insisted he just needed to clock in, perform the absolute least, and then grab that glorious, hefty wage, practically fanning himself with a contract. For anyone utterly fed up with solo orc skirmishes in the backwoods, it sounded like an absolute fantasy. Yet Dunham was practically wringing out his shirt, his brain running a marathon. He understood that an unknown dungeon classification meant the danger skyrocketed past the moon, regardless of how many big shots were supposedly guarding his back. His eyes locked onto the crimson hazard marker on the parchment, a chilling thought blooming that tenfold earnings were essentially a down payment on his coffin. He wondered if the sheer peril of an unlabeled dungeon could ever justify such a payout. A sudden flashback of the brutal orc brawl assaulted him, recalling how intimately he had brushed shoulders with the Grim Reaper. That whole escapade had left him more mentally fried than a dragon's breath omelet, making this new choice feel like lifting a mountain. His gaze fell upon the signed document, his hand quivering like a leaf in a hurricane. That alluring promise of easy financial security was siren song, even if it meant waltzing into a den of doom with a red carpet rolled out just for him. Suddenly, he recalled that strange interview with the notorious Dark Lord, who, surprisingly, offered some sound career advice. The big boss had declared that if you craved a rapid ascent in rank, you absolutely had to plunge into dungeons far exceeding your present capabilities. The Dark Lord's chilling counsel reverberated in his skull, asserting that no other path existed. Monumental dangers always arrived hand in hand with immense prospects, and if he truly intended to climb the ranks, he simply couldn't continue cuddling himself in those painful, pathetic E-rank pits. With a gaze so resolute it could crack granite, he snatched the document. He declared he was in, fully committing himself to what promised to be a spectacularly perilous undertaking. The manager instantly transformed into a giddy child, practically bellowing with joy as he informed Dunham that grand adventure kicked off in 7 days. He instructed him to be punctual at Parju Station, and just like that, the pact was irrevocably cemented. There he was, Dunham himself, inscribing his name onto the mercenary hiring agreement, his pen rasping a dramatic prelude against the parchment. This was a precise instant his existence would either irrevocably pivot or simply conclude. He sauntered off, clutching his duplicate of the deal, informing the manager he'd be taking a glorious week of preparation. Outwardly, he appeared as cool as a cucumber, but anyone could tell his heart was performing a furious drum solo. The manager, ever so generously, offered to buy him a celebratory dinner as gratitude, and Donhun, with a twinkle in his eye, playfully requested a double portion. It was a brief, precious bubble of humor before the inevitable, crushing horror of that unclassified dungeon descended upon them all. The formidable contract rested innocently on the tabletop, a stark, incompetent memento of the ultimate gamble he had just accepted. This parchment was his golden pass, his one-way trip to the hallowed, high-stakes arenas of true power. 7 days later, his skeletal squad was positively radiating, glowing with such fierce energy they looked ready to host a rave. Their ancient bones were practically vibrating, a tangible symphony of pure, concentrated necromantic might. Dunham returned to his familiar practice arena, observing that, in stark contrast to his previous efforts, his current abilities were orbiting a whole new dimension. He could palpably sense the surge in strength, fueling him with a newfound, much-needed swagger. He stood surveying his spectral creations, his own imposing shadow stretching out like a second, even larger monster behind them. He mused that his bony companions would perpetually upgrade, suddenly grasping that his true capabilities were utterly boundless. With a decisive gesture, he barked orders at Bone 1 through Bone 3 to advance, indicating the practice mannequins. He was now operating with the calm authority of a seasoned tactical commander, a far cry from his previous, panting self. He rested against his staff, scrutinizing his bone boys with an intensely discerning gaze. He absolutely had to rigorously assess the fresh capabilities of his shiny D-rank skeletons before he could even dream of entrusting his precious life to them in that notorious Peju dungeon. Bone 1 shot forth like a skeletal missile, utterly atomizing a poor wooden dummy with a single swing of its massive blade. The sheer force was jaw-dropping, clearly demonstrating its power had surged beyond all reasonable calculation. Bone 2 then executed a follow-up, its spear thrusting effortlessly through yet another unsuspecting dummy. The pinpoint accuracy and lightning-fast speed were so dramatically improved, they were frankly unsettling compared to just 7 days prior. Bone 3, the designated marksman of the group, unleashed an arrow from its spectral bow. The projectile zipped through the air with such incredible velocity, it appeared as nothing more than a streaking white phantom across the training grounds. The impact of the arrow was so profoundly violent it triggered a colossal eruption of timber shards. Dunham stood there, utterly gobsmacked, realizing that despite their official D-rank designation, these bone boys were clearly punching well above their weight, mimicking formidable C-rank summons. Next, Bone 5, the resident spellslinger, stepped forward and conjured a towering inferno that utterly swallowed another practice mannequin. The blistering heat and blinding radiance were undeniable proof his skeletal squad now packed enough enchanted punch to toast the small village. Dunham surveyed the utterly incinerated wreckage of his training field, a sudden, inconvenient truth dawning on him. Those flimsy wooden scarecrows were now completely useless. He had quite literally, and spectacularly, surpassed his own exercise gear. A delightful, miniature Dunham appeared on screen, weaving tiny anime tears over his bleeded coin purse, as he comprehended the immense fortune he'd now have to lavish on superior training apparatus. Success, while wonderful, clearly came with a terrifyingly steep price tag. One of his skeletons struck a dramatic, sword-wielding pose, radiating an undeniable aura of sheer coolness. Dunham mused it was fantastic he had leveled up so significantly, swelling with genuine paternal pride for his terrifying, yet loyal, bone brethren. However, as he sauntered off, a sobering truth smacked him harder than a goblin's club. There remained one glaring, monumental issue. Himself. He might command an army of formidable phantoms, but he was still as delicate as a porcelain teacup. He pictured a dreadful scenario where some cunning beast utterly bypassed his bony guardians, making a beeline directly for his unprotected wingtip. He was, after all, the brilliant mastermind of this whole macabre show, and if he dropped, the entire performance would tragically fold. Additionally, he spots a bizarre twist where his bone buddies are gaining consciousness. Once mere lifeless dolls, they now possess distinct mannerisms and noisy chatter. Out of nowhere, the guy freezes in place with a baffled expression because some wild shenanigans are unfolding directly before his eyes. A specific pile of ribs is just loitering, cocking its cranium as if contemplating deep life questions, which is quite impressive for a being devoid of meat. That violet rocket up the stick starts radiating a vivid, rhythmic shimmer, signaling a fresh disaster that leaves the dark mage totally clueless. Poor Donhun enters full crisis mode as swirling grape-flavored marna surrounds him. He screams in confusion, terrified that his spells are finally quitting the day jobs. A glowing whirlwind wraps around him while he white-knuckles his cane, trapped inside a mystical event that definitely was not in his job description. The Skullman glares back and gives a slow nod, radiating pure disappointment, and our hero worries a bony lad is scanning his brain secrets. A colossal boom echoes as a chunky object greets the floor hard nearby, essentially turning the workout routine into a total circus act. He peeks at the Rattleman with escalating bewilderment, wearing the face of a guy who just realized he left the oven on. Mr. Bones gazes into his soul with glowing sapphire sockets, clearly signaling he has a plan, or perhaps he is just itching for a fistfight. That bag of calcium directs a calcified digit toward the practice targets, basically demanding that everyone witness the upcoming miracle of bone jutsu. Our main man stands there looking like a puzzled toddler, realizing his undead workers are actually freelancing thinkers now, which complicates the whole employee contract. Re-entering the salt mines, he verifies his upgraded dream team, including one guardian absorbing a massive wallop from another brawler to see if the plank breaks. Moving to target practice, the skeletal lad remains unbothered as pointy sticks ricochet away, appearing as a mobile fortress, and our protagonist loves his sturdy vibe. Obnoxious sound effects fill the scene as impacts boom, proving that the defensive plate is functional, as it tanks heavy abuse without showing any signs of stress. The Bone Warrior elevates its protection like a seasoned veteran, behaving as a single unit army, allowing our clever strategist to brew up some sneaky war plans. Our protagonist observes with a smug smirk, praising the unbreakable wall, and enjoys the comfort of having bodyguards who actually do their chores effectively. The calcium crew maintains their brawl, generating frantic flashes as metal meets bone, which helps him realize he can skip buying fancy armor entirely. Opting for extra spice, he commands skeleton number 2 to cease hitting the wood and aims for his own face, seeking a high-stakes vulnerability check. However, he isn't playing the easy target, so he recruits Bone 5 to generate an atmospheric barrier, encasing the boss in a lavender safety bubble. That strike lands with a resonant metal noise, yet he stays unharmed inside the sorcery dome, proving his magic casting servant is valuable despite having no meat. He flashes a confident little smile, noting how decently things are going, having evolved from a fragile nerd into a multi-layered fortress within a single week. Screaming like a caffeinated motivational speaker, he urges them to hustle harder, fully aware that every agonizing second in the gym pays major dividends later. These bony boys move with grace and speed during their routine, showcasing a level of agility rarely witnessed in low-tier zombies who usually work into walls. Endless flashes and kinetic impact visuals flood the area as iron bands together, confirming that this high-octane regime is finally producing some juicy gains. Our man adopts the persona of a satisfied drill sergeant, admiring his well-synchronized minions, knowing his tedious micromanagement is what truly gives him the edge. Suddenly, a digital ding echoes alongside various translucent menus, revealing that his bone soldiers are gaining power, or force, and energy just from doing lunges. Staring wide-eyed, he understands the implications. His servants are actually hitting the gym and growing stronger independently, which is basically an unfair cheat code. He mumbles while staring blankly at the bright interfaces, having accidentally discovered a menu that lets him spy on each specific skeleton personal info card. The view zooms onto the first recruit details, displaying his job title as an enlightened blade wielder, complete with specialized power levels, making this whole management nightmare fun. Thinking about his skeletal buddies, he discovers he can stork their stats like a creepy gym coach, basically uncovering a treasure map for gains. Summoning holographic screens like a basement-dwelling overlord, seeing those juicy D-rank upgrades and growing numbers makes him feel like a total absolute unit. Noting the original trio of bones are beefier from more exercise, he confirms that sweat equity works for corpses, who grow stronger regardless of his level. Squeezing his hand in a victory pose, he realizes his past struggles weren't just a waste of life, finally getting a receipt for those years of pointless grinding. Mapping out a rigorous fitness routine for his bony pals, he transitions from a simple soul stealer to a certified personal trainer for the chronically deceased. A quiet view of the woods emerges as daylight fades, providing a deceptive moment of peace before he tackles the heavy lifting of his upcoming gig. Cutting to a fancy glass skyscraper under a sunny sky, this hub for elite monster mashers is light years away from his usual sketchy, crumbling headquarters. Strapping into his oversized luggage, Dunhan swaps his lazy Sunday sweatshirt for a fancy gray jacket that screams professional monster luggage handler. Posing with his stick and equipment like a legit pro, he might be playing bad boy today, but he has an entire legion hiding in his pants. Double-checking his snacks and bedroll one final time, he whispers to himself that his packing is top tier, attempting to stop his internal organs from vibrating. Glancing at the swarm of warriors, he reminds his brain that his only job is carrying stuff, planning to blend into the shadows and observe the celebrities. Marching toward the meeting spot with a drum kit in his chest, he understands that mystery tier dungeons are spicy, regardless of his recent push-ups. Some official is screaming for the cell swords to huddle up, delivering the classic follow orders or become fertilizer monologue that precedes every dangerous dungeon trip. The holding the portal reveals a nightmare scenario, featuring a spinning whirlpool of dark cosmic soup that appears to be a violent rep in the universe. Squinting makes the vibes even worse, as a cave entrance throbs with an evil energy that would make even the bravest hero want to stay home. His peers are clearly sweating through their armor, with one dude confessing his anxiety while another notes that this place looks like a total wipeout. That swirling violet glow is basically a larva lamp of doom, following the rule that darker shades mean a high chance of death, and this is pitch black. A few optimists boast that the blue build's presence guarantees safety, already fantasizing about drinking booze and eating spicy broth once the monster slaying is finished. Staring at the rift with a stony face, Dingoon scoffs at the idea of safety, knowing fancy lobers won't save your neck when the ceiling collapses. Spreading his molars with a look of extreme focus, he decides he isn't here for the happy hour snacks, but to live and level up. A spooky visual depicts a giant beastly claw emerging from a mountain of heads, representing the many portals where people vanish without even a goodbye. We see a creature perched on a pile of corpses, shining a light on the gruesome fatalities that the shiny hunter lifestyle conveniently ignores in their marketing. Tightening the straps of his luggage until his fingers turn ghostly pale, he feels the fear but refuses to retreat from the looming danger. Gambling his heartbeat on this dangerous play, his gaze blazes with dread as he pivots from being life's punching bag to holding the boxing gloves. While he pumps himself up, a lady in sleek combat gear strolls by, radiating a cool pro energy that makes every other hunter look like a toddler. Unexpectedly, she freezes and spins back toward him, shouting his name and leaving poor Junghoon looking like a deer cord in high-beam headlights. Glancing at the vacant structure behind him, he questions his own sanity and hearing, though being twitchy is pretty normal near a hellhole portal. Rotating his buddy, he finds her eyes locked onto his, possessing a piercing stare that seems to be scanning his internal organs and deepest secrets. Inspecting his physique, she deduces his power is easily at D rank or beyond, proving she has way better radar than the standard issue monster slayers around. Her gaze shifts to his waist where a lolly E rank tech hangs, instantly spotting the weird gap between his actual vibes and his pathetic official status. Dunhan's sweat glands went into overdrive as his eyes widened in horror, and he squeaked out a question about her identity in a voice that clearly indicated he was terrified. She completely ignored his stammered query, leaning in close to demand an explanation for why he was hiding his true power and applying as a porter in the blue guild. Dunhan's internal alarm bell screamed, realizing he was dealing with someone way above his pay grade, and he couldn't believe anyone had seen through his carefully constructed facade so easily. He clenched his jaw, thinking that his low-tier rank, be it D or E, shouldn't matter to A-grade hunters, as he was merely trying to keep his head down and stay out of trouble. She pointed out that his guilty facial expression only cemented her suspicions, her powerful presence starting to bear down on him, and she asked point-blank if he was a double agent from a competing guild. She cautioned him against underestimating Blue's information resources, her hand hovering near a weapon in preparation for a fight, making this officially the worst start to his day. we get a full shot of her, revealing a woman who was equally beautiful and absolutely terrifying, introducing her as Gi So-yeol, a legendary assassin and undeniably one of the most elite hunters on Earth. Donhan's jaw dropped as the realization of her identity finally clicked, causing his internal monologue to devolve into high-pitched screaming, while his face settled into a look of absolute, petrified shock. His eyes landed on the golden badge fastened to her belt, the mark reserved exclusively for S-rank hunters and above, confirming he was staring at a living, breathing myth of the hunter world. The text boxes validated her status as one of Career's 37 premier rankers, noting she was a true force of nature in combat, specializing in silent assassinations. As a soul sister of Blue Guild's master, she was essentially royalty in the hunter community, meaning crossing this woman was a terrible idea, roughly equivalent to poking a sleeping dragon. He began to tremble under her gaze, his brain turning into a bowl of scrambled eggs as he couldn't process that he was actually conversing with a ranker he had only fantasized about meeting. He stuttered out a frantic plea of misunderstanding, addressing her as Rankamam in a voice so pathetic it could make a puppy cry. Waving his hands like a drowning man, he insisted he was definitely not a spy, pointing out that no rival guild would ever rely on a low-grade hunter like himself for critical reconnaissance. She fixed him with a dark, heavy stare, a gaze so intense it seemed to suck all the air out of the room, leaving the tension hanging thick enough to slice through with a dull knife. Suddenly, she let out a small, surprising chuckle, trying to suppress her amusement behind her hand. Her face split into a wide grin as she threw up her hands playfully, her intimidating aura completely evaporating in a millisecond, followed by a quick apology. She confessed she was only playing a prank on him, clearly delighted by how much she had panicked, leaving Donhan completely flabbergasted and wondering if S-rankers truly had nothing better to do. Gi So-yeol stood there looking effortlessly cool while Donhan looked like he had just witnessed a spectral operation, struggling to comprehend why an elite S-rank hunter would dedicate time to tormenting a low-level player like him. The surrounding crowd noticed the bizarre interaction, muttering about why a high-level ranker was bothering a simple porter, while Donhan's mind was in high gear, desperately seeking a logical explanation for this sudden spotlight. You could almost hear the calculation running in his brain as beads of sweat formed on his brow, posing the central question to himself. Perhaps he wasn't as ordinary as he thought. He reflected on his intense training with his skeleton companions, speculating whether the major guilds had been observing him all along, because if an S-rank like So-yeol detected the development of his peculiar power, it would certainly clarify her reasoned interest. He instantly concluded that regardless of the exact reason, this was a golden opportunity dropped right from the sky. As a top-tier ranker noticing him was his express pass to escape the misery of E-rank existence. So-yeol gave a mischievous chuckle, asking if her unexpected approach had startled him, clearly taking pleasure in watching him squirm. She began to stroll off, nonchalantly apologizing for her behavior in passing, while Donhan panicked at being ignored, rapidly yelling for her to hold on a moment. She stopped and delivered a startling revelation, mentioning that even though he wore an E-rank badge, she could sense the power signature of a high-level D-ranker, calling it fascinating, which was basically high-level hunter jargon for "I'm watching you closely." Donhan was completely cornered, unable to formulate any kind of response, just freezing as the faint outlines of his skeletons appeared behind him, visually confirming that she was absolutely correct. His expression changed to one of stark terror as he grasped the true depth of her perceptive abilities, realizing he wasn't prepared for someone to read his secret stills like a cheat novel. He watched her radiate with a powerful blue aura, understanding that she had assessed his complete power level from a single, casual glance, confirming the truly frightening extent of S-rank sensory perception. The scene closed with her flashing a sharp, confident grin, showing she knew perfectly well that she held all the cards in this interaction. Yahello reveals her brother, the guild master, ordered her to recruit a porter for the latest trek, and she stumbled upon our boy by pure luck. She locks eyes with him, labeling his humble porter act as a total farce since his skills are clearly far too polished for that role. Leaning in with predatory grace, she challenges him to accept her offer, fully expecting him to bow before her well-practiced charm. She invites him to join the scout squad, admitting the risk is massive but insisting his hidden potential makes him the ideal candidate. Her gaze narrows as she bets on his composure during chaos, convinced he is masking a secret talent for surviving truly hellish situations. Donhan stammers in disbelief, while she just beams, radiating the smug confidence of someone who spots a hidden treasure a mile away. She closes the distance, ready to dangle a juicy carrot because every mercenary has a price and hers just happens to be cash. Posing with swagger, she vows to double his payout, basically slapping a mountain of gold coins onto the table to win him over. Donhan feels his brain melting, caught between a legend and a massive paycheck, an offer so sweet it would be mental to refuse. Abandoning all caution, he throws his hand up and bellows his acceptance, diving headfirst into this perilous, high-stakes adventure. He feels invigorated, knowing this chance to level up alongside an elite squad is the ultimate shortcut to joining the big leagues. We shift to a bleak, gritty panel detailing dungeon ranking logic, serving as a cold splash of reality regarding his upcoming mission. Narrators explain how rankings range from E to S, noting that dungeons are as temperamental as they are deadly, often turning lethal overnight. A montage of beasts flashes by, from petty goblins to massive minotaurs, proving that every dungeon entry is basically a high-stakes gamble. The weary hunter named White Shadow appears, illustrating that one never truly knows a dungeon's lethality until they are fighting for air. The pro tip is simple, watch the portal's hue because deeper colors suggest a stronger craving to turn your insides into appetizers. Dark magical swirls serve as a reminder that official guild guidelines are mere suggestions that these unpredictable rifts rarely choose to follow. If a top-tier team wipes out, the dungeon rank spikes, creating a brutal trial by fire that sadly demands a heavy body count. We spot a distant, pine-sized portal, representing an unranked mystery zone that functions as the ultimate chaotic wildcard for any scout. A mincing red S-rank icon pulses on screen, signifying the apocalyptic nightmare scenario that haunts the dreams of every scout team. The bleak image of fallen warriors reminds us that scouting missions act like a meat grinder for anyone lacking the proper preparation. Donhan peers into the swirling abyss of the unranked gate, which resembles a grand entrance leading directly into a localized hell. He reaches for the energy, aware that scouts act as expendable bait, essentially functioning as the canary in this lethal dungeon mine. He inhales deeply, sensing the dungeon aura early, and feels ready to gamble his life against the strange secrets hiding inside here. A system alert chimes as he leaps into the purple vortex, marking the moment his curiosity officially lands him in deep trouble. He lands in a frigid, dripping cabin where the silence is heavy and the atmosphere screams that something nasty lives here. Scanning the walls, he appreciates the glowing pearls providing light, as they are the only things preventing total, suffocating pitch darkness. Two allies are already squabbling, one eyeing the loot while the other reminds him that pilfering dungeon property is a fast track to death. Yul stretches nonchalantly, unfazed by the creepy cabin because for an S-rank powerhouse, this is just a mundane day at work. The entire squad consists of rank monsters, making our poor E-rank protagonists stick out like a sore thumb in this elite lineup. So Yul turns into an ice queen, ordering everyone to keep their eyes peeled since silence in a weird dungeon usually spells bad news. She begins barking commands, tasking two fellow adventurers with pathfinding duties beside her, as they attempt to create a mental map. Her gaze shifts toward an old pro wearing protective gear, known as elite scout named Khan, who specializes in finding exits. She instructs him to scout a way out, while making sure that human luggage doesn't get devoured by cave dwellers. Dunhoon feels slightly relieved to have a personal bodyguard, asking about his confidence levels, to which the guy just gives a knowing smirk. The veteran claims his reputation would be garbage if he let some quiet ruck scare him away from his chosen path. He carries a vibe of pure veteran confidence, and his stat menu confirms he has the legendary guide trait from the system itself, with total authority. So Yul takes command of the group, yelling for everyone to shift into gear, as her charisma floods the entire hall. The scout wonders if he is shaking in his boots, and poor Dunhoon confesses he is terrified, which is better than lying. The old-timer's face suddenly becomes very grim, as he advises the lad to keep that sense of pure panic handy. That is hardly the motivational speech Dunhoon craved, leaving him scratching his head while his companion stares forward into the dark gloom. The experienced explorer explains that the vibes in this corridor are completely cursed. Trust his gut, since it never misses a danger signal. He mentions that the high-tier boss person warned them for a reason, suggesting some invisible threat is currently playing hide and seek. He clarifies that when a cave is this quiet and simple, it usually functions like a giant mousetrap, just waiting for the cheese. He claims that in such tiny quarters, one ought to feel some rumbling, provided there were any living creatures actually breathing down there. The total lack of noise is eerie, so he assumes some complex mechanism or puzzle is at play, as Dunhoon admires the analysis. However, the veteran dismisses the praise as merely years of not dying, though he admits the specific situation looks uniquely creepy. He suggests Dunhoon glue himself to his shadow, and focus entirely on locating a door, because the mission takes top priority here. They slid away from the pack like teenagers in a horror flick, which feels bizarre, yet they have a specific goal to reach. We witness their boots clanking against the floor, while they descend further into the pitch-black abyss of the silent mountain tunnels. Dunhoon is basically a human fountain of sweat, glancing everywhere, unable to ignore the suspicion that a monster is sizing him up. The guide dabs his forehead, noticing the suspicious lack of classic hurdles, concluding that the further they travel, the weirder things get. Turning his head, he asks if gravity feels stronger, because the local atmosphere is starting to weigh a ton on their shoulders. Their skin starts crawling with massive jitters, and the pro confesses even he is baffled, which certainly boosts zero morale at all. He looks genuinely spooked, which is a massive red flag, especially since he is the designated adult who usually knows the route. Dunhoon senses his crushing weight surpasses the aura of elite warriors, realizing that whatever lives here must be a literal nightmare fuel. Without warning, a swirl of ink-colored shadow manifests behind their backs, radiating a vibe of pure murder that practically screams your time is up. The Pathfinder screams for skeletons, telling Dunhoon to summon his bony buddies, because they desperately need some protection right this instant, gripping his wooden staff until his fingers turn ghostly pale. Dunhoon stands shivering, yet he readies himself to brawl with fate. Not wanting to end up as a snack, Dunhoon immediately spawns his full quintet of bony warriors, who emerge from purple smoke ready for war. Our chap surveys his dwindling power reserves, noting he's already used up half his juice, leaving him with a mere 50%. He's got that laser focus, realizing every single action needs to be a winner from this point on. Kang San-wook, our resident guide, gives the rattling bones a discerning stare, sounding rather unimpressed. He inquires if Dunhoon has anything more sophisticated than basic skeletons, which is a tad cheeky considering they're his only muscle right now. The guide starts to freak out, yelping that there's no such thing as a safe haven here. Dunhoon and the Dang are standing by, but you can practically see the seasoned pro's primal instinct screaming, "Evacuate!" A sharp groan escapes the guide as he's flattened by an unexpected surge of intense pressure. His eyes are bugged out in sheer astonishment, looking as if a spectral visu just did a drive-by through his very essence. The poor chap is practically doing the limbo of pain, clutching his chest while Dunhoon scurries to offer assistance. He calls out to the guide, realizing the seasoned expert is the first to wilt under the dungeon's oppressive atmosphere. The guide manages to wheeze out that they just need to push a little further towards an open zone. He's desperately trying to usher them to a spot where they can actually put up a decent brawl. He shrieks that he hasn't a clue what's brewing, but he senses multiple formidable entities lurking just around the corner. Talk about a truly unpleasant neighborhood. They bolt into the murky blue mist that wraps around them like a bad premonition. The guy couldn't care less if it's the frontline troops or some nasty critters. They just need to hustle. Suddenly, colossal blue ripples of raw energy crash into the corridor. It's a bona fide force field aiming to flatten the whole cabin. No joke, Dunhoon bears the brunt of the impact, his entire frame going numb as the crushing weight intensifies. He can't even crack an eyelid or open his mouth, feeling like the entire planet has parked itself on his chest. A muffled sound of agony escapes him as he's forced onto his knees, his footwork grunting against the chilly stone floor. This isn't just some politrick magic. It's pure, unadulterated supremacy. Skeleton 5 makes a valiant attempt to be the hero, deploying its ace shield to cushion the relentless pressure. A swirl of purple energy erupts around them, a fragile beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. However, the sheer force proves too much, and the shield explodes into fragments with a sharp crack, sending Skeleton 5 flying backward. Danhan is left utterly exposed, moaning on the ground. Crimson droplets mist the floor as Danhan coughs, his face drained of color from the internal battering. He's never encountered anything this overwhelming. It's as if the dungeon itself is actively trying to pulverize him. He lifts his head with a desperate plea in his eyes, calling out to Skeleton 1 to maintain their ground. He's clutching his ribs, barely hanging onto consciousness. The relentless blue pressure continues to pound him, and he can't fathom how a mere ability could be obliterated the instant it's activated. Whatever's radiating this aura is operating on an entirely different cosmic plane of might. He glances ahead, spotting the guide already miles away, making a break for it. He wonders how the fellow maintains such speed under this onslaught, feeling utterly forsaken. Dunhan finds it a struggle just to draw a breath, questioning how a fresh-faced dungeon could be this heart-stoppingly terrifying, even for a seasoned warrior. This is definitely not the walk-in-the-park delivery gig he signed up for. He clenches his jaw, his features hardening with resolve as he decides survival is the sole objective now. Forget glory or gold. He's not planning on becoming a permanent resident of the state. He forces his weary limbs into motion, his boots making heavy thuds on the floor as he marches directly into the epicenter of the pressure. His pace is glacial, but he's certainly not yielding. He's gasping for air as if he just completed a grueling marathon. Yet, he and his skeletal companions are making headway. They are a small, resolute unit of bone and sheer willpower advancing through the azure haze. Abruptly, a message pops up from the system. He's arrived at a peculiar stage known as the bit of white-haired old man. Dunhan looks up, utterly baffled by the strangely poetic moniker. He mutters to himself about the current predicament, his gaze sweeping over the altered surroundings. The pressure seems to have subsided, and a new mission is beginning to crystallize. A ghostly status display materializes before him, confirming the enigmatic stage title. It feels more like a chapter from a novel than a climactic confrontation with a dungeon overlord. The system then elaborates on the backstory. The boss is so consumed by profound regret that frost has literally settled upon his hair. A colossal, radiant sigil adorns the floor, clearly marking the ultimate boss chamber. A final directive informs him to step inside the chamber and vanquish the elderly gentleman. He stands before an immense, antique wooden portal that appears as if it's been sealed for eons. Dunhan finally grasps that this grizzled figure is the dungeon's ultimate adversary. He draws a deep breath, pondering the nature of a creature that sports the appearance of an aged human. His eyes widen dramatically as he peers into the room, realizing something utterly astonishing. He lets out a sharp intake of breath. It's a human being, not a monstrous entity in the slightest. He and the guide happen upon a gathering of fellow adventurers slumped on the ground. One chap leaps up, looking as if he's just witnessed his own personal rescuer. He exclaims that at long last, capable hunters have shown up. The survivor is practically weeping tears of pure relief, inquiring if they're the promised reinforcements. He appears thoroughly worn down, which is rather curious given his rather high-end attire. The escort spots the purple insignia on the survivors and his jaw hits the floor, realizing these A-list legends are somehow shattered beyond repair. These elite fighters are pathetically begging a lowly porter for rescue, proving even top-tier hunters cower when the bus turns up the heat. One wreck is practically gargling air while demanding a drink, looking like he just finished a miserable decade in a cursed basement. The guide dishes out rations while judging these cowards for abandoning the squad to save their own precious hides from the trouble. Dunhan watches them shovel food with mixed emotions, knowing clearly that rank means nothing once your guts have hit the dungeon floor. He tosses over some dry snacks with a blank stare, observing the messy consequences when the supposedly unstoppable professionals completely fall apart. The survivor chugs water like he found a hidden oasis, dribbling all over himself while clearly losing his mind from the trauma. It is a sad display seeing these elite warriors slumped like refugees, while Dunhan and the guide remain the only ones holding it together. Dunhan muses that he might have ended up just as pathetic if he had not recruited his bony pals to keep him company. The guide tells the group to steady their breathing, desperately hoping to prevent a full-scale freakout from ruining the remaining peas. Dunhan steps up, demanding a play-by-play of the disaster so he can gather intel before taking on that ominous chamber entrance. A guy in a crisp white suit stands up to narrate, his posture attempting composure despite his eyes leaking pure, unadulterated terror. He mentions his B-rank status failed to save him, describing this twisted location as a literal nightmare that ignores every standard dungeon rule. The veteran claims he has never seen such bizarre activity in his life, insisting this isn't just a hunt but some sick trial. A hysterical woman interrupts, shrieking that every single exit has vanished, leaving them completely stranded in this concrete death trap without hope. She moans that no matter which direction they sprint from the start, every hallway ends in the same soul-crushing path of defeat. It always loops back to the cursed gateway, implying the only way to escape this insanity is to conquer the final guardian. They describe a suffocating darkness that hunts you down, acting like a hungry shadow intent on swallowing any hope of ever leaving. The man looks like he's narrating his own obituary as he mutters that the bearded menace behind that door is inevitable. He claims the victory conditions are completely bonkers, leaving Dunhan and his partner wondering what kind of sadistic game this is. A blurry figure with long hair appears in the mist, and the survivor whispers that the guy is just way too cracked. An old man with a flowing beard stares down from the gloom, viewing these B-rank heroes as nothing more than helpless, crying toddlers. The survivor grabs the guide, praying for salvation from their supposed backup, showing just how desperate and delusional these broken hunters are. The guide feels incredibly weird as a veteran clings to his leg, terrified to admit he is only a mediocre B-rank player. Dunhan commands silence, urging everyone to pause and apply some actual brainpower to this mess before they all go completely insane. He drops the logical bomb, wondering why the boss hasn't slaughtered them yet if he's truly the unstoppable deity they claim. The survivor pauses, looking genuinely baffled as he realizes he has no idea why they are still breathing after all this time. He explains the weirdo just sits there in eerie silence, acting like a statue waiting for people to approach the main stage. Instead of just murdering everyone, the boss forces people through a bizarre test that sounds like a sadistic academic entrance exam. The man admits the trial details are a total mystery, but they all know the result is just endless, humiliating, and painful defeat. A hazy flashback reveals a shadowed leader looming over a groveling hunter, perfectly capturing a scene of total pathetic annihilation. The boss clicks his tongue in sheer annoyance, whining that this guy lacks the right spark, as he hunts for a specific talent that nobody possesses. He then tosses them out like subby garbage, sending a Hana flying through the air like a discarded toy in a state of absolute ruin. Dunhan stands lost in deep contemplation while blaring at the boss door, shocked that a dungeon entity would actually skip the murder part. He eyes the looming blue portal with nervous curiosity, wondering what kind of weird trial awaits, secretly hoping this challenges his big break. The shivering survivor scratches his noggin, finally clocking that the supposed monster is just an old geezer who is still just a regular person. Dunhan and the guide are totally blindsided, as this is the first time a dungeon boss has been revealed as a basic biological human. Dunhan stares in disbelief, realizing a human boss explains why he acts like a picky recruiter instead of a hungry beast, which makes things wild. The guide gestures toward the giant blue gateway, insisting they have no choice but to barge inside if they want to escape this death trap. Dunhan observes the guide pondering the fate, silently questioning if he should actually trust this specialist hunter in such a bizarre, high-stakes locale. Our guy looks visibly rattled, sweating buckets while he tries to process his next tactical move beneath the crushing pressure of the current situation. So-Yol arrives with her fancy A-rank squad, demanding to know why the group is loitering in the hallway like a bunch of bored tourists. So-Yol pauses to consider their options, ultimately deciding it is high time they stormed the boss room to confront whatever is lurking inside. She quickly evaluates the vibes, sensing the survivors are genuine folks rather than fake illusions, which confirms the threat ahead is quite lethal. With a sharp glint in her eye, she remarks that even though the boss radiates a terrifying aura, they cannot just stand around doing nothing. The A-rank survivors sniffle with relief, clearly convinced that their salvation is guaranteed now that an elite S-rank legend has finally stepped up. So-Yol instantly assumes charge, barking orders for the survivors to sit tight while the professionals handle the heavy lifting of the combat. Dunhan watches them depart, clearly feeling the massive chasm in ability that separates a typical A-rank hunter from a true S-tier powerhouse. He remains captivated by So-Yol, recalling she is not just another S-rank, but a literal titan sitting in the top 1,000 warriors worldwide. So-Yol secures her hair into a tight ponytail, fully embracing her battle persona while signaling her teammates to prepare for a rough fight. The hinges groan in protest as he heaves the massive handle, finally swinging the ancient, heavy portals to the bus chamber wide open. The guild scouts vanish into the gloom with confident strides, leaving the rest of the gang behind in a thick, suffocating wall of silence. Dunhan hunkers down with his equipment near the threshold, staring at the floor as he waits for the inevitable triumph of the elite squad. Without warning, the thunderous crash reverberates through the heavy gate, causing Dunhan to leap into the air in pure, unadulterated panic. It is total chaos inside, as the A-rankers are flung around like rivals over a glowing arcane sigil, shrieking in absolute, unmitigated despair. Jaisal slams into the floor with a painful thud, her tactical gear already showing the ugly, ripped signs of her swift and embarrassing loss. She gasps for air while bleeding, completely crushed by the boss's overwhelming velocity and strength after barely a moment of actual combat. The heavy portal swings wide again as the entire team is rudely ejected back into the corridor right in front of the horrified crowd. Dunhan is utterly stunned, yelling out to ask what on earth transpired to see top-tier experts get flattened in such a laughable time frame. He checks his watch and realizes they lasted under 10 minutes, which is absolutely bonkers considering an S-ranker just got schooled so quickly. So-Yol grinds her teeth in pure annoyance, insulted that the boss didn't even bother to take her seriously. She suddenly glances upward and shouts for the porter, snapping a bewildered Dunhan out of his daze. Demanding a top-tier tonic from his pack, she seems ready to sprint back into battle despite her bruises. Dunhan stares at her as if she needs a doctor, given she just got obliterated yet craves another beating. He questions her sanity, but she ignores him, realizing the old man was merely treating her like a toy. Snatching the potion from his grip, her eyes ignite with a fiery intent to face the boss again. Bruised yet stubborn, she swears she will earn the geezer's approval even if it takes 100 attempts. Dunhan glances at the door, guessing the boss might be some ancient sage desperately scouting for a successor. He pictures the geezer sulking inside, bitter that nobody in this modern age possesses even a shred of talent. Downing the flask in a single go, So-Yol announces she is diving right back into that meat grinder. She sprints toward the chamber while Dunhan cries for her to stop, realizing she is blinded by warrior vanity. Thus commenced So-Yol's miserable streak of defeat and misery as she fruitlessly attempted to clear the trial. Bam! She gets ejected with a shriek, her frame rebounding off the floor's glowing circle like a rubber ball. Attempt after attempt ends in flight, with the boss playing pinball using her body as if it were nothing. She slams into the ground with a dull thud, appearing utterly finished yet stubbornly refusing to call it quits. Blubbering with blood-smeared cheeks, she wails in pure confusion at her inability to overcome this seemingly impossible hurdle. The boss emerges again, demonstrating that he masters not just the sword but a glowing blue spear technique too. Screaming, she launches herself into the fray once more, leaving Dunhan to merely observe the chaos from afar. Another cry pieces the air, leaving Dunhan speechless as he contemplates her staggering capacity for absorbing physical abuse. A full day vanishes, and the dungeon remains filled with the continuous, pathetic wails of the battered S-ranker. Dunhan looks as if he aged a decade just by enduring the ordeal of So-Yol getting absolutely wrecked repeatedly. 4 days drag on, and the vicious cycle persists, with the corridor echoing only with agony and frustration. So-Yol is a hollow wreck, her expression a mix of sheer fury and fatigue as she pursues her goal. Stunned that the geezer also wields sorcery, she bellows in rage at the creator of this literal hellish maze. Dunhan shakes his head, fearing that even the premier members of the Blue Guild would crumble under this pressure. He suspects that a full party of 5 elite rankers might still fail to fell this legendary old man. So-Yol slumps down, finally conceding that the gulf in skill between her and the boss is simply insurmountable. Yet her drive remains unshaken, as she pledges to keep fighting until her last breath like a true professional. Dunhan watches in total wonder, feeling both motivated and terrified by the sheer intensity of a top-tier ranker. However, observing his gear, he knows that while she persists, the other trapped survivors are likely slowly fading away. Gazing upon the pathetic pile of famished, gloomy warriors who dropped their swords and chose to rot, he sighs. His inner cattle screams as he finally accepts that no magical fairy is dropping from the sky to save his hide. squeezing that creepy bone stick until his knuckles turn white. He prepares to flip his entire miserable existence upside down. It hits him that every loser in this lobby managed to work through that portal and survive the return trip. The leader shoots him aboard staff, likely assuming he will just remain a glorified backpack mule for the rest of eternity. Not this time, he whispers mentally, straightening his spine while the damp Prada lamps highlight his sudden burst of confidence. Bypassing the arrogant squad dressed in sapphire, the porter targets that sinister portal while his weighted boots thud across the rocky ground. Glancing up from the dirt, So-yeol wonders if the luggage boy has finally lost his marbles or just loves danger. Ding-hoon stares right back and announces his solo suicide mission, causing the entire crowd to suddenly forget how to breathe. Berjor hits the floor, stunned that a bottom-tier bag carrier would actually attempt such a reckless stunt. The elite snubs erupt in giggles, mocking the kid for entering a meat grinder that turns legendary heroes into strawberry jam. The jerk cheers, wondering if a rookie ghost summoner expects his brittle calcium buddies to actually win a fight. The jerk snarls that he must keep hauling backs, treating our main character like a disgusting stain on the carpet. Getting uncomfortably close, he snarls that a suitcase with legs shouldn't pretend to be a main character in this story. His fingers twitch toward his blade, prepared to slap the porta back into reality before things get even more ridiculous. Despite the beads of moisture on his brow, Dunhan ignores the trash torque and keeps his gaze fixed on the prize. So-yeol orders a halt, her sharp tone slicing through the awkward vibe as she slowly rises to her feet. Checking his face with a blank stare, she questions if he lacks faith in her power, making the mood extremely heavy. She keeps the pressure high, demanding to know if he thinks she is incompetent while the fancy warriors watch the lowly peasant defy orders, making the atmosphere thick enough to cut with a spoon. Dismissing her worry with a quick wave, he adopts a focused expression that suggests he actually has a plan beyond just running into a wood chipper for fun. So-yeol mentions that the fine print forbids the bad boy from speaking, but Dunhan stands tall, admitting he knows the legal nonsense and intends to break it anyway. Fingers hover above the weapon, avoiding an actual strike but signaling that she will certainly stab someone should the scenario become increasingly bizarre. Softening her stance, she inquires about his sudden desire to embrace certain doom, honestly wondering what kind of crazy thoughts are rattling around inside his skull. Approaching the portal, he explains the boss mentioned a search for talent, implying the grumpy ghost is looking for more than just a punching bag to beat up. Our hero theorizes that the ancient ghost feels bitter because he never discovered an apprentice to inherit his secret techniques, while the chattery figure looks incredibly sad and isolated. He notes that natural ability represents a mere first draft, not a complete book, emphasizing that his current weakness is less important than his future capacity for greatness. So-yeol is blown away, questioning if he honestly plans to turn the terrifying monster into a tutor rather than just smacking it until it dies. Nodding like a boss, he suggests that getting an internship might be the secret way to win, showing he has actual brains while everyone else just hits the wall. A shiny box of secret loot symbolizes those weird non-violent solutions that most meathead warriors are too distracted by their own muscles to even notice or comprehend. Chewing on the fancy term while looking like a tired mess, she suspects her habit of hitting things real hard is exactly why she keeps losing. Her ego makes a comeback as she wonders if he thinks he is better than her, which is a crazy thing to say to an elite warrior. Dupchin, the ginger menace, burns a hole through Dunham with his eyes while the room turns chilly, pitting that a weakling is acting like a genius. Dunham begins doing the frantic coward dance, shaking his hands and denying everything, since he enjoys having a face and avoids fighting the local badass. So-yeol invades his personal space like a hungry predator, mentioning that his mouth says negative things but his eyes are screaming something else. She squints at him while he starts leaking enough sweat to fill a swimming pool, realizing that she has decoded his secret manual completely. Dunham confesses that everyone has tasted the spicy pain of combat while he sits around feeling like a lonely benchwarmer, and he is done being the only audience member for this disaster. So-yeol stares deep into his soul, her face relaxing by about 1% as she realizes he might be a human instead of a cocky brat. Suddenly, a menacing grin spreads across her face, the exact look a cat gives to a mouse before things get very interesting and violent. She claims his real freak flag is flying and that he was sketchy from day one, having finally destroyed his disguise as a boring luggage carrier. Dunham stands there with a massive question mark over his head, totally baffled by her weird logic. She remarks that his hungry predator eyes prove he has been cooking up a secret plan, believing there is a hidden beast beneath his surface. She bluntly questions if he wants the shiny loot or is just praying for a miracle during the run, trying to find his hidden agenda. Dunham gets a grim look while his eyes go dark, wondering if this woman is a top-tier fighter or just a psychic witch. He is stunned by her ability to scan his face, since his attempted stone face is apparently as transparent as a clean window. So-yeol spins around and gives him the green light, noting that she needs a nap because her last rounds left her feeling like trash. She mentions that torque is cheap since he will likely crash and burn like a failure, giving him a permit wrapped in total insults. Dunham is stunned, asking if she is actually serious, since he never expected her to fold like a cheap lawn chair. She cautions that he has a single shot, because the snacks are gone and they must finish this soon unless they want to eat dirt. Dunham bows like a proper gentleman, showing gratitude for the chance, knowing he has exactly one attempt to be a hero and save lives. He inhales deeply and readies his body, turning toward the massive glowing entrance with an expression of pure focus. His heavy shoes bang against the rock while he strolls toward destiny, and you can almost imagine the epic heavy metal music starting up. He extends his arm and grabs the enormous door Naka, this tiny hand looking like a toothpick compared to the massive chunk of iron. A magic window appears, asking if he wants to enter the death trap, while he pauses and lets his shadow crawl on the ground. The entrance grounds open with a noisy scream, showing a dark shape standing in the azure glow, meaning the game of survival is finally on. The notification names the floor as a grumpy old man of grudges, explaining that his sadness is so freezing that his hair is covered in ice. The moment he enters, he makes a pain noise because the air feels like a giant is sitting on his chest, making gravity his enemy. Dense indigo fog dances around the chamber, giving it the vibe of a frozen cemetery filled with spooky, old energy that could kill someone. He stands solo in the middle of the arena, peering like a small bug in a huge box, waiting for the big bad guy to attack. Out of nowhere, a blast of power smashes him, and he yells while the sapphire light glues his body to the cold, hard floor. The Grand Bar of Doom works out of the haze, mucking him and asking if he's just another loser, sounding like a very grumpy waiter. His bony, ghastly poor creeps toward Dunhan, eager to toss the poor kid out just like those other hunters he already trashed. Azure beams pierce through his crown as the geezer stares down, channeling his inner Grim Reaper while looking totally bored by the tiny mortal. Teeth gnashing, Dunhan battles a heavy burden that threatens to turn his skeleton into a pile of crunchy, broken toothpicks. Out of nowhere, a shiny pop-up flashes before him, declaring he just unlocked a secret achievement meant only for edgy, hexed bone callers. He stares in utter disbelief as he witnesses a rare event that literally 0 people in this dungeon crawl have ever spotted before. A fresh alert chimes with high fives, revealing a sneaky talent he just snagged called mingling with dead folks' brains. Luck is finally on his side as he wonders if this top-tier ability is a prank, since he just won big during a deadly stroll. The interface confirms his brain projection power is live, sending amber sparkles dancing around to shove away that moody sapphire fog. Dunhan gets dizzy as his surroundings melt, leaving the old man stuck like a statue while the magic hijacks the physical space. The text claims he's summoning recollections from a hexed zombie master of every combat style, and he grumbles while getting yanked across the cosmic fabric. Shielding his face, he gets swallowed by a swirling blizzard of neon light that teleports him to a completely different zip code. He touches down in a giant, frozen desert looking lost, because the creepy cave vanished and left behind a never-ending holiday card. Far off, a youthful version of the geezer mopes about his problems, whining that nobody's cool enough to take his job. The veteran grumbles about being a pro just to quit, looking mighty but also like he needs a long nap from his own brilliance. The thick snowstorm bests by, highlighting how lonely it is at the top where he has been chilling for way too many decades. Dunhan twirls in circles, wondering if he accidentally took a wrong turn into Narnia or some other chilly dimension, gaping at the giant. As he peeks, he ponders if the game code actually hides entire secret realms inside these monster-filled pits. Focusing on his startled face, the biting breeze and shivers prove this flashback is way more vivid than a standard Netflix show. Grabbing his skull, a migraine hits as he starts downloading the old guy's feelings and past traumas right into his own mental hard drive. The man's words resonate, mentioning his wild journey, while his back is turned to us as he surveys his frigid empire. The clip reel features a fighter juggling blades and bows, proving he was the ultimate multitasker who could heal or stab with equal ease. Holding up 2 fingers, the master claims that if you wiggle your mana right, every fighting style just becomes one giant pile of ultimate human mastery. He survived forever by breaking rules, yet wrinkles still court him because magic can pay for nukes but not for an anti-aging cream subscription. Trudging through the frost, Dunhan feels the geezer's joints ache, noticing that even a simple drink of water feels like chugging spicy, painful battery acid. The old dino looks wobbly, confessing that getting old is a total nightmare because he's parched but his body rejects every single sip. Squeezing his wrinkly hand, he snarls that death can wait, because his inner fire is still way pointier than any of his rusty swords. The scene closes on a crimson glare, showing a man full of bitter regret who refuses to kick the bucket until he finally finds that one specific thing. Within the dream, his gaze is packed with old sadness as he reaches for nothing, crying over being a gut-tier player with no students to invite. He yells at the storm that his existence is a joke, having grinded his levels to max just to realize he has 0 worthy apprentices to inherit his loot. Glaring at the clouds, he hates how every rookie's a disappointment, wondering if his hope for a perfect student was just a silly, selfish fantasy. Dunhan lingers within that frigid memory, watching the formidable warrior crumble into a heap of pathetic misery, his monumental ego finally shattering under the weight of sheer, unadulterated loneliness. We see the elder appearing minuscule against the vast tundra, begging the heavens for mercy while the howling wind mucks his empty palms and his impending, unceremonious demise. A single tear hits the dirt, turning into a sad little ice cube, proving that even the legendary master of all arts is just a drama queen terrified of being forgotten. That frozen droplet hits the ground, signaling his desperation to trade his soul to the dungeon system just to secure a legacy that will outlast his dusty, rotting bones. He presses his callous mitts into the frost, making a sacred pact with the universe because he refuses to let his century of hard-earned skills vanish into thin air. He demands his full essence be preserved, his body failing like a rusty engine, yet he hunts for a shiny new vessel to inherit his glorious, self-important work. Suddenly, the golden system alert shatters the illusion, snapping Dunhan back to reality with a sharp gasp as the wintry wonderland dissolves into digital static. Back in the gloomy bus room, the blue mist swirls around his ankles, offering a stark contrast that makes his previous snowy excursion feel like a fever dream. Dunhan stands there panting like a golden retriever in July, his mind still muddled by the elder's tragic, albeit slightly pathetic, work down memory lane. He gazes upward to find the actual bus staring him down, transforming the transition from a sad, crying retiree into a homicidal maniac who clearly needs a hug. A fresh system ping rings out, announcing that the master of all arts is watching him like a hawk, piling on enough pressure to flatten a lead pipe. Clutching his aching chest while the dungeon aura plays scorched with his lungs, Dunhan realizes he is no longer the same amateur who stumbled in here minutes ago. Despite the intense agony, a cunning grin creeps across his mug because he has spotted the bus's Achilles heel and finally smells a recipe for victory. Hope burns in his eyes as he realizes the old man is essentially an attention-starved diva who just needs someone to validate his entire exhausting existence. The elder booms across the chamber, acknowledging that the kid just peeked into his private trauma and labeling him as a rather interesting specimen. A status update confirms the master is officially intrigued, meaning our protagonist just accidentally boosted his charisma stat while staring down a literal death trap. Dunhan manages to wheeze out a response while shivering on the floor, keeping his cool while his brain performs high-speed gymnastics to avoid imminent incineration. He knows that if this legendary geezer is hunting an apprentice, this is a gaming equivalent of finding a winning lottery ticket buried inside a trash can. The flash of the master handling every weapon imaginable reminds us that he was a one-man wrecking crew way before necromancy became a fashion trend. He hauled his carcass upright with grit in his eyes, internally shouting that he will be the one to claim this treasure rather than letting it slip away. The elder isn't buying it yet, waving a dismissive hand as if Dunhan is just another mildly entertaining pebble stuck in his speckle shoe. A massive gust of force slams into Dunhan, proving that the boss is losing his patience with the loudmouth kid daring to occupy his personal bubble. Dunhan yells that the old man is a fool, warning that if he keeps up this grubby hermit routine, he will stay a miserable ghost forever. He calls the boss out for being a prideful, stubborn spectre, basically roasting an S-rank dungeon master to his face with the confidence of a man with nothing to lose. The elder's visage hardens into a mask of pure glacial rage, clearly offended that some random brat is lecturing a living legend on his life choices. Blue energy crackles around his fingertips like a malfunctioning toaster as he threatens to dismantle the boy, clearly aiming to stop this conversation with extreme prejudice. Dunhan waves his hands like a frantic signalement, begging the boss to pour the violence before he gets turned into a fine, blowing mist. He showers the elder with praise for mastering every art form, buttering him up with facts to distract him from the fact that he is currently failing at life. The elder pours because his ego is just greedy enough to enjoy the flattery, admitting that perhaps the world is vast enough to hide a fellow genius. Dunhan gestures wildly toward the exit while dropping the name of D-Soul, asking if the boss remembers that powerhouse woman who is basically the modern world's heavyweight champ. The old man looks shell-shocked because he remembers Soil as a useless weakling, and seeing her ranked so high now just makes him lose all faith in humanity. Dunhan observes the elder with a sly grin, pleased that his bait was swallowed whole, as he successfully pushed the boss into a deep pit of despair. Bellowing that it is impossible, the elder flays with horror, accusing Dunhan of lying since he cannot fathom such a mediocre person reaching the top rank. Dunhan steps up boldly, staring right into his eyes while asking if he looks like a liar, betting his entire future on this single moment of honesty. Peering into Dunhan's gaze, the elder sees a terrifying lack of hesitation, realizing that the standard for human capability has truly plummeted into the abyss. The elder sighs at the cruel irony, his rage fading into defeat as he worries his legendary skills will die with him because the world is a dump. This is the big gamble, so Dunhan asks if the master would take him on since nobody else is good enough, offering his life as collateral. Startled by such nerve, the elder glares with glowing blue eyes, clearly feeling both confused and insulted by the suggestion that he should teach this guy. Dunhan demands that the elder impart his wisdom, his voice roar with a starving ambition to become the perfect vessel for such a legendary master. Mocking him as a shameless brat, the elder retorts that he would rather train a pile of garbage than someone with such pathetic talent, which really stings. Stopping the rant, Dunhan tells him to listen because he has a secret trump card, and it is definitely not a request for a personal tutorial. He toggles his status window to check his energy levels, muttering that systems are green for the most important summoning ritual of his entire career. A wave of violet mana erupts as he calls his skeleton squad, flooding the chamber with dark, bone-chilling energy as his loyal troops manifest. Gesturing to the rattling soldiers, he asks if the elder sees a hidden potential, clarifying that his undead army is a real candidate for training. Watching his skeletons with fatherly pride, he suggests these immortal beings are the perfect students that any master would crave for a century. His logic is simple, for if these undead warriors have infinite room to grow, they represent the ultimate legacy for a master to cultivate. Since each unit handles tanking or archery, he argues that teaching them as a group is far more efficient than tutoring a single clumsy human. Patting a skeleton on the shoulder, he promises the elder that his legacy will endure through these minions, keeping his martial spirit alive forever. He insists that he remains the only successor, acting as the manager for this dream team and eager to sign the greatest coach in history. He highlights their resilience to pain and absolute lack of fear, training his spooky skeleton squad as the most elite warriors to ever exist. The elder falls into a meditative silence, staring at the rattling crew as he contemplates the strange idea of having an undead student. Turning away with his white hair swaying, he paces while the heady silence fills the dungeon, signaling that the outcome is hanging by a thread. Whispering that this is a bizarre turn of events, the elder feels a flicker of curiosity, which is the perfect opening for a potential deal. We get a focus on his boots pacing across the stone, while his brilliant mind races to calculate the utility of this weird necromancer's pitch. He realizes that finding no talent among the living means his successor might actually be found among the dead, a total shift in his perspective. Studying the skeletons, he detects the souls of mighty fighters but hesitates because training an entire group violates his strict traditional rules. He decides to compromise a bit, a rare smile cracking his stern face, signaling that the master of all arts has finally made his chores. A golden alert pops up, confirming the hidden condition for the elder burdened by resentment is satisfied, leaving Dunhan feeling lightheaded with pure joy. Looking him straight in the face, the elder says he trusts his resolve and decides to give this struggling porter a shot at proving himself. He vows that if Dunhan manages to survive the coming trials, the entire legacy will be his to inherit. Finally passing the torch of power, a confirmed window materializes right when Gramps announces he wants to haunt the earth forever, meaning the supernatural deal is officially locked in. Digital text hints that winning favors needs better stats and sweet torquing the commander. This is not a charity work but a call to the most painful drill imaginable. Our hero is leaking sweat like a busted radiator but looks fierce. He vows this miraculous moment won't vanish, no matter what price he must pay. The Deezer hollers a loud bravo, the spectral image glowing with a fancy blue shine, as he finally rediscovers his reason for sticking around. The concluding bell chimes with congratulations. He has conquered the map and called the bitter ghost. The absolute madman won the duel without even wiggling his blade. We start by seeing a blurry overhead lamp while some dude slowly recovers his focus. Looks like our boy is finishing up his unplanned beauty sleep. Dunhan props himself up in the clinical suite, looking totally dazed and fatigued. He's clearly attempting to calculate his current geographical coordinates. His peepers basically bulge during the visual zoom. A sharp symbol appears when he realizes he is not the only soul in the room, making him ask for identification. He glances at the lady lounging by his bedside. His sentence dies halfway through as the truth slams into his brain like a speeding locomotive. He is Yahello, sitting perfectly upright with her limbs folded and a terrifying stare. Dunhan stutters over his own voice while uttering her name. Dunhan scratches his scalp while surveying the area. He asks if this is a clinic since his head is spinning, while Soyol preps her formal self-intro. She rises with the swagger of a legendary pro. She formally introduces herself as Jai Soyol, the absolute director of the prestigious Blue Guild organization. She hits him with a soul-piercing side glance. She warns that many refer to her as the Ebony Monarch, which is quite the intense hospital roommate energy. Dunhan shrinks like a frightened snail, perspiring hard. He recognizes a VIP but panics inside, wondering why an S-class god is chilling in his ward. He links the sequence of events frantically, assuming that since he fainted right after winning, she acted as his unofficial transport to this medical station. So Yul returns to her seat and shuts her eyes while confessing she felt massive shock. She assumed that unknown monster was basically impossible to beat. Her orbs flicker open to stare directly through his skull. She remarks plainly that she never guessed a low-tier bag carrier would finish the level. Dunhan hoists the covers high as a makeshift fortress, feeling extremely awkward. He asks with a shaky breath why she won't stop staring him down. He doubles down on his defensive vibe while clutching the bedding. The atmosphere in the cubicle is heavy enough to slice with a kitchen knife. She dismisses his concern by leaning back. She says her interest is piqued because it is weird for a guild executive to visit some random hospital patient. We observe her crossed legs with perfect style. She exhales a deep breath while confessing that, honestly, she's also quite desperate for the full story. She scoots closer, demanding the details of how he beat that lunatic dungeon. She jumps straight to the point, wanting to know about the loot. Dunham remains frozen and silent as he processes the list of questions. She even asks if he was truly endorsed and became the elderly master's pupil. The dark visual displays her moody logic, noting that her curiosity is justified since she missed the window due to supplies, making him look like a thief. Dunham swallows hard. He realizes that if she were a more murderous high-ranker, she might have just finished him off to take his secret rewards. He grips the fabric even tighter while the truth of his close call hits. The mercenary world is cutthroat, and he barely survived with his head attached. She ruins the quiet interval by asking about his inner thoughts. She clearly has zero plans to allow him a quick escape from her intense questioning. Dunham decides to play things cool, asking how the media covered the exploration team's results before he provides any specific info to the famous lady. Soriols works at his clever tactic. She explains there is no worry since the news believes her team cleared it, and non-disclosure deals keep mouths shut. Comfort finally reaches Dunham's face. He asks if his achievement is still a total secret, feeling like he finally avoided a massive headache. He sits up, offers a respectful nod, and genuinely thanks the formidable Dark Emperor for her kindness in keeping his name out of the news. She looks utterly astonished and impressed, remarking that he's far more level-headed than expected, given that most hunters would be thrilled to boast about such a clean win. He just chuckles sheepishly, running a hand through his hair, probing that safety first, as he knew all too well that celebrity status would make him a massive target. Standing up, Soyal explains that her actions weren't solely for his benefit, but also a point of honor for the illustrious Blue Guild. Ding-Hoon listens with a poker face as she articulates the glaringly obvious point. Who would ever believe an E-rank porter was a star player on a team with a seasoned ranker? As the Blue Guild's emblem is displayed, she lays out the embarrassing truth that keeping it hush-hush to save face, and he'd best do the same, or else. Swiftly changing tack, he poses a question, and she gracefully yields the floor, granting him permission to proceed. Sunlight streams into the hospital room as he inquires about his recovery time, and she drops the bombshell that a full 3 days have elapsed since they left the dungeon. Wincing at the lost time, he rubs his eyes and remarks that while her intervention brought an amazing chance, 3 days unconscious leaves one feeling quite exposed. He articulates his reluctance to blab about the reward, noting that open discussion of such benefits can be hazardous, and honestly, he hasn't fully grasped the experience of the reward itself yet. So he closes her eyes, contemplating his words, and muses aloud while he pleads for a bit more breathing room to sort everything out. Holding up a hand, he promises a full explanation later, stating he desperately needs a moment to check his system without her hovering so closely. He adds a playful wink, assuring her she needn't fret about him absconding, as after all, what hunter could possibly evade the piercing gaze of the Dark Emperor? She glances back, her amusement non-existent at the flirtatious banter, yet she accepts the arrangement, conceding that his willingness to cooperate is appreciated. She turns toward the exit, promising to return once he's ready to chat, bidding him a final farewell. The hospital door clicks shut with a soft sound, leaving him finally in solitude. Dunhan utterly slumps, sinking back onto his pillows with a colossal exhalation of relief. That was an incredibly taxing encounter. Gazing at the ceiling, he contemplates the sheer whirlwind of the past few days. Waking up, encountering a fearsome rancor, and surviving that bewildering dungeon is quite the mental load. The scene depicts Soryu standing outside the medical facility, and he grasps that he's working a very fine line. He could either alienate the Blue Guild entirely or potentially forge a highly lucrative partnership. Abruptly, a bright blue notification flashes before his eyes with an audible ding, and he looks at it, completely bewildered. The system is blaring a massive alert, urging him to claim his dungeon clearing reward, as unaccepted loot awaits. He leaps out of bed with the speed of a rocket, having completely forgotten to review his spoils before passing out in the dungeon. Without a moment's delay, he eagerly jabs his finger at the accept button, exclaiming, "Show me the goodies." A deluge of blue screens floods his vision, boosting his maximum energy to 20, and bestowing upon him the S-rank ability, Teachings of All Arts. He focuses intently on the most significant update, exclaiming about acquiring another S-rank skill, marking 2 from a single dungeon completion. He pulls up his character status, confirming his energy reserves are completely full, indicating he's revitalized and primed for action. A wide, mischievous grin stretches across his face, and he chuckles, declaring it astounding as he feels the invigorating rush of newfound strength. He surveys his updated skill repertoire, noting his awakened skeleton summon, alongside memory reconstruction and teachings of all arts, finally comprehending the allure of dungeons for veteran hunters. He taps on memory reconstruction, pondering its specific utility beyond boss encounters, given its past applications. Stroking his chin thoughtfully, he recalls its immense usefulness in accessing the elder gentleman's recollections, surmising it will undoubtedly prove valuable again someday. Sliding his digit toward that S-class all arts mastery perk, he prepares to discover if this jackpot is truly legendary or just shiny trash. Details emerge showing a 60-minute ghostly visit from the Grandmaster costs 20 Marna. Although the spectral tutor is purely intangible and invisible to everyone except our protagonist, he remains motionless before the display, letting the absurd weight of his new magical inheritance slowly marinate in his brain. Lunging from the clinical mattress like a spring, he realizes napping is for losers when a mythical sensei is waiting to be conjured. He snatches his gear with desperate haste, planning a swift departure from this boring clinic right this second. The scene shifts to a desolate meadow bathed in golden light, providing a secluded stage for him to unleash his experimental sorcery. Gazing at his palm, he suppresses his breathing while gathering the inner focus required to trigger the mystical sequence. With a mental shout he triggers the power, causing a radiant azure explosion of light to blast outward from his limb. His focused eyes sharpen as swirling currents of mana dance around his form, pushing his upgraded reserves to their absolute breaking point. As the radiance dies down, the ghostly outline of the ancient sage appears, announcing his arrival with an aura of regal wisdom and vintage swagger. Zooming into the veteran's features, he offers a mischievous grin while stating that the teacher and student are together again at last. Reappearing amidst a sapphire flare with an arrogant expression, the elder acknowledges the youngster who dragged him back to the mortal coil. A wave of joy washes over the boy's features, and he whispers the veteran's title, clearly delighted to reunite with his transparent coach. Correct. The Dronzer instantly delivers a sharp strike to the boy's skull, screaming about his stupidity while starting the corporal punishment immediately. Doubling over and massaging his aching scalp, he listens as the senior shouts about his disrespectful attitude and broken promises regarding his incredibly sluggish training progress and lazy habits. Squaring up within inches of his nose, the cranky spirit mucks his pathetic effort, doubting a slacker could ever grasp the peak of his legendary talent. Rubbing his throbbing cranium with annoyance, the boy protests that he initiated the summon the moment his eyes opened, defending his much-needed slumber. The phantom stops as a thought occurs to him, remembering the technical fine print stating that his spirit form should not be able to touch anything. The student's expression turns to shock when he ponders why a supposedly intangible ghost was able to deliver such a painfully realistic physical smackdown. Stepping closer, the mentor clarifies the situation by suggesting that the soul connection allows for shared suffering, which is a really questionable pedagogical approach. Beads of perspiration fall as the boy stammers in agreement, but the ghost ignores him, decreeing that education begins this instant now that he is present. Brandishing his macabre wand to call forth his Rattlebones crew, he wonders if the Calcium Battalion will take over the heavy lifting as originally planned. The master dismisses the idea instantly, explaining that they must first determine the curriculum after having already evaluated the pathetic and limited capabilities of his undead servants. Aiming a judgmental digit at the protagonist, he asserts that the student is the true weakness, meaning there is no escape from the upcoming grind. Looking insulted with desperation prickling his brow, the boy questions his own flaws while silently hoping the fuzzle does not intend to coach him personally. Striding forward with bravado, the Ancient One questions if the boy understands the origin of his prestigious title, preparing to spill some serious backstory. A mental image flickers showing the sage amidst a halo of shimmering blue weaponry like blades, axes, and pikes, while he brags about perfecting every single combat style in existence to earn his reputation, flashing a sinister and dark smile while rejecting any mercy. He clarifies that he intends to bestow far more than just 10 minion abilities because the kid must learn everything. Prepping his wooden tool with trembling hands, the youth stutters as he realizes a literal Everest of homework has just been dumped onto his schedule. Pointing towards some nearby practice targets, he reminds the Dronzer about his supposedly trash-tier aptitude, desperately trying to use his incompetence as a get-out-of-jail card. That ancient Dronzer stomps his boot down, effectively killing any chance for a polite conversation. This persistent fellow clearly refuses to take no for an answer. The old man bellows for quiet while flashing a terrifying scowl. The discussion ends abruptly before it could even manage to get off the ground. Leaning close, the elder insists that he keep his solemn vow. He claims Dunhan will master every technique eventually, so there is no need for him to worry. Glowing blue eyes ignite like high beams as he speaks. He treats molding a disaster into a prodigy like a twisted craft, offering a backhanded compliment of astronomical proportions. Dunhan clutches his staff with awkward tension. The spirit notes his physical presence is quite handy, as it makes forcefully training the boy a simple chore. Stroking his chin, the elder finds this timing divine. He decides to test a painful, attested method on those blocked energy channels, conjuring up a truly agonizing plan. Lightning crackles between his palms as he readies the impending torture. He cheerfully mentions that 300 days of this will fix Dunhan up nicely. 300 days. Dunhan stares back in sheer panic. He begs for some clarity, wondering why this restless ghost is making such long-term commitments to his physical frame. Sweating like a fountain, Dunhan tries to retreat. He whimpers that his brain just is not prepared for this madness under the cloudless azure sky. The elder refuses to budge an inch. He screams for silence, his face twitching with sheer intensity, and asks if the lad knows how many warriors would die for the secret. Posing dramatically with a supernova of blue light, the old man strikes a hero's stance. He names it the ticking universal supreme art, making it sound entirely legendary. Dunhan glares back, completely unimpressed by the display. He silently wonders why the Kudja sat on this super move for so long. The Dronzer calls his bluff immediately. Reading the boy like a trashy novel, he scoffs that the secret move would have cost his own life back then. The elder clarifies the harsh truth of his path. He asks what good a student is if his master dies upon activation, finally justifying his former stinginess. Dunhan wears a mask of total confusion. He asks what shifted in his mind to suddenly make him so generous with his training. The spirit stretches his arms, feeling mighty proud. He notes that being a ghost changes his priorities, leaving Dunhan stunned at the sheer convenience of that logic. Dunhan raises a valid point about the past. He wonders why those early guild hunters never got a taste of this treatment during their brutal fights. Quiet goes the elder as he strikes again. He bellows at the impudent brat, just to ensure his new pupil stays focused and obedient. Dunhan cradles his sore cheek in annoyance. He grumbles about the abuse, but the ghost just stares, labeling the boy an utter idiot for failing to listen. Running a hand through his hair, the elder looks quite drained. He clarifies that this specific brand of torture is reserved for polishing total garbage. He continues his savage lecture without mercy. He claims that unless the subject is absolute profuse, the effort is wasted, equating the boy to rotten leftovers. Ouch. Dunhan grows vacant as the insult sinks into his skull. He repeats the words rotten food waste, feeling his ego take a massive critical strike. A vision of D-Soil appears, showcasing her radiant power. The mentor admits he cannot use his arts on those tainted by other energy sources. Looking back at Dunhan, the master notes his body is simple and weak, yet untainted. It is a genuine miracle that his weird skeleton summons left him uncorrupted. The ancient man admits this is just a backup plan. He turns away, grumbling that a naturally gifted warrior is always superior to a handcrafted one. Dahan rubs his jaw, taking the verbal abuse in stride. He realizes that even if the delivery is cruel, this means he can finally grow stronger. He envisions his skeletons pulsing with similar violet energy. He thinks that buffing his entire undead squad makes this a total win-win situation. The elder extends his glowing hands, ready to begin. He asks if the boy is prepared, his expression turning grave and serious. Dunhan snaps to attention while clutching his skull staff. He yells a firm yes, eager to suffer through the pain if it brings him true power. A massive beam of azure light descends from the heavens, swallowing Dunhan whole. The aggressive massage session has officially reached its start. Dunhan gets smacked around by unseen ghosts of air, howling about the unfair agony as he turns into a human punching bag. Gramps gazes on with complete boredom, snorting that the toddler tantrum is premature since the real fun has not even started. Smashed into the gravel by neon glow, the poor guy hears that eating dirt is the only path to spooky ghost warrior status. Eyes sharpening like daggers, the old guy hints that things are about to get 10 times worse, making Dunhan fear for his life. Blue streaks fly as the geezer cranks the dial to 11, leaving the student to serenade the nearby trees with high-pitched wails. Teeth chattering while leaking buckets of sweat, the lad vows to survive this beatdown even if it kills his pride first. Via the ding-dong, the magical pop-up grants a masochist badge called Pain Resistance, proving that being a pinata boosts numbers. Wheezing like a broken accordion, he stretches out a shaky limb while wondering if his soul is trying to exit his lungs. Face planting in the mud like a fallen pancake, he feels the master looming overhead with a stick and zero sympathy. Working away, the antique man admits the round is over, calling him a sturdy piece of garbage with impressive damage-soaking potential. Still paralyzed on the carpet, he listens to cryptic advice about grit and power while trying not to pass out cold. A suspiciously kind grin appears, suggesting that progress is possible, which feels weird coming from a guy who just flattened him. Just as hope flickers in his tired eyes, the master revokes the break, effectively crushing his spirit with a simple verbal twist. Click-clack goes a wooden stick, followed by a reminder that 30 minutes remain on the clock for his napless workout. Reeled back to a standing position by ghost strings, the boy wonders why gravity has suddenly decided to stop working today. Hoisted up like a sack of spuds, he hears the master joke that his beatings are basically a free full-body treatment. Gesturing towards some bone buddies in the woods, he reveals that the corpse crew is eager for round 2. Non-stop drills. Skin turning whiter than the skeletons, the apprentice whispers prayers while realizing he is trapped in a never-ending fitness cult. Back in the mud doing subby push-ups, he blubbers about his impending demise while his muscles sing songs of absolute regret. The teacher rants about how Brawn fuels magic, letting calcified remains bench press mountains without having a single shred of actual meat. Bam! A quick jab shakes the atmosphere itself, proving that a millennium of working out makes a man terrifyingly good at hitting wind. Groups of bony ninjas start backflipping nearby, showing him that if he wants to win, his skeletons must master complex yoga moves. Staring through the haze of fatigue, he finds it wild that the fossil of a man still has moves that defy physics. Facing the kid, the master reveals he initially pegged him as a total loser, which is weirdly the nicest thing said today. He notes that the boy is surprisingly stubborn, giving him a look that almost screams dad pride despite the recent murder attempts. Leveling a finger at the weakling, he tosses him aside like laundry to start teaching the basic alphabet of pain all over. Gritting through the ache, he confesses his fibers are doing the slits, realizing this whole drill is just gourmet agony served hot. Soaked in his own misery, he faces a challenge about his willpower as the master turns the screws on his remaining stamina. Dropping like a sack of bricks, he gasps, realizing that the old man's bootcamp makes elite military drills look like simple tea parties. If he survives the day, he gets the secret keys to the super special zombie party, making all the suffering worth the effort. Attempting to copy the old man's swift strike, Dunhan fails miserably, barely offering a tiny, pitiful shuffle that looks more like a clumsy toddler dance than combat. The pair of skeletal minions mimic the veteran's posture flawlessly, standing tall with smug attitudes, making it obvious that brainless bones learn way faster than their master. Staring them down, Dunhan calls them his calcium comrades while faking bravado, even though his ego is taking a massive beating because his own corpses are better. One bony soldier rotates its skull, fixing its glowing violet gaze on Dunhan, radiating a heavy vibe of silent disapproval that says you are real bad at this. Panic hits Dunhan as he apologizes to his summon, begging for some mercy, while he gasps for oxygen and feels his muscles actively planning a hostile coup. He whines about lacking X-ray vision for Jack, proof that he remains stuck in rookie mode without the mentor's senses, feeling utterly drained yet refusing to quit. Limping towards Sanctuary, he finally reaches the entry handle while letting out a soul-deep moan, completely battered and fried from the brutal grind he just finished. Swapping the key, he finds two familiar faces, specifically the ginger warrior and the guide buddy from the previous raid, who wave at him like he's late. Dunhan is absolutely bamboozled, wondering why they turned his porch into the clubhouse, since he usually treats professional acquaintances like distant cousins he avoids at weddings. The redhead flashes a grin, clarifying they represent the survivors from the recent disaster, appear to spill some beans about a potentially lucrative opportunity they found. Giving him a solid thump on the shoulder, the ginger guy notes he looks like he survived a garbage disposal, joking that Dunhan hit the gym on steroids. Waving the command off, he claims his bulk is pure organic meat, lying through his teeth to keep the supernatural trainer a total secret from his colleagues. He mentions a long session of aggressive manipulation, which is just coded language for his bones being pulverized during training, though his limbs are definitely ready to fall. Raising a doubtful eyebrow, the redhead questions if a simple kneading session caused that kind of structural damage, clearly smelling the manure in Dunhan's weird explanation. A twitch develops in his eyelid but Dunhan maintains his stone face, knowing he has to keep the secret old man hidden away from his inquisitive new pals. Pivoting to the main topic, he questions their real motives, because these dudes definitely did not show up just to critique his new and improved athletic physique. The ginger guy explains that his previous display of grit left them quite startled, confessing that they were genuinely moved by his stubborn refusal to give up. Reaching out to initiate a grip, he identifies himself as Johan Jayu, a B-tier combatant, while Dunhan takes it with a look of slight social shock. Our hero identifies himself as simple mercenary Necromancer Ju Dunhan. sticking with his bottom tier label even though his teacher has already leveled him up into something bigger. Cutting the small torque, Panjai reveals there is a fresh raid popping up, and he wants to draft Dunhan into his official squad for the mission. Dunhan is taken aback, asking for details on this crawl, surprised that another chance to possibly die for money is already knocking on his front door. Panjayu says it is a legit C-tier instance, and he is recruiting Dunhan specifically, which is a massive promotion from scavenging around the bottom feeding E-tier trash. Twinning suspiciously, Dunhan asks if the guy is actually broke and looking for a payday, showing zero hesitation in calling out his potential partner's empty pockets. Looking embarrassed, Panjai coughs and admits his wallet is looking thin, but defends his honor by claiming B-rank legends still need to eat regular meals too. Dunhan groans, admitting he is also chasing the bag, which is the only real reason he is considering this shady deal in the high-stakes hunter world. He asks if this is one of those fabled blue trish pits where gems drop like candy, looking for a retirement level score rather than a measly hourly service fee. With a smirk, Panyu confirms the danger is high but the payout is astronomical, doing his absolute best to dangle some shiny treasures right in front of him. He spills that some random group recently snatched a liquid strength boost from there, which is essentially winning the lottery in the dangerous world of mercenary hunting. Dunhan's face lights up at the mention of a power-up bottle, a top-tier item that turns weaklings into powerhouses instantly, serving as the ultimate steroid for rising stars. Panyu asks for his final verdict, confident he has set the trap well, sweetening the deal by offering a spot as a full fighter instead of a suitcase carrier. Dunhan looked completely confused, asking why his porter's status mattered at all. He had always been defined as a luggage guy, never a serious fighter. Panyu laughed, assuring him he would absolutely receive a proper slice of the profits. He was treating Dunhan as an equal, which felt like a substantial promotion. Dunhan's pupils practically devoured his irises as he processed the information. If a power potion truly dropped, it could radically alter his entire financial future. He calculated the value, knowing a power potion was worth around 50 million won, approximately $37,000. That was truly life-changing for someone making $30 a day. In a group of 5, that meant a payday of roughly 10 million won each. It represented an immense windfall, and he found himself extremely interested in getting rich. Panyu quickly reassured him that his cut was guaranteed. He was working hard to finalize the agreement, highlighting the prospect of easy money. He asked Dunhan directly if he was in. A hopeful expression etched across his face. Dunhan rubbed his chin, mulling over the decision. He admitted to himself that he was exhausted from being perpetually broke and constantly on the move. This really could be his escape route to a better lifestyle. His skeletons shuffled around him in a dreamlike state, ready to tear through whatever challenge awaited. He was a necromancer, after all, and they were his ticket to a brighter future. He told Panyu he would join, passing along the coordinates for their meeting place. The offer was officially accepted. Panyu smiled broadly, promising to send the final details later. The new party was assembled, and Dunhan was preparing to set off on another adventure. We cut back to the elder, standing in his serene, sunlit training area. His eyes were closed, enjoying the warm glow on his face. Dunhan bowed respectfully to his master, asking for his understanding. He explained he needed to balance his rigorous training with his critical financial needs. The elder opened his eyes, a calm expression settled on his features. He was surprisingly sympathetic to Dunhan's predicament. He explained that prioritizing real-world experience over controlled training was completely natural. He considered himself a realist, after all. He then asked Dunhan if he was abandoning him entirely, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. He was teasing the boy, though now with a hint of affection. Dunhan confirmed he was leaving, and suddenly, the elder's eyes glowed with mincing blue energy. He groaned loudly, clearly unhappy about being left behind. Dunhan teased him about his sulky face, displaying a playful side he never would have dared to show before this. The elder's eyes blazed brightly as he asked why Dunhan couldn't simply summon him when needed. He was being quite dramatic for an ancient sage. Dunhan looked terrified, stammering out a response. He realized he had pushed his luck far past the limits of the old man's patience. The elder let out a massive, terrifying scream, sending Dunhan flying with a powerful blast of energy. He was definitely not taking this abandonment in stride. The elder finally ended the session, giving Dunhan a simple good job. Poor Dunhan was utterly spent, gasping for air on his hands and knees. He looked ready to pass out, sweat dripping from his face and body. He was convinced he had almost met his maker once again during this intense warm-up. Thankfully, his new C-rank still, pain resistance, was working overtime. It numbed his senses as the agony increased, and he admitted he would be dead without it. He glanced at his status window with a small measure of relief, seeing the skill still had plenty of room to advance. He knew he would need every single point of growth for what was coming next. The elder repeated his threat with a calm expression, causing Dunhan's heart to stop. He screamed in disbelief, certain he must have misheard the part about making it even more challenging. His eyes were bulging as the full realization hit him. He genuinely believed he was at his breaking point, but the elder was merely getting started. The skeletons were already back in motion behind him, displaying absolutely no fatigue. The elder announced it was officially time to begin the actual lesson. He barked an order for everyone to assemble immediately. He stood looking like a relentless drill sergeant as Dunhan and his bony minions lined up. The skeletons clattered into formation, tuning their stances. The elder instructed them to return to the horse-riding stance they had practiced during the previous training session. Pointing a stern finger at the crew, he stresses that mastering the fundamentals is mandatory. To climb the power ladder, they must first fix their crumbling basement. A fresh strategy is unveiled where he intends to tutor a single move to one lucky winner daily. He then asks the big question, which victim wants to lead? Dunhan nearly trips over his jaw hearing about real techniques. Skipping the polite request for volunteers, the old man targets the bag of bones holding a blade. Orders are barked at the calcium-rich warrior. Those violet sockets flicker with excitement, signaling that the rattling fighter is prepared for its initial software patch. Staring at his minion, Dunhan notes its official label as a blade wielder. By time this noisy collection of joints graduated into a true professional slayer. The bony swordsman strikes a pose, yet the digital menu is tragically empty. It lacks any fancy tricks, possessing only the ability to flail its arms around aimlessly. Talent deficits do not bother the master, who claims expertise can be crafted from nothing. He commands the skeleton to show him a typical slash, with pupils blazing like headlights. The senior citizen dissects every twitch. He is searching for a spark of greatness buried deep inside that dusty ribcage. Though the pal of ribs seems shy, Dunhan starts acting like a cheerleader. He muses that Bone Boy is finally beginning his journey toward legendary status. Clapping the undead shoulder with resolve, he fully commits to the regimen. He warns his men in that training continues until its skeleton actually shatters into pieces. Wearing a smile that would terrify a horror movie villain, Dunhan hovers over his servant, glad that someone else is finally doing the literal grunt work. The skeletal warrior appears truly petrified, vibrating with fear at such raw intensity. Apparently, even the deceased can sense when their afterlife is turning into a nightmare. Moving forward, the Calcium champion executes a simple downward chop. The strike is passable, yet the grumpy instructor's opinion remains the only metric that matters. Briefly disregarding the undead, the Dronzer swivels toward our hero. He checks if his name is Iniju Dunhan, which catches the youngster off guard. Snapping into a rigid posture, Dunhan admits his identity. After a quick inspection, the veteran decides it is high time for a boring lecture on philosophy. Staring through the boy's very essence, he inquires about the definition of sword fighting. It feels like a trap designed to lead to endless physical punishment. Observing his men and waving a blade behind them, Dunhan assumes the answer is simple. He suggests that it is merely the art of poking things. A heavy sigh of disappointment escapes the teacher, who finds that reply incredibly blind. He clearly anticipated a more poetic or earth-shattering revelation from his student. Surprisingly, he confesses that the kid hit the nail on the head. Overcomplicating things is useless, since swordsmanship is just the method of managing a metal stick. He stresses that simple truth, insisting there is no hidden magic. It is a remarkably humble perspective for a man who could likely dice a mountain. Gesturing toward a random branch on the turf, he instructs Dunhan to grab it. It seems the student is being drafted for some painful practical training. That twig sits there looking completely useless. However, in this comic world, even a splintery branch can become a tactical nuke when wielded by a professional. Lifting the wood, Dunhan realizes the training extends beyond his pets. The legend wants to share his secrets with the boss himself, which is a massive win. Gazing at the old timer, he feels the heavy burden of this heritage. He has transitioned from a mere minion manager to the apprentice of an absolute icon. The veteran repeats his command to hold the tool, leaving Dunhan baffled. He wonders what the specific ergonomic grip for a legendary twig user is supposed to be. Clutching the wood with zero grace, he looks like a statuesque beginner. The master barks at him once more, demanding he stop analyzing every single microscopic detail. Hovering at his back, the master offers a golden tip. He suggests gripping it however feels right, preferring raw intuition over a mindless, robotic copycat approach. Nailing deeply, Dunhan finds a natural hold on the branch. The teacher checks his readiness, then bellows for him to strike with every ounce of strength. He unleashes a wide, powerful sideswipe through the air. Glancing back at the instructor, he questions if that mediocre display was actually the desired result. The old man erupts into joyous laughter, yelling that he nailed it. Dunhan stands frozen with a confused expression, completely failing to understand why he is winning. Drenched in sweat and utterly baffled, he wonders if the old master has officially cooked his cabbage, since that swing felt totally ordinary to him. Pointing towards the branch handle, the Dronzer asks Dunhan what his digits are doing, hoping to spark a tiny flame of enlightenment in his brain. He observes how the thumb stands tall while the rest cluster tight, a classic move humans use to clutch stuff even without a fancy education. Breaking down the arc like a math nerd, the elder proves that Dunhan's random flailing actually adhered to some solid, geometric common sense. Printing widely, he notes that without any formal nagging, the kid just yanked it through the air using his roar, untamed gut feeling. Underneath that swipe lives every moment Dunhan has ever spent waving sticks around, essentially packing his whole autobiography into one single whammy. Dunhan stands paralyzed, wondering if that really came from him, as he never suspected a measly twitch could carry such emotional baggage. Following up with a classic riddle, the teacher asks if velocity plus muscle would result in a boom, subtle and nudging him toward fighting wisdom. Leaving the youth in his dust, the old man lets the inquiry dangle, mandating a brain session regarding how shape, breadth, and tempo tango together. Wound in a wide-eyed supo, Dunhan gets roasted by the elder for looking like a goldfish, before being told to wake up already. Dropping some logic, the master says that movement hits hard if it has zip and heft, claiming it is just the planet's basic rulebook. Staring at his wooden tool, the light bulb finally flickers on above Dunhan's head, as a fundamental reality finally starts making sense. Clenching the timber firmly, he believes he finally gets the picture, graduating from being completely lost to having a solid clue. He understands it is not about mimicking doers, but forging a unique quack fueled by his soul, earning a rare nod from the mentor. With a slight chin bump, the fossil feels relief that his student is not a complete lost cause. Confessing he spots a tiny spark, bubbling toward a practice doll, he wonders aloud about repeating a move billions of times until it hits its ultimate limit. Birthing true mastery, grabbing his waist-mounted steel with calm intention, he shifts the entire vibe of the forest clearing in the blink of an eye. Barking at the boy to pay attention, he declares that this specifically is a blade RT and the bony dude will soon conquer. Holding his breath like a diver, the kid stays glued to the spot, ready to witness some top-tier sword-swinging magic. The Dronzer unleashes a slash so quick it is basically invisible, making the atmosphere howl in protest as a cold steel divides the wind. An enormous wave of glowing neon blue shoots out from his stroke, tearing the space apart with a roar of pure unadulterated strength, spanning the entire horizon. The azure beam demonstrates the lethal distance achieved through mindless grinding, showcasing the fruit of a billion practice rounds. Unfazed by his own mayhem, he tells Dunhan to skip the philosophy textbooks, because in this game, only doing the deed counts. Issuing his last command, he tells the student to sharpen his strike, a straightforward task that will likely take forever to finish. With a final glance, he swears that eventually his entire fighting mojo will boil down to one perfect cut, the king of all shortcuts. Fixated on his palm, he mumbles the teacher's advice that looking weird is totally okay if the end result makes the bad guys explode. Squeezing that twig until his joints pop, he decides it is high time to kick off his own million-swing marathon without further delay. Sprinting into the fray with a loud yell, branch aloft, he is set on writing his own dictionary through the sheer force of impacts. Ding goes the gold alert, showing he learned to chop, with a side note that this trick could level up into something truly terrifying soon. Time to handle business, since it looks like someone is busy scribbling signatures on some legal sheets to finalize a contract or report. Guy Parrin, the highly respected Blue Guild leader, was busy looking professional at his desk. That professional facade promptly vanished when his sister Soil stopped by and shouted his name. He wasn't ranked 58th in the world for nothing. This guy was a seriously big deal. He turned around to see what his little sister wanted. Soil stood there with a serious expression, clearly deep in thought about something heavy. Her brother, noticing the rare personal visit, asked why she bothered coming. The office was appropriately extravagant for a top-tier guild master. Soil was definitely not there for casual conversation, judging by her unusually intense demeanor. She sat down and confessed that something had her genuinely worried. Her brother, naturally surprised, couldn't imagine what could possibly rattle someone like her. She then posed a strange hypothetical question. Could a D-rank hunter suddenly become more powerful than an established ranker? It was obvious she was talking about Ding-hoon. Her brother thought that question came out of left field. He demanded she quit avoiding the issue and answer his initial inquiry first. He explained that even when acquiring a new skill, it usually takes considerable time to fully master it. A massive, sudden power surge was basically impossible without preparation. He figured the only logical possibility was that this person had been pretending to be weak all along. It was a classic bait-and-switch powerhouse strategy. Soil immediately dismissed the idea, shaking her head vigorously. She was absolutely certain that this individual hadn't been sandbiting. Her brother reminded her that even high-level rankers couldn't fool her. She was essentially a talking lie detection system. Her detection skills were famous for a reason, especially with those glowing red eyes. Anyone trying to deceive her, even a ranker, was usually caught immediately. Her brother was completely stumped. If the person wasn't hiding this strength, then what exactly happened? He also sensed she was withholding information. She bit her lip, remembering the dungeon they just cleared together. She hadn't actually reported anything about that particular expedition to him yet. She reflected on her complete failure to give him details about the dungeon entrance. That particular door held secrets she was currently keeping close to her chest. She felt genuinely embarrassed recalling how she kept getting wiped out by the boss inside. Her pride had definitely taken a brutal beating from that experience. The memory of that old man sitting there was still haunting her thoughts. This tower level was on a completely different plane than anything she'd ever witnessed before. She admitted to herself that it was the very first time she had been so utterly defeated. It was a humiliating experience for a top-tier ranker like her. She started wondering how a D-rank hunter like Ding-hoon could possibly manage to deal with the same old man. It simply defied all logic for someone of his rank. She remembered he had stood out right from the very beginning. He was definitely not cut from the same cloth as the other porters she'd employed. He had given him a chance to try, purely out of curiosity. She truly never expected him to actually succeed and pull it off, but he actually cleared it, much to her surprise. She decided she would tell her brother once she fully figured out the reasons why. For now, she chose to simply observe and analyze his progress closely. She was clearly captivated by him, keeping a very close eye on his movements. Her brother noticed the sudden doofy grin on her face and immediately became suspicious. She went from serious business to grinning like a Cheshire cat in seconds. He found it bizarre because she usually only obsessed over swords and shit. Seeing her blush like that was certainly setting off major alarm bells in his head. She immediately denied everything and decided to make a run for it. As far as she was concerned, that conversation was officially finished. She dismissed him with a casual forget it and marched straight out of the office. Her brother was left behind, utterly confused and more bewildered than ever. Meanwhile, at a different dungeon entrance, a group was gathering for a raid. This looked like the C-rank Ding-hoon had been invited to attend. Iho was there, looking fully prepared for action. He spotted someone approaching and let out a small shout of recognition as they drew near. Dunhan arrived on the scene, presenting himself much more professionally, like a real hunter. Iho was happy to see his new skeleton summoner showed up as promised. A quick banter session follows, verifying that Dunhan actually bothered reading the dungeon brief, so the Slaughterfest is officially greenlit. The sandy C-rank hellhole looks basic, just a standard kill everything then whack the boss routine, though simple usually translates to dying. Dunhan bragged about bathing in SPF 50 and hoarding chili water, proving he treats this giant litter box with respect it demands. Out of nowhere, Dunhan freezes, his eyes widening as he realizes the gathering is way more populated than a lonely hunter meeting. This tiny social circle is definitely overcrowded for a private raid, making him wonder if they accidentally invited half the local neighborhood. The crew hears the gate leads to a giant toaster, prompting a frantic scramble to prep their equipment for some serious sweating sessions. Iho admits to recruiting 2 bottom-tier pack mules, reassuring Dunhan that their wages won't touch his precious loot because he already paid up. Dunhan nods, knowing these human backpacks are vital for dragging shiny trash and monster guts out of a mid-level zone like this. These magical pits are stuffed with expensive rocks and gross monster bits, so having extra luggage handlers is just smart business for profits. He whispers to his ego that a measly C-rank zone is cake now, since his days as a pathetic bottom feeder are over. Recalling how his bony butters can pulverize beefy orcs without breaking a sweat, he feels like he could probably punch the sun today. The squad takes turns diving headfirst into the shimmering blue portal, eager to discover exactly how miserable this dry oven will actually be. They crash land in an endless sea of grit and misery, where the floor is literally trying to grill their boots into medium rare. A ping announces their arrival into the danger zone, immediately greeted by parched lungs and the annoying sound of sand invading their expensive footwear. The local star is being a total jerk today, and the system chime confirms they are currently being roasted alive by the environment. The temperature is so incredibly offensive that Evelyn loses a tenth of his power, which is a pretty rude way to start a party. A teammate starts whining about the climate, only to be told to pretend it is a spar day, which is terrible advice from someone. He checks if the group is still alive, noting they look like wilted lettuce, as the sun punches anyone who forgot to learn magic. Danhan chuckles, realizing that compared to the old man's torturous larva workouts, this desert is basically a pleasant afternoon stroll in a park. Surviving that previous nightmare of a boot camp was actually helpful, turning his skin into a heat-resistant shield against this minus soul flare. Feeling fancy, Danhan thumps his stick and unleashes his upgraded D-rank awakened bony boys in a flashy explosion of purple sparkles and dark magic. 5 skeletal soldiers pop out of the dirt looking surprisingly buff, brandishing the deer and ready to commit some serious violence for the boss. The dead guys march forward, kicking up little dust storms with their heavy feet, completely unbothered because they do not have any skin left. Iho yelps in surprise, hollering about how these calcium kings look much beefier, finally realizing that Danhan might actually be a big deal now. The skeleton gives the humans a creepy look of judgment, and when Iho asks about their power level, Danhan just gives a smug little nod. Iho orders the group to stay sharp because the local wildlife consists of grumpy scorpions and legless spiders, so it is time to move. Peering about the danger noodles makes one hunt to start panicking, but Iho snaps at him to calm down because they are just C-rank pets. He instructs the back handlers to tail the group and grab the shiny bits, keeping their heads down and their sacks stuffed with loot. The rattling remains stomp ahead with a rhythmic thumping sound, acting as the ultimate meatless shields for the team as they enter the void. Working through this giant sandbox is absolutely exhausting, leaving the humans looking like hot garbage as they wonder when this torture will finally end. Out of nowhere, Iho freezes the squad with a sharp hand signal, sensing a weird vibe like someone stole his lunch. A giant sphere of sand zooms across the horizon, sounding like a vacuum cleaner on steroids, meaning trouble is zooming in. Some dude starts questioning life choices, but his teeth rattle as the dunes begin a heavy metal concert, ending the quiet piece. His peepers stretch wide when he finally sees a nightmare, which stopped being a smudge and became a very scary reality. The colossal stinger slashes through the heat like a cursed whip, signaling that the ugly crawly welcoming committee is finally here. Overgrown lobsters burst from the dunes with clicking claws, forcing one poor guy to scream like he just saw a spider. The panicked warrior unsheathes a toothpick of a blade, bracing for impact as the desert brawl descends into total spicy chaos. Someone actually catches a claw with his shield, making pretty fireworks, though they are sweating bullets trying not to get squished. Iho screams over the noise for everyone to stop playing hero and hug each other in formation, knowing teamwork makes the dream work here. The crew fumbles into their spots with gear out, eager to teach these bubbers that raiding an organized guild is a terrible idea. A mid-tier desert bug wiggles closer, packing the same punch as a sweaty orc, making it clear this won't be a quick nap. Danhan keeps his cool like a cucumber, glancing at his bony wizard pal while cooking up a scheme to flip the script. He tells his rattlebones buddy to put up some wind protection, causing violet sparkles to dance around the dead guy for the spell. The skeletal caster actually pulls it off, sending a chilly vibe through the air to prove that dead guys are better at magic. The Bone Squad looks surprisingly stylish and lethal, prepared to shred anything, making Danhan feel like a very proud Necromancer dad. He aims his stick at the bugs and tells his calcium crew to delete the enemies, finally kicking off the main event properly. Danhan observes the initial brawl with a bored face, prioritizing his own skin while his great-colored bubble keeps him safe from the dusty madness. Bone number 1 plays the meat shield by thumping its buckler into the grid, creating a makeshift wall against the incoming tide of angry crustaceans. A notification pops when Bone 11 uses a budget torrent, turning into a neon purple beacon that screams come hit me to every bug. Danhan orders the total annihilation of the pests as his one blows, waving his hands like a weird orchestra leader to fix the road. The dumb bugs bite the bait, staring at Bone 11 with googly eyes, which leaves their squishy bits exposed to the rest of the bony boys. One calcium warrior jumps like a basketball pro, blade shining in the heat, preparing a heavy overhead chop that carries enough weight to break rocks. Steel smashes against the bug's crunchy exterior with a loud ringing sound, making fear flies as the weapon struggles against the natural armor. The noise is deafening but the blade fails to sink in, forcing Danhan to admit that these pests have some seriously premium plating. A bunch of scorpions encircle the Bone Squad with clicking snappers, and although Danhan sees a challenge, he's not ready to quit yet. He hollers at his team to keep swinging and never quit, betting that even the strongest shell will eventually crack if they just keep bunking. The big bug screams in agony after getting poked by arrows and sliced by swords, proving the skeleton crew is actually doing their jobs well. Other monsters are being turned into crab salad as their shells snap, making the skeletal warriors look like absolute professionals at this point. Danhan grins at the messy sight, realizing this chore is simpler than expected, since all those hours of practice are finally paying the bills. One last bug squeals its final breath as it dies, leaving our skeletal friends to enjoy the win while dominating the sandy war zone. The leader, Iho, approached, completely stunned by the skeleton's performance. He praised their work, figuring Danhan must have simply lucked into a fantastic outcome. Danhan, breathing heavily, tempted to maintain a humble facade, claiming success was only possible because Iho had cleared the large monsters first. He kept up the role of the modest assistant. Iho laughed, joking about whether luck also somehow improved a person's personality. He was genuinely impressed, telling Danhan he was viewing him in a far better light now. Danhan looked away, his expression chilling considerably. He was tired of hearing about luck, knowing exactly how much strenuous effort he had actually put into the fight. He shot a suspicious glance at the others, realizing the rest of the hunters were unexpectedly talented. It was slowly dawning on him that something fundamental was wrong with this entire expedition. The hunter with a ponytail effortlessly sliced through a scorpion, reinforcing Danhan's observation that everyone here was highly skilled. This made inviting an E-rank mercenary like him even more suspicious. He understood that the confidentiality agreement with the Blue Dill prevented the other hunters from speaking freely or asking careless questions. The resulting silence was starting to feel deeply sinister. He mentally reviewed the formal contract, realizing it was the only thing holding the group together. It was a very thin shield against a highly perilous situation. Staring out across the vast dunes, he reflected on how there was only one way to satisfy the collective curiosity in this environment. Someone usually ended up getting severely hurt. His internal thoughts turned darker as he considered the lack of cameras or surveillance in these places. Dungeon accidents were simply the ideal cover story for premeditated murder. The large tough guy and the quiet girl watched him with cold, calculating eyes. The friendly mask the party wore was finally slipping away completely. Now the hooded hunter gave him a menacing look from under the cloak. Dunham realized these people were definitely not the decent companions he had hoped to find for a party. He gripped his staff tightly, while his skeleton rattled anxiously beside him. He warned himself to remain cautious because this wasn't just a suspicion anymore, it was an explicit threat. Iho turned back and flashed a horrifyingly wide grin, looking like a total psychopath. He was finally showing his genuine colors, and it was significantly less appealing than his act. They arrived at the entrance to the boss room, a large ruined structure with a scorpion emblem carved over the top. The intense heat made the air shimmer as they got ready to enter. The system chimed with a stage name, Ancient Desert Scorpion King. But the next message delivered a huge plot twist. A sacrifice was required to break the magical seal. The altars appeared, glowing ominously with dark energy. The instruction was straightforward. Place the sacrifice on the 2 altars to proceed. The 2 porters looked completely terrified when the system clarified the sacrifice must be a living hunter of F rank or higher. This was absolutely not part of the standard job requirements. Dunham stared at the message in shock, thinking he hadn't heard anything about this particular detail. He realized far too late that he was part of a ritual for human sacrifice. One porter started sweating and shaking, asking why a sacrifice was needed at all. She suddenly grasped that she was a designated lamb for the situation. The rest of the hunters turned toward the porters, sporting evil, knowing works. They had apparently been planning to kill these girls since the moment they left the city. The 2 girls froze solid as the hunters encircled them. The betrayal was complete, and the atmosphere grew heavy with the promise of imminent violence. Porter clutched her back, asking what this all meant, desperately hoping she had simply misinterpreted the unfolding events. Iho offered only a cold, empty smile, asking if she truly didn't understand that 2 living F-rank hunters were needed. He had completely discarded his friendly act. The girls began to panic, demanding to know why they were being targeted. One screamed, asking what they were doing as the realization of impending murder dawned on them. The girls called him crazy, but Iho merely laughed it off. He told them it was fine if thinking that way helped them come to terms with their unavoidable deaths. They cried out in absolute terror, begging for a reason, making a heartfelt plea for mercy that clearly was never going to come. The terrible realization finally hit home. They asked if this had been planned from the very beginning. They weren't truly part of the team. They were just working keys to unlock the bus room. Iho maintained his mocking expression, looking down at them as if they were nothing more than easily expendable resources. He was a monster wearing human skin. Dunham suddenly stepped between everyone, his face a mask of bewilderment as he demanded an explanation for the situation. He finally decided to speak up against the madness. Iho eyed him with utter contempt, advising him to steer clear, basically telling him to mind his own business and let the ritual finish. The atmosphere grew thick with tension as Iho inquired if Dunham's attitude signaled an intent to resist, prepared to finish him off too if he didn't back down. He taunted Dunham, questioning if he was a sentimental soul or just playing the gallant stray, drawing his dagger for a dramatic, bloody encounter. Dunham told him to pipe down and demanded to know his actual agenda, seeking the full scope of this treachery before commencing the brawl. Iho simply guffawed, branding him entirely oblivious and clearly relishing his role as the supremely villainous antagonist. Dunham bellowed for him to still it, demanding the unvarnished truth about why he'd been brought to this spot. His patience subtly spent, Iho confessed that they were aware of his fascination with fortune and had, in essence, been evaluating his capabilities all along, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. He explained that they'd gone to the trouble of escorting Dunham to the underground chamber solely to ascertain his true worth, with his entire crew standing resolutely behind him. He asserted that they had no intention of challenging him provided he acquiesced, a classic villainous proposition of join or perish. Dunham simply stared, his visage darkened by the sheer depravity of their actions, as Iho reiterated his query about Dunham's willingness to oppose him. Iho continued his enticement, asking if Dunham was amenable to aligning with their rotted bloodthirsty cohort. He proposed that if Dunham joined forces, equitable division of spoils would be arranged, attempting to entice him with promises of riches and authority. Dunham scoffed, calling him a lunatic and declaring his preference for managing his own fair distribution, unwilling to accept the deranged offer. Iho then encapsulated his wicked proposal, admitting his villainy and questioning Dunham's desire to engage in nefarious deeds alongside him, or a moment of candor. Dunham met him with unyielding resolve, stating that if that was the case, he should be granted his due, prepared to seize everything they possessed by sheer might. Grinding his teeth, his eyes ablaze with righteous indignation, he told Iho to eat dirt, officially declaring hostilities against the scoundrels. Dunham, without a flicker of hesitation, raised his staff and commanded Bone 3 to step forward, enveloped in an aura of violet energy, ready to confront the traitors. Bone 3 was already poised, drawing its bow with an eye glowing verdant green, and Dunham ordered it to annihilate them, anticipating a truly painful shot. Projectiles whizzed through the air, catching the treacherous hunters completely off guard, one of them letting out a startled yelp as he realized the undead were now formidable foes. Iho expertly evaded the incoming arrows, the chef zipping past him, and mockingly asked Dunham if that was the extent of his offensive capabilities. The leader of the turncoats grinned, warning Dunham he would come to regret his decision, appearing as though he was just commencing a genuine engagement. Dunham's gaze was steely and determined as he informed Iho that he had no interest in associating with individuals of his ilk, signaling his utter disinterest in their machinations. The skeletal warrior surged forward, their bony frames clattering as they clashed with the traitors, igniting a chaotic, rapid-fire melee across the arid expanse. One skeletal fighter took a direct impact but pressed onward, emitting a rattling growl, holding its ground against a significantly more formidable adversary. Iho clenched his jaw, recognizing the unexpected strength of the skeletal units, attempting to rationalize it by attributing Dunham's success to sheer luck in acquiring recent power. The confrontation persisted with a whirlwind of action and the clang of colliding weaponry, while Dunham observed from the periphery, meticulously assessing every maneuver. He observed that despite his adversary being a C-rank hunter, The prowess nearly matched a B rank, a significant obstacle for the protagonist. However, a subtle smile played on his lips as he considered this predicament advantageous. Having devised a strategy Iho would certainly not anticipate, Iho chuckled softly, believing he retained absolute command, completely underestimating the resourceful Necromancer. A skeleton moved directly into Iho's personal space, forcing him to acknowledge a critical misjudgment, as the undead proved far more cunning than initially perceived. Iho wonders if their brains took a vacation while they dove into these mystery holes just to stay alive, achieving a pointy surprise to wrap this party up. Dinghoon sports a face like he just saw a ghost tax return, starting a fresh creep in the shadows, letting out a yelp as danger zooms in. A pile of bones catches a nasty case of fist-to-face syndrome from an invisible jerk, making a rattling moan as the plot thickens like bad gravy. Dinghoon absorbs the vibrations of the calcium-crushing blow and winces, confessing that even his boss mode summoner ego felt that wallop, noting this villain isn't just playing dress-up. Iho keeps giggling like a hyena on caffeine, informing Dinghoon that this guy currently staring him down makes a regular stalker look like a fluffy kitten. A spooky dude pops out of the darkness wearing a budget Batman outfit, identified by the game as a top-tier shadow bill killer, proving the universe hates us. Iho glances at the professional murderer and questions if our hero is even worth the effort, doubting a skinny bowed caller deserves such a fancy executioner. The killer gives Dunhan the ultimate stink eye, commenting that for a fellow who apparently tripped over a pile of fortune, he looks remarkably like a wet paper bag. Dunhan is leaking buckets of sweat, admitting he's totally outclassed, since a high-level predator is way out of his league when he struggles with mid-tier scrubs. He squeezes his fist while his brain does a frantic marathon to find an exit, because standing near a legendary slayer is basically an invitation to his own funeral. The luggage carriers are blubbering like babies, saying sorry for dragging him into this disaster, fully convinced the Reaper is about to swipe his scythe across their necks. The young lady weeps openly, questioning what cosmic sins they committed to deserve this, as the vibe gets depressing enough to make a goth person uncomfortable. Dunhan blares with a face as stiff as a frozen steak, pondering if being a weakling is a crime punchable by death, feeling his internal hero meter explode. His knuckles go pale from gripping fingers too tight, as he shouts that quitting is for losers and he plans to rescue everyone, discovering a sudden burst of spicy energy. The kid plants feet firmly between those bone boys and that elite killer, letting violet glows sizzle, determined to scrap until death or pants fall down. The backstabbing chieftain flashes a cucky look, devouring theatrical case like salty snacks. Certain gold medals are fundamentally his. Dunhan flashes a cheeky smile and yells that a high ranker is just a fancy title since he has a secret protector who is much more powerful. Preparing his final trick, Iho raises an eyebrow with genuine curiosity, finding the bluff rather amusing, totally oblivious to the weirdness about to hit the fan. That masked Hitman snorts, informing our boy he lacks any real skills and acts like a lost tourist, certain of finishing things before lunchtime. Without warning, the grumpy ghost of the old master manifests behind him, looking thoroughly bored, while Dunhan pleads for some emergency tips on not dying today. The old man lets out a heady breath, informing his student that no amount of whining will help him beat this dude, which is a pretty garbage motivational speech. He describes it as a total embarrassment that his self-proclaimed student is getting bullied by a bottom-shelf goon, serving up a spicy dish of elderly insults. The killer marches closer, totally unaware of the see-through grandpa hovering nearby, barking at the boy to quit his annoying bell aching. Dunhan screams at the spirit, wondering if the old fossil would enjoy watching his only legacy get squashed like a bug, leaning hard into the emotional blackmail. The master just grumbles, explaining that magic cannot turn a potato into a dragon, acting like a bustle when the boy clearly needs a miracle. The murderer pauses to ask what kind of magical lottery ticket the kid allegedly won, actually wanting to know why everyone is chasing him like he's the last Tarko. Dunhan pauses as a light bulb flickers in his head, telling the masked jerk that the treasure they all crave is currently chilling in his pockets. He eyes the massive sapphire gate of the dungeon, realizing that in this chaotic mess, he actually holds the steering wheel and can steer them all into a ditch. A smug grin spreads over his mouth because he figured out these backstabbers are just pretending to be bosses while they desperately need his pulse to continue. He chuckles to himself, knowing that if he refuses to play along, the little scheme will implode, making him the most expensive guest at this miserable party. The old-timer watches with a sly smirk, realizing this cunning plan is actually working. He's starting to dig his disciple's sneaky brains. Dunhan swivels back to the hitman, inquiring if he truly desires the scoop on fortune, having definitely piqued his curiosity. The killer leans in, admitting he'd be fascinated by a dungeon so nasty even failure couldn't conquer it. He's all ears for the tale. With a faint courteous bow, Dunhan declares he'll spill the beans, naturally, as he is, after all, an A-rank hunter, charming him while hatching a cunning scheme. The assassin muses that this is a sound decision, and Dunhan isn't entirely dense, completely buying the act. But then, Dunhan's demeanor shifts to grim, yet he speaks with a decidedly no-nonsense gaze. He informs the assassin that prior to that, he feels compelled to deal with those scoundrels who betrayed him, aiming his staff directly at Iho and his cronies. He proclaims that until the turncoats are dealt with, this fury and vexation render him incapable of speaking, effectively holding an A-rank assassin hostage for his revenge. Standing stoically with his skeletal entourage, exuding an aura of absolute command, he tells the assassin that if displeased, he's free to depart, folding all the cards with confidence. The assassin is utterly flabbergasted, his eyes wide with the dawning realization he's been outmaneuvered by an A-ranker, managing only a bewildered utterance. The porters gape at Dunhan in sheer astonishment, their faces a tableau of shock and awe. Utterly dumbfounded he'd address an A-ranker so boldly. Dunhan offers a disingenuous, pleasant smile, requesting everyone's understanding, attributing his actions to a peculiar malady that prevents him from tolerating wounded pride, no matter the peril. The assassin simply stares, contemplating Dunhan's machinations, sensing a diabolical intellect behind that seemingly gallows facade. He recognizes that escape is impossible, as the potential windfall is far too tempting to dismiss, Dunhan having ensnared him with his own avarice. He concedes that even a ruse wouldn't dupe the keen perceptions of an A-rank hunter, maintaining a straightforward approach with the assassin while retaining the advantage. Iho bellows from the background, questioning his brother's sanity, incredulous that his assassin sibling would entertain such preposterousness. Dunhan regards the traitor, remarking that he's aware his demise is imminent, having grasped that he's caught within a shadowy guild operation where survival is highly improbable. Iho clenches his jaw, seeing his favorable outcome evaporating, pleading with the assassin for a single opportunity or, failing that, a swift end. The skeletal warriors advance on the traitors, their weapons poised. Iho shrieks for them to halt as the stark reality of facing retribution dawns on him. The assassin finally interjects, commanding Iho to cease his caterwauling, thus aligning himself with Dunhan for the present. He informs Dunhan that he will grant him precisely 30 minutes to conclude his affairs, cautioning that any diversion will result in his swift demise. He fixes Dunhan with a chilling glare, promising him a life of unending torment, an existence where death offers no release, a grim assurance of retribution. He peers intently into Dunhan's very being, inquiring if he grasps the gravity of the situation, to which the Necromancer responds with a resolute nod, prepared to initiate his vengeance. The elite assassin stands regally amidst the devastation, surveying the aftermath with an impassive gaze, granting Dunhan a strict 30-minute window to resolve his conflict, warning that any misstep will invite perpetual, excruciating suffering. Behold that unsettling spiderweb mask, rather chilling, isn't it? He inquires if our protagonist comprehends the magnitude of the situation, and the pressure is undeniably mounting. Dunhan remains unfazed, nodding affirmatively and voicing a resounding confirmation, while Iho sees indignantly in the background. Iho's countenance is a tempest of fury, unable to fathom a mere porter defying him, and he lashes out, demanding if Dunhan genuinely believes he stands a chance. Observe that exchange. The fellow is incandescent with rage, his dagger clenched white-knuckled, poised to dismember Dunhan. Dunhan advances with his skeletal contingent, exuding an air of cool composure, and delivers the classic retort, stating that such knowledge is only attainable through direct experience. The definitive mic drop. Our protagonist turns his attention to his inner mentor, the elder, who decides it's opportune for a dose of practical, real-world tutelage, expressing genuine enthusiasm for substituting rigorous training with a live combat scenario. Glancing at the hitman, Dunhan calculates his moves carefully since he must conserve his energy for the bigger monster looming nearby. The ancient master offers a cheat code to redirect an enemy force against their own chest, achieving maximum carnage with minimal sweat. Dunhan inhales the wisdom with eyes shut tight, offering a quick nod of gratitude before diving back into the mayhem. Violet energy pulses wildly, and with a tight grip on his bony rod, he commands his minions to pulverize the fools. Combat kicks off instantly as the skeletal squad operates like a manic clockwork toy, tossing traitors aside in delightful disarray. The bony wall smacks into Iho with reckless abandon, forcing the poor guy to strain every muscle just to survive the impact. Projectiles streak forward, leaving crimson streaks in their wake while ensuring the enemies have no space to catch their breath. The bad guys are catching a major beatdown, prompting disgruntled grumbles as Dunhan admires his undead army doing the heavy lifting. Iho is throwing a tantrum about the bony intruders, clearly shocked that these working fossils are actually such absolute beasts. Things escalate rapidly when a minion lifts its rod and starts manifesting a spicy ball of pure molten sunshine. Explosion central as the fireball erupts, illuminating the dunes with a display that puts common necromancy to total shame. Traitors shriek as pyro rain falls, completely baffled by how these simple skeletons manage to master high-tier pyrotechnics so easily. One undead warrior refuses to pause, sprinting through the lingering grey haze to keep the heat on his target. Steel meets bone with a sharp ring, leaving the traitor leader gasping for air while wrestling a collection of dusty ribs. The sheer force of the skeleton is brutal, forcing Iho to accept that he made a catastrophic career choice today. Watching his confidence crumble is hilarious, as he mutters salty insults while the battle slips through his panicked fingers. A powerful strike connects solidly, sending the traitor tumbling through the air like a discarded rifle across the sand. The observing assassin feels genuine shock at the polished efficiency displayed by this remarkably high-level skeletal strike team. Even the veteran pro starts dripping with cold sweat, realizing Dunhan might actually secure an improbable victory after all. A strange shift in the atmosphere catches the watcher off guard, causing his hidden eyes to bulge in sudden surprise. A menacing vibe radiates from the tunnel, signaling that the lookout has returned unexpectedly, which seems like a terrible idea. Iho is completely wrecked, spitting out crimson fluids into the grit while knowing his dramatic journey is finally ending. Dunhan strolls toward the fallen traitor with a frosty gaze, clearly enjoying the delicious irony of this complete reversal. Capturing the moment, our hero stands tall over the man who planned his demise as pure, unadulterated visual gold. Iho drags his broken body across the beach like a pathetic crab, begging for a pass despite his early bluster. The mentor grins at the successful warm-up, only to drop the heavy news that the real nightmare begins with the assassin. The killer remains frozen in wait, while the elder warns Dunhan that surviving this next phase requires every ounce of grit. The master urges caution, noting that challenging an elite professional at this stage is essentially a shortcut to the afterlife. Ignoring the danger, Dunhan stares at his bony companions and tells the mentor that he has already bet his soul here. Without warning, the gateway begins to flicker, signaling that an uninvited guest or something even weirder is stepping through. The old guy's jaw dropped, exclaiming that another assassin had crashed the party, leaving Dunhan utterly flabbergasted. With a dramatic palm to his forehead, the elder informed Dunhan he had a surplus of ambition and a deficit of strategy, now facing a considerably larger predicament. The penny dropped for Dunhan with the force of a collapsing building, leaving him frozen as his audacious gamble began to unravel spectacularly. Standing alone amidst the vast emptiness, he felt utterly insignificant and powerless, confessing to himself that his bag of tricks was completely empty. The internal monologue of doubt raged, questioning the sheer audacity and misplaced confidence that propelled him into such a wildly imprudent wager. Observed that trembling hand gripping the staff with white-knuckled intensity, desperately seeking a glimmer of hope that simply refused to materialize. Iho, sprawled on the ground and cackling like a madman, revealed that the Shadow Guild had deployed more than a single senior operative, completely overwhelming our unsuspecting hero. Time to make tracks. Dunhan's feet blurred as he bolted. This curse is a fitting soundtrack of his hasty retreat. He was a blur of panicked motion, glancing back in abject terror, acutely aware of his urgent need to vanish from sight. Pronto. Abruptly, the attackers halted, their faces paling with terror as they shrieked for an immediate evacuation. announcing the arrival of the formidable S-rank monster. Dieserul, Danhan and his skeletal companion appeared utterly bewildered, struggling to process the unbelievable news. And then, as if on cue, the legendary S-rank hunter materialized from a shimmering portal, exuding an aura of pure, unadulterated coolness. Torque about making an entrance. The assassins abandoned all thoughts of their mission, their sole focus now on self-preservation, knowing full well that capture meant swift and utter obliteration. Iho, regaining consciousness on the ground, save with wide-eyed disbelief, stammering out a greeting to his boss as if encountering a specter. He practically howled the word, "Bus," as the overwhelming might of her presence crushed him, turning the hunter into the hunted. A brief, serene shot of the sandy expanse, the hush that precedes a chaotic tempest. Dawn, dripping with nervous sweat, watched the icon in action, finally witnessing firsthand the raw power of a true ranker. The scene shifts to a tranquil panorama of verdant trees beneath a clear blue sky, a welcome respite from the preceding desert pandemonium. Jaizoerul stood calmly by the portal in the forest, peering as though she'd just completed a leisurely stroll rather than a high-stakes rescue. She seemed a tad hesitant, pondering if her intervention was perhaps a bit excessive. But come on, Burl, you just saved a life, you're totally in the clear. The private thought crossed her mind, likening her prolonged pursuit to outright stalking, her fingers tracing the emblem on her gold rank badge, acutely aware of the gravity of her chosen path. Despite the Blue Guild's top-notch intelligence network, this solitary location was the only clue she could unearth, a testament to her relentless quest for answers. Deciding to retreat for the moment, she resolved to grant him space to collect himself and confess the truth at his own pace. The close-up captures her profile as she melts back into the foliage, radiating an undeniable air of mystery. And with that, she vanished into the leafy embrace, leaving the puzzle unsolved for another day. Returning to the desert scene, Iho's knees buckled with sheer dread. He understood with chilling certainty that his time was up. One of the Turcoats was in dire straits, a skeletal adversary advancing as he wailed about not meeting his end there, though the odds suggested otherwise. Another one falters. A swift skeletal blow intercepted a traitor mid-leap, eliciting a final, agonizing cry. Iho's face contorted in a desperate grimace, his survival instincts kicking into overdrive as he declared his intent to endure, his demeanor visibly unhinged. He mused internally about leveraging any available resource, his gaze drifting towards the two concealed female porters amidst the ruins, pinning at a last, desperate, and likely regrettable maneuver. The scorching sun blazed mercilessly upon the ancient desert remnants, setting the stage for what promised to be a truly spectacular, if bone-rattling, final confrontation. From the sweeping vista, you could almost smell the singed sand. Iho, looking less like a leader and more like a human sprinkler, gasped for air as he faced down our hero. He managed a wheezing, scornful chuckle, scoffing about insufficient effort while clearly struggling for his own next breath. With bony combatants clashing all around, Iho smugly believed he had deciphered Donhan's brilliant strategy. He sneered, declaring that since Donhan lacked brute force, he was obviously using those baggage handlers as a diversion. Someone decided it was high time for a hasty exit. We were treated to a close-up of desert boots churning up the dust, a clear signal Donhan was about to drop his next tactical masterpiece. Donhan stood unyieldingly, his trusty skull-capped staff at the ready, completely unfazed by the villain's pathetic torrents. He boomed for Bone 11, summoning yet another surprisingly spry undead soldier into the caves. Bone 11, clearly not one for dilly-dallying, lunged skyward with an impressive clatter of ancient ribs. The blur of movement lines practically screamed just how ridiculously nimble these skeletal recruits had become post-boot camp. Prepare for a truly unexpected ambush. The cunning skeleton managed to catch Iho completely off guard, prompting a rather undignified flinch and a face painted with pure, unadulterated disbelief. It became a full-fledged skeletal mosh pit, as the bony legion swarmed the once confident, now very regretful party leader. Iho shrieked in genuine agony, realizing the sheer numbers game had finally swung dramatically against him. Donhan observed the messy proceedings, his inner monologue taking a distinctly philosophical turn. He posed a rather chilling query to himself, pondering if Iho would have shown mercy had the roles of strength been reversed. The balance of power had shifted dramatically, as Donhan casually strolled towards the utterly deflated antagonist. Iho lay crumpled, packing miserably in the grid, his once inflated ego now utterly flattened. Looming over him with undeniable swagger, Donhan answered his own grim question with a definitive, chilling negative. He grasped that for individuals like Iho, everyone else was merely a convenient tool, easily used then tossed aside. Donhan's expression remained as cold as a forgotten ice cube, while Iho was busy unraveling spectacularly on the unforgiving ground. The backstabber gritted his teeth, simply refusing to comprehend being bested by a mere E-rank adventurer. Iho let out a truly ear-splitting, desperate shriek, calling Donhan a rotter and passionately demanding if he genuinely believed victory could be achieved in such an unsporting fashion. A mighty thudding sound echoed as a boot decisively connected with the sand. This particular impact marked the definitive point of no return for the deceitful, soon-to-be disposed of party leader. A truly savage finishing move unfolded. Crimson spray decorated the landscape as Donhan coolly delivered the final blow to Iho's treacherous reign, his demeanor remaining incredibly serene throughout the messy affair. One of the animated skeletons remained stubbornly locked in fight mode, its eyes glowing with a malevolent purple as it delivered a swift, unexpected jab. These bony fellows really do not quit until their boss gives the signal. Iho found himself unceremoniously dragged through the dusty grit, emitting a truly pathetic, guttural growl. He was a stark and sorry contrast to the swaggering commander we had initially met within this dungeon's depths. The tight shot on the villain's face revealed him utterly consumed by pure, unholy fury. He unleashed one final, despairing howl as the grim, unarguable reality of his utter vanquishment finally hit home. The broad vista showcased Donhan standing tall and imposing amidst the desolate desert fragments. The tiresome skirmish was finally concluded, and the general waste had been efficiently processed. Donhan surveyed the unholy mess with palpable distaste. He labeled Iho as truly wretched scum, exhibiting absolutely no compassion for the fellow who had cheerfully attempted to send them all to an early grave. Iho was practically sniffling on the sandy floor, plaintively questioning why Donhan ever had to cross his path. He was, quite literally, attributing his colossal personal failure to some cosmic conspiracy. Donhan, with a boot crunching pointedly in the sand as he closed the distance, inquired exactly what bizarre narrative Iho was spouting. He was definitely not allowing the villain to pull the classic victim card. He leaned in with a smile that was less friendly and more razor-sharp, smoothly reminding Yeho that he was, in fact, the one who orchestrated Danhan's presence here initially. Oh, the sweet irony of immediate karmic retribution. Yeho was trembling like a leaf caught in a hurricane, practically weeping for a swift termination, declaring he simply could not endure the escalating pressure. He screamed for an immediate death, utterly, irrevocably shattered. Danhan slowly repeated the word kill, his voice dripping with an almost tangible sarcasm. He then glanced pointedly at the nearby sacrifice alto, and you just knew a far more inventive destiny awaited this particular individual. Danhan locked eyes with him, declaring he wouldn't be granted such an easy escape. The shimmering blue energy now swirling around our hero made him look less like a human and more like the actual mailman for the Grim Reaper. Yeho's pupils dilated rapidly as the horrifying realization of his impending doom finally dawned. He sputtered out, "You monster," but by then, vocal objections were as useful as a chocolate teapot. Danhan simply held his hand aloft above the villain, silently invoking his formidable undead energies. It was a truly epic, picture-perfect display of absolute, undeniable dominion. The bony, skeletal hind abruptly erupted from beneath the sand, firmly grasping Yeho's arm. The villain instantly plunged into full-blown panic mode, shrieking questions about the nature of this shocking development. The skeleton effortlessly hauled him skyward as if he were constructed from tissue paper, completely ignoring his frantic, increasingly desperate pleas for release. It was, without question, a genuinely spectacular get-over-here moment. Mr. Skelly commences hauling the backstabber over the dirt toward that sacrificial stone, and boy, Yeho is wiggling like a frantic worm on a hot sidewalk. The rattling pile of ribs hurls him onto the slab with a thud, ensuring Yeho finally lands exactly where his trashy behavior earned him a spot. Danhan looms over the ritual site to explain the logistics, noting that since the big bat requires a pair of warm bodies, Yeho basically just applied for the position. Crimson notifications ping to confirm the offerings, while Yeho looks absolutely fuming upon realizing his clever little scheme has hilariously backfired to become his own tombstone. Turning his back, Danhan confesses he likely would have bailed early if things stayed simple, proving he is less of a cape-wearing saint and more of a practical survivor. He mentions things have shifted while his eyes grow cold, because getting double-crossed tends to really adjust a guy's perspective on how this cruel world actually functions. Radiant beams explode from the table as the ceremony ignites, and Danhan vows to henceforth repay every single favor or insult with equal and very aggressive intensity. He gazes at the mystical vortex wrapping around the defeated jerk with a blank face, delivering some classic justice. Spooky bone summon a flavor, of course. Those two luggage-carrying observers stare in total shock yet feel massive relief, as Danhan promises to return warmth with thanks and cold stabs with even colder vengeance. Red droplets leaking off his weapon really drive home the point that he's totally serious about his new set of lethal rules. Yeho shrieks his lungs out, shouting insults while the glow devours him, but Danhan merely replies he is just cashing in a debt that was long overdue. A sapphire notification window flashes to announce requirements are satisfied, meaning the magic work is done and the big scary exit is ready to swing wide. Giant ashal lasers blast upward as the old lock breaks, painting the ground in glowing runes and signaling that the party is about to get dangerously spicy. Danhan offers a chilly goodbye, suggesting the snakes try being honest people in their next life, while standing tall like a gothic general among his bony bros. Back at the entrance, the Lady Hunter ponders the tardiness of Dronzer, staring at the gate without a single clue about the absolute circus happening right behind it. A view of the Shadow Guild dunes reveals them face-planting in the dunes, having fled in terror over fake rumors of an elite hunter. What a helpful lie. Danhan mops his brow, acknowledging he nearly ended up as a cautionary tale, and admits that the Dronzer misunderstanding really saved his skin from a massive headache. He contemplates the vacant slab, reflecting on how easily he could have been the main course today, a heady realization that only sharpens his inner determination. Without warning, those gargantuan rock gates begin to groan open with a floor-shaking noise, indicating that a very large entity is finally done with its afternoon nap. Danhan whips his gaze toward the opening, sensing an overwhelming amount of raw power leaking out from the inner room like a thick, spooky fog. A digital warning confirms our fears. The prehistoric monarch of scorpions is out, and it is precisely the legendary nightmare everyone has been hyping up. The terrain trembles as a horrific shriek vibrates the walls, with the interface claiming this bug's anger could stab the sky, which sounds like a terrible vibe. Those helpers are vibrating with pure fear, and even the low-level bone squad is stumbling from the monster's oppressive energy, which is definitely not a promising opening. Hold on. A fresh pop-up says all stats just dropped by a fifth simply for showing up, making the skeletons look terrified, which is impressive for soulless monsters. Duncan maintains a calm mask, though secretly he knows this is stressful, as the challenge level just skyrocketed from 0 to hero in 5 seconds flat. The porter is death-gripping his sleeve, subbing while asking for survival guarantees, and she is obviously reconsidering her life choices regarding this very dangerous outdoor excursion. Duncan shoots her a comforting glance, remarking that this mess is still preferable to guild hitmen, since he prefers squashing insects over wrestling with trained human murderers. She questions their safety, so he tells her to just chill out and inhale, attempting to prevent a total brute meltdown before the real brawl even kicks off. All of a sudden, the old man pops up behind him with a cocky chuckle, advising his student to stick to the basics and recall his intense lessons. That senior disses the boss as a pathetic trash-em-up, wondering if Danhan actually requires assistance for such a tiny flea, proving his arrogance is truly celestial. Danhan, you better not mess this up or I'll happily turn you into a stew instead of continuing this training. Danhan shrieked back, clearly frazzled, begging him not to make such grim jokes with that serious expression. The ancient mentor, unbothered, chuckled, asking who was kidding and announced his departure, reminding Danhan to summon him tomorrow, leaving him high and dry at the most inconvenient hour. As the spectral figure began to vanish, Danhan yelled out for the elbow, just as a system notification popped up announcing the skill's imminent expiration, a truly unfortunate turn of events. He hollowed in utter disbelief that the time had already run out, now left standing with a nearly depleted resource as the formidable boss began its advance. He was left utterly alone with his skeletal companions and the trembling porters as the elder completely dissolved into nothingness, the ensuing silence quite unnerving. Out from the shadowy depths of the dilapidated entryway, the colossal Scorpion King emerged, its immense stinger casting a dawning shadow. This creature was truly enormous. The beast's eyes blazed with a malevolent glow, and Danhan came to the stark realization that he was inevitably going to have to confront this terrifying ordeal completely by himself. He clutched his staff with a determined grin spreading across his features, having prepared for this very moment and certainly not intending to back down now. He bellowed a challenge, commanding the beast to come at him, the screen filling with his defiant cry, signaling the imminent commencement of their epic desert confrontation. Danhan stood there, his eyes wide with alarm, as the surrounding desert ruins began to violently shake, a palpable sense of impending doom radiating from the scene. The skeletons were adopting their battle stances, their weaponry clanking as they braced for the onslaught, the visual cues emphasizing the incredible speed these bony warriors could muster when under extreme duress. An unnerving quiet emanated from the dark portal, evoking that unsettling stillness often experienced just before a violent storm, a prelude that usually ended in utter destruction. Danhan's expression revealed his bewilderment as he contemplated the possibility of a subterranean attack, an unexpected twist that caught him entirely off guard, a truly unpleasant surprise indeed. Danhan yelled for reinforcement as a colossal beam of violet energy shot forth from his skeletal mage, deploying an air shield to prevent anyone from becoming impromptu desert snacks. He directed his remaining forces to spread out and establish a defensive formation, attempting to impose some order before the main adversary made its dramatic appearance. The skeletons advanced with a sharp clatter, the shields raised and ready, forming a miniature bulwark of destruction amidst the sandy terrain. One unfortunate skeleton found its face unceremoniously buried in the sand as the ground directly beneath its feet began to fracture, the visual bubble indicating its utter confusion. Mirroring its masters, with a loud crack, the ancient stonework beneath them started to splinter, a clear indication that something substantial was about to breach the surface. A thunderous boom accompanied the eruption of a gargantuan scorpion claw from the fractured floor, accompanied by a horrifying shriek. It was immense, menacing, and decidedly not here for pleasantries. Danhan, sweating profusely, recognized that the monstrosity had completely bypassed his front line and targeted skeleton number 3 at the rear, prompting him to question if the creature possessed actual sentience, a rather unnerving thought. The scorpion's crimson eyes burned with a homicidal luminescence, its predatory gaze fixed on the rear ranks, instilling palpable anxiety in everyone present. Another skeletal warrior was caught in the monster's swift lunge, struggling desperately to maintain its footing amidst the chaotic onslaught. A deafening shriek reverberated as the ancient desert scorpion king revealed its terrifying visage, peering as though it feasted on high-ranking adventurers for its daily sustenance. Danhan issued a command to Bone 4, summoning additional skeletal reinforcements, their bony structures rattling with anticipation as they prepared to engage the colossal insect pit. Bone 4 activated its basic torn ability, emitting a vibrant purple aura, causing the scorpion to emit a perplexed growl as its focus shifted. It shrieked once more, clearly agitated by the mockery from a mere collection of bones, its fury surpassing the intensity of the desert heat. Danhan exclaimed its approach, observing the colossal tail sweep through the air, highlighting the sheer immensity of the creature against the backdrop of the ancient ruins. With a resounding clang, Bone 4 executed a basic block maneuver, successfully deflecting a massive pincer strike, a true testament to brute force versus the resilience of bone. Danhan's face brightened with a confident smirk as he witnessed the successful deflection, sensing the opportune moment to shift the momentum and seize the offensive. This is it. He tightened his grip on his staff, his knuckles turning an alarming shade of white, ready to channel all his remaining energy into this decisive surge. The bony lads glanced toward their leader, eagerly awaiting the go-ahead, the little punctuation mark suggesting they're prepped for whatever wild scheme he's cooked up. Danhan bellows out a command, dialing the drummer out to 11, and even the bonehead seemed focused with his wicked purple peepers. Charge! Fiery orbs and sharp projectiles start whizzing about as the whole crew unleashes a magical and physical fury upon the big bad, the spiky critters getting absolutely pummeled, flames bursting from its shell, while the speedy sound effects confirm the relentless barrage. Danhan's got the glint in his eye that says sheer numbers always triumph in a good old-fashioned slugfest, opting for brute force over finesse. The beast emits a wretched shriek as its life bar plummets, its illuminated eye showing the growing distress. Wham! A colossal downward smash from one of the skeletal warriors, the visual effects and shrieks emphasizing the painful impact. The skeleton soldiers are practically pirouetting around the enormous foe, landing their blows with surgical accuracy. Impressive choreography for animated corpses. Danhan observes that while it's a sturdy adversary, his offensive maneuvers are clearly proving effective, remaining composed as the boss struggles to stay upright. A rather startling spray of emerald ichor erupts as the scorpion sustains significant harm. A rather dewy skirmish where our hero is clearly gaining the upper hand. He roars at them that survival is irrelevant, the sole objective being to keep hammering away. Danhan channeling his inner drill sergeant to push his troops beyond their breaking point. A quick peek at his stats reveals his stamina has dipped to a mere 50%, a rapid depletion of energy, but he's far from throwing in the towel. A broad, slightly unhinged grin spreads across his face, thinking that as long as his mana reserves can conjure more minions, he's pretty much invincible. The quintessential Necromancer boast. The skeletal reinforcements are now radiating an impressive azure glow, appearing more like seasoned warriors than mere summoned beings, truly the ultimate defensive and offensive unit. The scorpion lets out a final, piercing wail as a bony appendage firmly grips its head, a rather savage maneuver in the midst of the arid expanse. The notification chirps, announcing the activation of the awakened skeleton summon ability, a swirl of violet light illuminating the interface as Bone 1 returns for round 2, significantly taxing Danhan's mana but well worth the reinforcements. The scorpion's prior outcry transforms into a questioning squeak, visibly bewildered as the momentum of the conflict dramatically shifts against it. The skeletal legion charges forward like an unstoppable tide, their footfalls churning up clouds of sand, advancing to deliver the final blow. Danhan orchestrates their movements like a master strategist in a real-time strategy game, calling out for Bone 1 and Bone 2 with an intensely focused commander's gaze. A formidable pincer maneuver narrowly misses a skeleton, a breath-holding moment of near disaster. The skeletons leap forward with their weaponry, the visual cues of their motion slicing through the atmosphere, now targeting the creature's vulnerable areas. Encircled by his opponents, the scorpion endures a relentless barrage of strikes, creating a dizzying spectacle that is essentially a gastronomic event for the monsters. The final, agonizing yell signifies the boss's imminent demise as it begins to disintegrate, the crimson backdrop indicating the conclusive end for the desert's reigning monarch. One final, decisive impact rings out with a resounding crunch, a geyser of viscous green fluid erupting as the formidable creature is finally silenced. Dunham releases a deep breath, observing the lingering dust motes as they settle, looking rather disheveled but still standing resolutely amidst the devastation. A celebratory chime sounds. The ancient desert scorpion sovereign has been vanquished. He jubilantly raises his arms and declares victory, his skeletal retinue striking triumphant poses. He's utterly spent. His stamina has dwindled to a pathetic 10%, a testament to pushing his limits to the absolute brink. He gazes at the monster's remains, reflecting on how perilously close he was to becoming the defeated one. A few more moments and his mana, along with his chances, would have evaporated. An avalanche of notifications floods his screen, indicating significant stat boosts and skill advancements for Bone 1 and Bone 2, a truly massive experience point windfall. He exclaims that every single one of his skeleton's levels has increased, a proud paternal glow radiating from his face, and as expected from a C-rank boss, the rewards are exceptionally substantial. A message pings that the dusty old Sting King's juice box was located. Dunhan's eyeballs twinkle at the prize. He yells out naturally. He points at the neon square, digits ready to click the take it button. The specific flash is why people spend coins on pixels. Loot secured. The scorpion boss's spicy stone arrives. The violet rock dances in his palm with dark vibes. He wonders if it's junk for tools. The manual lists dozens of lethal toxins for weapons or talents. Quite a flexible price for such a crusty desert crawler. Scully Jr. starts rattling its teeth like a lawnmower. Eye sockets beam in bright limelight. It clearly sees some bone treats nearby. Dunhan stares at it with zero clues, wondering why his pile of ribs acts like a starving canine at the kitchen table. Screen warnings flash like crazy. The guy basically found the secret win button and the jackpot sign lights up the room. The computer mentions a rare chance to unlock toxic archery. It demands a rank D ingredient but he grabbed a grade C instead. Our hero is staggered. Chuck that spells open up this way, discovering the true depth of his broken class's weird secrets. He hollers that the dark boss guy's obsession makes sense now, staring at the jewel while planning his rise, agreeing to learn the new buff. Violet sparks jump from the trinket into his bone buddy, sparking an instant boost. The archer skeleton just received a major revamp. A shiny Bravo sign appears for finishing the map. Rishes fall in honey-colored beams. He finally leaves that sandy hellhole behind. Dunhan keeps his eyes shut while absorbing the win. His stance is fixed as he waits to see what fresh maps await his boots. He stands under trees near the cave entrance, blue atmosphere looking raw to crisp, simple rap to a totally crazy shift. The carrier stands there with knees visibly moving, her face pointed toward the floor. She speaks in a very low tone while clutching gear. Both helpers exhibit ordery eyes, offering multiple quick bows toward Dunhan, their mouths moving quickly as they gesture at the hot sandy waste. Orca lowers her head in a deep arc. Dunhan exposes his teeth slightly and gestures forward, advising them to observe their future travel leaders closely. He moves his arm back and forth as the group leaves, their voices fading in the distance as he remains among the still trees. He extends his fingers and a huge shine blooms. His eyes are held open quite wide while he prepares to view the new objects. A tap announces he found the desert mark, a grade B relic from a grade C pit, truly an efficient haul for his stash. Victory icons sparkle gold on the heads-up display. The man successfully grabbed the desert trace after wrestling that oversized sandbook. Intense beams burst from his fingers, vibrating with old vibes. His head tilts as he inspects the sparkly floating thing. The beam dies down to show a carved gold tool over his hand. Dunhan's eyebrows arch up. He has not held a shiny reward like this. He holds the tool close to see tiny etched shapes, asking himself if it functions as a typical key or something more complex. A fresh screen reveals the stats, describing a tool that pops open dusty ruins and leads right to a different spooky basement. It is confirmed to be a chain portal. Dunham realizes this metal scrap beats armor any day. It is basically a VIP pass to mayhem. The obsidian locks of hair flutter in the wind. A figure moves through the branches. The surrounding air feels significantly heavier now. A known silhouette steps from behind an oak, wearing combat boots. Someone says it would be grand if someone detailed the events. Dunham pivots his head around with wide lids, knowing that specific vocal pitch instantly. It is none other than the famous Ysoil. The specific female warrior is visible now, standing still in her gray armor plates. She keeps her eyes narrowed and fixed directly onto him. She fidgets while admitting it has been quite a while, noting that his recent dungeon grind seems to have polished his act and prompted her surprise visit. Dunhan is utterly floored, his jaw nearly bruising the grass as he wonders why an elite ranker would bother hunting him down. Behind him, one of his bony companions mimics his confused swaying, leaving Dunhan internally screaming about the right things to say. He is sweating like a sinner in church, debating whether to offer a white lie or just stick to the truth, which is definitely the boss move. A quick glance at her sharp dagger reminds him that getting caught in a fit would be a shortcut to a very bad day. Soil remains perfectly poised and patient, clearly waiting for him to break the silence and make his next play. Dunhan swallows his fear and decides that honesty is the best policy, especially when dealing with a high-stakes S-rank powerhouse. Prepping the golden key, he realizes his rookie status leaves him clueless, so he aims to secure a partnership before his luck runs dry. He gazes at her with newfound grit, choosing to seize this intimidating opportunity rather than letting it slip through his fingers. Working toward her with purpose, he offers to share the secrets of his dungeon clear and the loot he managed to snag. He halts right before her, locking eyes with intent as he prepares to spill the details with one spicy catch. Leaning in with grave seriousness, he sets a firm condition, which is a pretty bold way to haggle with a legendary warrior. His jaw set, he delivers the ultimatum, showing that he is no longer just a mere porter but a man with a plan. Soil looks genuinely baffled, blinking like a confused kitten while repeating the word condition, as if the concept of being challenged is brand new. He demands protection until he hits his stride, pinning that certain pests from the Shadow Guild have been breathing down his neck. She contemplates his words and invites him to continue. sensing there is more to this guy than just a simple escort request. He brandishes a golden key, hoping she might impart some wisdom about this mystery item if it does not prove too taxing for her. Her eyes widen at the sight of the prize, and she gasps in disbelief, wondering if he is actually holding a real catalyst. Dunhan is floored by her intense reaction, realizing this trinket might be far more legendary than his amateur brain ever imagined. Closing the distance, she fixates on the key and asks if it dropped in a dungeon, to which she can only manage a shell-shocked nod. Soil lets out a hollow, bitter chuckle at his absurd luck, noting that finding a catalyst in a common dungeon is statistically impossible. As a key pulses with light, she mentions they are ultra-rare global treasures, bound permanently to the owner and impossible to auction off. Standing beside his clattering skeleton crew, Dunhan looks dazed, still struggling to process that he hit the jackpot. She explains that a catalyst is a gateway to exclusive quests, generously offering him the kind of pro tip that money cannot buy. Flashes of glowing artifacts and shimmering gems fill the screen, emphasizing that these catalysts are basically the holy grail of items. Dunhan practically loses his mind, asking if it is truly S-rank, to which she confirms that even top-tier hunters hunt these until they drop. Her gaze turns unreadable and heavy, and suddenly the sheer gravity of his discovery starts hitting them both like a freight train. She pauses, then nods with steely resolve, officially agreeing to his terms. It seems our hero just hired a legendary bodyguard. Relief washes over him and he beams, double-checking her commitment as if he just cashed in a winning lottery ticket. The mood shifts instantly as Soil turns icy, pointing a stern finger at him to deliver a final, chilling warning. She mentions he has her own quirky terms, her intense gaze suggesting she is gearing up to drop a massive favor on him. We skip to a futuristic urban high-rise after dark, where some mysterious figure is punching a secret code into a lock. The latch clicks open to reveal a cramped flat where Dunhan and Soil shuffle in, officially marking their arrival at his humble abode. Soil surveys the messy space with a skeptical arch of her brow, making it crystal clear she is not exactly blown away by the decor. Pointing at a graveyard of noodle cups, she mucks the state of his pad, while a mortified Dunhan regrets ever inviting her inside. Soil sticks to her guns, claiming a deal is a deal, while Dunhan scrambles around like a madman trying to bury his dirty laundry. She scans the room like a tactical sensor, declaring the area clear of bugs or threats, clearly taking this bodyguard did way too seriously. Dunhan watches her scope out the place, only for her to announce she is camping on the roof to keep watch over his sorry hide. Dazed by her departure, he listens as she shouts back a reminder for him to ping her when his training session kicks off tomorrow. The front door slams shut, leaving Dunhan stranded in his pathetic living quarters, still struggling to process his bizarre new life. He flops onto his mattress, completely wiped out and lost in a whirlwind of thoughts regarding the chaotic events of the day. Back in the woods, Soil had insisted on hovering over his workouts, a truly bizarre obsession for someone of her high status. Dunhan had stared back blankly, failing to grasp why an elite S-rank powerhouse would care about his pathetic, low-tier practice routines. She claimed to have tracked his surging ores since that dungeon crawl, noting his power levels were spiking faster than a crypto bubble. Her eyes glinted with predatory curiosity, dying to know exactly how he had managed to hack his way to such insane strength. In the now, Dunhan exhales, having already spilled the beans about his lucky break, sharing almost every detail of his secret growth. Gazing blankly at the wall, he frets over his new partnership, knowing the true identity of his ancient master remains his sole burden. A phantom image of his grizzled mentor flickers through his mind, and Dunhan finally grasps the gravity of his strange new path. Millions of repetitive drills and grueling physical trials form the foundation of a combat style that puts modern martial arts to shame. Standing before the window, he catches his own tired reflection and the weight of his remaining problems crashes down on him. The ominous shadow of the assassin guild looms in his thoughts, forcing him to accept that a violent confrontation is inevitable. His face hardens into a mask of pure steel, ready to pay back every insult with interest to anyone brave enough to challenge him. Without warning, a crushing gravity slams him onto his furniture, signaling that his demonic mentor has arrived for an oral workout. Dunhan wheezes under the suffocating, invisible weight, fighting to stay awake while the immense pressure tries to crush his spirit. The master looms overhead, looking bored as he mucks Dunhan for whining while pointing out that his physique is finally toughening up. Zooming in on the master's smug face, we wait for more cryptic advice or perhaps another swift kick to his ribs for good measure. A shockwave of blue energy launches Dunhan into the wall, followed by a casual remark that the drills are about to get significantly deadlier. Scrambling to stand, Dunhan screams about assault, while the nonchalant master simply yawns, clearly earning the title of worst teacher ever. The old man narrows his eyes into icy slits, implying that the true nightmare is just starting and he is fresh out of patience. Insulted by the accusation of violence, the master clarifies that his painful techniques are actually a professional massage, albeit a very brutal one. D gets right up in Dunhan's face, checking if he's ready for the next level of agony, and our guy is totally freaking out, practically begging for a 5-minute breather he's clearly not gonna get. Way in the back, we see the old geezer practically tossing Dunhan around like a deflated balloon while B-Soil watches from the trees, keeping mum but definitely judging the utter pandemonium. All that torment is actually paying off big time, because the system pops up with the most excellent news ever. His pain resistance has hit C rank, and he even snagged the B rank version during the same brutal session. Dunhan spread eagled on the ground, crumbling and shaking from the physical beatdown, having survived another round but looking like he's about to hit the eternal snooze button. D-Soil eyes him with her usual poker face, one hand on her hip, having seen plenty of wild stuff as a ranker, but this particular training regimen is on a whole other planet of nope. She looms over the groaning protagonist, contemplating how many times he's witnessed this spectacle without it becoming normal. Genuinely baffled he endures this daily beatdown. Dunhan has a bit of a light bulb moment. Even though he spilled his guts to Soil about nearly everything, she still can't actually perceive the weird old dude standing right there. It's a pretty trippy visual showing Soil and the elder, occupying the same exact spot but with her being totally oblivious to him, making Dunhan look like he's just wrestling with thin air and gravity. The elder, not one to let his pupil mope, bellows at him to get moving again, reminding him there are still a solid 30 minutes of instruction left. Dunhan grudgingly accepts with a tired yes, knowing he must push past his breaking point to ascend, refusing to stay down when there's still power to be snatched up. It's also time for the bony squad to get their reps in. Yesterday Bone 3 leveled up, but today the focus is on Bone 4, whose eyes now gleam with a fresh intensity. Dunhan observes his summoned minions with laser focus, noticing the constant improvement, but he knows the real challenge is matching the pace or getting left in the dust. He pulls up his personal status screen, taking a moment to marvel at the epic list of abilities he's collected, having done from a nobody to a somebody at warp speed. We get a quick reel of the high-end Bone skills in action, slash, seb, shoot, and block, transforming his skeletal crew into a flexible fighting force with no weak links. The mage skeleton unleashes a colossal burst of purple energy, looking downright terrifying, and Dunhan realizes that aside from these magical tricks, he's basically conquered everything the Elder has thrown at him. He figures out that to progress further and learn the skeleton's elite moves, they'll need to master the art of Kai manipulation, the final missing piece of the puzzle. The ground is crisscrossed with training circles and marked stances, a testament to the hard labor involved. This isn't just about magic, it's about countless hours of practicing martial arts. The Elder gestures him over, announcing it's time for a lotus position sit, and his surprisingly serene demeanor usually signals that the mental training is about to be way tougher than the physical stuff. Dunhan settles into his position, but the Elder immediately lays into him, stating that mere sitting isn't enough and he needs to properly recite the taking heart method he learned previously. The Master emphasizes it's not about rote memorization, but about truly concentrating and feeling the ethereal energy flow through his very being. We get a close-up of Dunhan shutting out the external noise and diving into a deep meditative state, searching for that minuscule flicker of Kai buried beneath his utter exhaustion. A subtle swirl of azure energy begins to coalesce around his head as he focuses, finally beginning to connect with the world's foundational power. The Elder stresses the paramount importance of breathing in the technique, warning that if Dunhan can't sense the energy while laying this groundwork himself, his deceased warriors will never reach their zenith. Dunhan's visibly straining, the drop of sweat tracing a path down his face as he questions his own capability, the creeping tendrils of self-doubt starting to take hold. He understands failure isn't an option. If he can't keep up, the Elder will deem him untalented and resort to a more forceful technique to achieve results, implying many more painful massages are on the horizon. He lets out a lengthy exhale, resolving that as long as he can get stronger, will endure absolutely anything, finding himself enveloped by a swirling vortex of Kai as he synchronizes with its rhythm. A radiant orb of cerulean light materializes in his grasp as he wills himself to persevere, finally transcending the rudimentary porta stage and entering the domain of true masters. The scene shifts to the city at night, apartment buildings aglow beneath the moon. It appears tranquil, yet the sinister shadow guild is undoubtedly lurking somewhere within its darkened corners. D-Soil is perched atop a roof her tactical outfit looking sharp against the nocturnal backdrop, faithfully upholding her promise to keep watch over Dunhan while he slumbers. She gazes down towards Dunhan's residence, contemplating how she's effectively become the student of that peculiar old man, a most peculiar pairing of a rancor and a spectral entity. The memory of her own time in the dungeon flooded back, a grim highlight reel of blood and countless tortures inflicted by the Elder. She recognized the sheer agony Dunhan was enduring. She let out a heavy, contemplative sigh, considering the truly dreadful nature of the whole situation. She felt a complicated blend of admiration and sympathy for her protege. Her thoughts drifted to Dunhan's excruciating regimen, recalling the sickening crunch of bones being relined and reconstructed by the Elder's techniques. The kid definitely possessed an iron will to withstand it. Her hand tightened on the rooftop railing, accepting that intervention would be pointless. She decided to keep observing from afar, eager to witness the ultimate outcome of this agonizing transformation. The powerful silhouette of the Elder reminds us that he was once an unbeatable master, besting every challenger who stood against him. He represents the pinnacle of power and a terrifying standard for success. So, watching Dunhan's development might just provide the motivation she needs to shatter her own personal ceiling. She discovered a fresh purpose for remaining close to him. The scene shifts to Dunhan's quarters, where he lies completely flattened on the bed, staring blankly upward. He resembles a survivor emerging from a violent conflict zone. He contemplates his potential for future development, possibly muttering to himself. Though completely depleted and covered in perspiration, a flicker of true exhilaration shines in his gaze. The narrative shifts locations. Simultaneously, we arrive at the Shadow Guild's headquarters. We venture into the core of the adversary's stronghold to uncover their sinister plans. A deep crimson liquid fills an elegant crystal doublet. Someone is definitely celebrating, and based on the atmosphere, it isn't the hearers. The guild leader questions whether the assassin truly requires additional help merely because of a single woman. He seems highly suspicious that Gi-Soryol poses such a significant danger. The leader's features remain obscured in darkness as he anticipates a response. It's clear he has absolutely zero patience for excuses or shortcomings. The desert assassin kneels on the ground, dripping with anxiety, and responds with a booming affirmative. He understands just how fortunate he is to have survived the previous assignment. Introducing the villain, Nick Jekin, the mastermind behind the Shadow Build operations. He holds world ranking 92 and goes by the nickname Hellhound. His character screams impending doom. Jekin gazes through the window pane, conceding that this whole issue should have been resolved before Gi-Soryol increased her involvement. He's frustrated that a straightforward task devolved into a complex political debacle. He lightly drums his fingers on the surface of the desk. He questions whether this particular opportunity possesses enough force to grant someone mastery over a rancor. The assassin argues that the simple detail of a meticulous individual like Soryol showing interest validates the target's importance. He is pulling out all the stops to persuade the boss of the target's value. Jekin considers that the potential reward seems highly alluring, his face mirroring in the surface of the wine glass. The Shadow Build has officially decided to commit fully to tracking down their new prey. He snaps his fingers sharply, summoning his secretary into the room. He is prepared to take action immediately. A woman with long, dark hair and an ominous presence steps forward into the illumination. Jekin requests the Shadow Build's current calendar, checking for a free slot to fit in a quick assassination. She informs him that the subsequent 30 days are completely full, causing the leader to momentarily hesitate. Apparently, even a top-tier A-rank guild keeps a pact agenda. Jekin pauses in consideration, stroking his chin thoughtfully. He inquires once more about the supposed rank of this Dunhan character. The assassin mumbles E rank in response, appearing somewhat embarrassed by the confession. He recognizes the absurdity of an A-rank organization struggling against such an insignificant mercenary. Jekken rises to his feet, comprehending that the target possesses significant potential for development. He views this as either a possible long-term investment or an extremely bothersome loose thread. He instructs his secretary to empty his appointments once the month concludes. He proclaims he will personally go assess the situation, adopting the tone of a hungry beast on the hunt. A tight shot of his lips reveals a sinister, broken smile. Nick Jekken has set his sights on Dunhan, guaranteeing that events are about to turn extremely violent. Under the bright sun again, Dunhan finishes a push-up set, loudly tallying the repetitions. He is certainly acquiring the muscular transformation he worked so hard to achieve. Soyul sits nearby on a stone, keeping track of his count. She yells out the final number, performing the duties of his dedicated fitness coach. Dunhan roars the count as he forces himself upward for the ultimate repetition, every fiber of his being shaking under the strain. He drops onto the turf with a joyful chuckle, completely wiped out but clearly content. He recognizes that real improvement is happening, and it feels great. Soyul looms over him, her demeanor shifting to one of grave importance, and with a call of his name, she instantly has his undivided attention. He glances up from the floor, a bewildered expression plastered on his face, having hoped for a celebratory high-five rather than a serious heart-to-heart. The camera zooms in on her sturdy footwear as he advances deliberately, signaling the end of the training and the commencement of a much weightier discussion. Soyul gazes at him, her expression hinting at a final resolution, and announces that she has something crucial to impart, a revelation that promises to alter everything. Soyul's features are enigmatic as she begins to converse, stating she has a piece of information to convey, her voice laced with an air of solemnity and tension. Locking eyes with Dunhan, she brings to mind the vow she previously articulated, inquiring if he recalls her pledge to shield him from any assaults until he possessed greater prowess. The scene transitions to her solitary figure perched atop a rooftop under the nocturnal sky, projecting an image of cool heroism, yet she confesses that constant vigilance over him is quite taxing. Dunhan emits a somewhat sheepish chuckle, peering a tad guilty, utterly unprepared for a top-tier ranker to interpret her bodyguard duty with such extreme literalness. Crossing her arms, Soyul inquires how she can possibly safeguard him if she isn't perpetually observing him, a valid point that nonetheless causes Dunhan to break out in a nervous sweat. He reminds her that she's a ranker with her own dungeons to conquer and build responsibilities to manage, essentially implying she has far more significant tasks than playing his personal guardian. Soyul confesses that she's been keeping tabs on him for roughly a fortnight, admitting she's even let her own guild duty slide to closely monitor his advancement. Holding up 2 digits, she presents him with a decision, explaining that she still has commitments and he has a pair of paths from which to select. She elaborates that her initial selection requires him to shadow her for 6 hours, her fingers still aloft, while the alternative involves utilizing the key, the artifact he acquired after conquering the dungeon previously. Dunhan expresses surprise, echoing the word key, having completely overlooked that B-rank treasure from his desert expedition. The dazzling golden effulgence flares as he accesses the item's details, revealing the spectral outline of the ancient desert within the interface, pulsing with an enigmatic energy. The complete item description is presented, identifying it as a gateway to deciphering the mysteries of a concealed domain, capable of unlocking the dungeon, the ancient desert, and uniquely linked to Dunhan. Soyul clarifies that, due to its personalized nature, it will manifest as a solitary dungeon, positing that it might be more secure for him within a realm inaccessible to other powerful contenders. Dunhan contemplates the gleaming golden key in his grasp, a worried furrow in his brow, questioning if an enclosed B-rank dungeon wouldn't inherently pose greater peril. Soyul flashes a sharp, confident smirk, clearly contemplating a revelation that has yet to dawn on Dunhan. She simply responds with a dismissive not really, her intense gaze fixed on him, burning with unspoken implications. She informs him that he likely hasn't even registered the extent of his own growth, observing a palpable shift in his energy and might that eludes his own perception. Offering encouragement, she suggests it presents an excellent chance to assess his current capabilities, genuinely believing he's adequately prepared for a B-rank solo endeavor. Dunhan is left to ponder, musing that receiving praise from a recognized ranker is a monumental boost to his self-assurance. He reflects on his past as an unacknowledged abnormal necromancer, consistently relegated to the status of a mere E-rank porter, making the current validation profoundly impactful. An image of his former E-rank insignia drifts in the darkness, and he internally marvels at receiving recognition, the unspoken words resonating in the vast emptiness. Soyul offers a subtle, knowing smile, content that her words have evidently resonated with the young man. Dunhan clutches the golden key with unwavering resolve, murmuring that it is indeed a sound proposition, his expression hardening with purpose. He looks up with a determined grin, informing her that he'll opt for the second choice, fully prepared to confront whatever lies ahead. Soyul appears gratified, stating she had anticipated his selection and inquiring if he intends to embark on his quest without delay. Dunhan points out that there's absolutely no logical reason for procrastination, having already completed his morning exercises and thus being sufficiently warmed up and primed for action. Soyul suggests channeling her power into the key to get it going, a bit like a seasoned tour guide explaining how to unlock a new adventure zone. Dunhan extends his hand, and the key suddenly sparks to life with a dazzling, radiant gleam, golden energy twirling around his fingers like a magical hula hoop. The light is so blinding he has to squint, but he keeps the power flowing. Clearly, this whole energy-infusing gig is a bit of a workout. A digital bulletin appears, inquiring if he'd like to activate the trace of the ancient desert, with the next pop-up confirming it's the gateway to the ancient desert dungeon. The surrounding forest is bathed in a soft, cold blue glow as the portal begins to materialize, accompanied by a floating warning about a solo dungeon adventure. Dunhan glances back with a confident smirk, calling out to his trusty, legendary bodyguard that he'll be right back, promising a swift return. Soyul offers a small nod and a smile, watching him depart, clearly harboring high expectations for his upcoming quest. A spectacular explosion of golden and white light engulfs the screen as Dunhan is whisked away. Quite the dramatic exit for a solo mission. His boot makes a solid thud as it lands, kicking up a tiny puff of dust. The landing zone appears perfectly stable. Glancing up, he realizes he's landed in a completely unfamiliar setting, his jaw dropping as he mutters in astonishment. Far in the distance, an enormous pyramid dominates the desert horizon, and a notification confirms his arrival in the ancient desert and the discovery of the majestic pyramid. A swirl of purple energy surrounds him as he braces himself, keenly aware that a B-rank dungeon isn't to be trifled with. The system chimes in with news of an awakened skeleton, helpfully announcing that his squad is en route to provide backup. His entire army materializes in a flash of purple and blue magic, skeletons armed with shields and spears clanking as they assume their strategic positions. Danhan begins a steady march towards the pyramid's entrance, advising himself to take it slow, logically assuming the main threat lurks within. He issues a command to maintain formation and follow him, channeling his inner commander rather than just a fighter in a pickle. One of the skeletons gives a decisive nod, its eye sockets glowing with an intense purple light, ready to sacrifice itself once more for its master. Danhan reminds himself that as mere D-rankers, they're likely too weak for this formidable B-rank challenge, keeping his ego in check despite the impressive display. He clenches his gloved fist, resolving that they must fight with the cunning of the weak, a strategy relying on sheer numbers and precision over brute force. They step into a shadowy chamber illuminated by a soft blue light, the transition abrupt and slightly eerie. Danhan surveys the quiet room with heightened alertness, surprised by the conspicuous absence of any monsters guarding the entrance. He quips that was surprisingly simple with a slight grin, feeling like he stumbled upon an easy win, though we all know that luck rarely holds out in a dungeon. Abruptly, a loud thud reverberates through the hall as a boot strikes the floor, and the surroundings begin to warp. Danhan dazes around, bewildered, as a blue system message pops up, revealing a surprising link between the dungeon and Hunter Danhan's specialized skills. His expression twists into one of sheer disbelief as the next message appears. The dungeon is actively transforming, and escape is impossible. Talk about a wicked trap. The chamber is now lit by a dim, flickering glow, Danhan and his skeletal troops looking thoroughly unnerved as the pyramid begins to twist and reform. The colossal thud echoes as a heavy stone wall slams shut behind them, officially sealing them in. Danhan grunts as a sudden surge of dark energy washes over them, the skeletal soldiers being forcibly shoved back by the sheer power of the transformation. Brilliant blue flames erupt in the background as the dungeon's true, formidable nature begins to reveal itself, a breathtaking and terrifying spectacle of raw magical force. Danhan lets out a yell as he's nearly thrown off balance, the sheer pressure and intensity within the pyramid having just escalated dramatically. He performed an involuntary floor routine, vibrating intensely from the pressure. A groan escaped him, confirming the realization that he'd bitten off way more than he could chew. Pushing himself off the floor, his hands quivered into grime. He scoffed at his past self, who entered with such unfounded bravado just to land in this mess. Peering into the murky abyss, his expression turned grim. He deduced that reverse was not an available beer, so the only option was to accelerate forward. He hollered for Boney 3, his designated skeleton marksman. It was time for some preemptive scouting, preventing them from stumbling into a surprise party in the pitch black. He squeezed his fist tight once more, grateful that his skeletal crew had tagged along for the ride. They were, hilariously, his only insurance plan against total annihilation. He issued the directive for an initial environmental survey. He was desperately attempting to stick to a rational strategy while his internal monologue screamed in pure terror. Bon had three-stepped ahead and deployed the secure vision technique. A tremendous pulse of sapphire light blasted from its cranium, brightening the previously dark hallway completely. Danhan shielded his pupils from the glare, discerning an expansive opening at the corridor's conclusion. Success. The first waypoint on the how not to die immediately tour had been identified. He started trudging toward the luminescence, his footwear establishing a steady rhythm on the floor. He paused to question whether blindly following the light was truly the wisest decision. He repeated the mantra that retreat was off the table, so forward progress was mandatory. He marched on with his bony entourage, a tiny spotlight in a cabin of overwhelming gloom. They stumbled into a colossal cabin where a radiant, vortex-like azure sun hovered weightlessly. The magnitude of the scene literally stole the air from his lungs. Danhan immediately threw up his hands to block the blinding radiance. He managed only to babble incoherently, completely stupefied by the visual marvel. A system prompt appeared, labeling the location stage, resentment of the Sunspear. This was essentially confirmation that he had just wandered directly into the major villain's personal playground. The colossal spear composed of dazzling white and sapphire energy materialized dead center in the room. The objective was straightforward, circumvent all obstacles and grab the shiny new Sunspear. Without warning, the earth began vibrating powerfully. Danhan let out a high-pitched squeak as a behemoth began surfacing from the stones. The solo adventure in existential dread had officially commenced. We transition into a bleak memory, where downpour soaks a cold, unforgiving urban landscape. The mood is immediately grim and heavy, establishing the necessary prerequisites for a truly miserable origin story. A shadowy character hunches in the relentless rain, letting out ferocious, animalistic growls. The steady drumming of water on the cobblestones creates an atmosphere thick enough to slice with a knife. Black plumage erupts in every direction as a brutal strike lands. The subsequent crimson streaks confirm this was less of a scratch and more of a severe alteration of anatomy. The individual sporting the substantial mustache is paralyzed with fear, bellowing about a monster at the top of his lungs. He genuinely looks like he's staring at his worst fears manifested in reality. The mother erupts in fury, calling the target a disgusting, inferior beast. They vociferously demand the half-breed drop dead, showcasing just how charmingly empathetic people can truly be. We see a hand gripping a staff tightly, knuckles white, while blood splatters the scene. The narration darkens considerably, revealing that some folks tried to amputate his hands as soon as he exited the womb. The cloaked individual remains in the rain, completely engulfed in animosity. The text further mentions that others attempted to disable his ankles, just to guarantee he never rose above them. The tight shop reveals his sunken, shadowed eyes. He confesses that, ultimately, someone did manage to successfully blind him. Now that's what you call a truly terrible origin story. Suddenly, the bald individual with monastic attire charges forward with a knife, demanding his death with a loud shriek. He darts toward the figure, intent on eliminating the monster permanently. Crimson fluid explodes in all directions as the knife connects exactly where intended. This visceral scene truly illustrates the intense violence of the ambush. The victim's outline is cast against the backdrop of the blood spray. He grunts in agony, enduring a strike powerful enough to send any ordinary person straight to the afterlife. Bare feet stand firmly on a wooden structure as droplets of blood stain the puddle beneath. The physical aggression has escalated beyond any reasonable limit. The hooded figure, now possessing enormous black wings, stands surrounded by a mountain of lifeless forms in the ring. He is the only participant left upright after this truly devastating fight. He contemplates that if everyone intends to seize his belongings, he will respond in kind. His countenance is beaten and damaged. The transition from prey to apex predator is evident in his hardened gaze. He takes one purposeful stride, his bare foot creating a splash in the puddle of rainwater. The tiny sound of the drop hitting the surface breaks the otherwise absolute silence. He is coming for his pound of flesh, swearing a vengeful oath as he dissolves into the fog. Having officially retired his nice guy persona, returning to reality, Dunhan stares down a bristling thicket of spears while clattering skeletons swarm the room, pulsing with lethal solar energy. Dunhan swears under his breath, eyes bulging at the realization that he is hopelessly outnumbered, definitely hating this lopsided death trap. An ominous crimson alert flares up, signaling 100 D-rank ancient skeleton lances, proving the game difficulty just skyrocketed like a rocket. The bony battalion advances with a synchronized rhythmic thud, their feet tapping the floor in perfect unison, which is never a comforting omen. Barking commands, Dunhan orders Bonford to man the front line, desperately trying to keep his cool while a literal mob of corpses closes in. He recognizes that fighting on open ground is basically a suicide mission, so he plans to lure them into a tight hallway to survive. The plan is basic, forcing enemies through a narrow gap to exploit a tactical bottleneck, a move that would make Sun Tzu grin broadly. Narrowing his gaze, he prepares to pick them off in small batches, opting for a patient approach rather than rushing to his demise. The lancers initiate the charge, the frantic sprinting echoing throughout the crumbling ruins as they flood toward the narrow entryway like locusts. Spears hammer against the shield with a cacophony of strikes, testing Bonford's resolve as the mounting pressure becomes genuinely terrifying to behold. The bottleneck trick works perfectly, as the skeletons pile up in the doorway, creating a jumbled mess of splintering steel and calcium. Dunhan feels secure momentarily, but watching blades poke through the gaps, he realizes his hold-in pattern has a very short expiration date. He begins manifesting dark violet energy, crafting a tiny skull-shaped orb of magic, clearly preparing to unleash a catastrophic magical boom soon. The relentless pounding on the shield grows louder and faster, suggesting the defensive line is starting to fray under such absurd numerical weight. Bonford's structural integrity is fading, so he warns his squad not to be martyrs, knowing exactly when to scrap the current plan. He signals for a slow retreat, struggling to keep the formation intact while inching back deeper into the hall to maintain the chokehold. They pull back cautiously, trading blows with the encroaching tide, pulling off a tactical withdrawal that is notoriously difficult to manage while attacked. A lance strikes the shield with enough force to generate a blinding white shockwave, piloting the sheer power held by these skeletal brutes. Despite the grim odds, Dunhan keeps his spirits up, convinced they can chip away at this horde one bony loser at a time. Suddenly, spears rain through the air, proving these ancient soldiers are not just melee brawlers but also quite capable at tossing sharp missiles. The glowing azure magic sigil flares across the floor as the skeletons rush in, bathing the entire chamber in ominous necromantic light. Dunhan wears a face of hardened resolve, finally finished with retreat and ready to carve out some breathing room for his squad. The skeleton executes a clean horizontal swipe, cleaving through several opponents at once, showing off combat coordination that is surprisingly quite polished. Dunhan cheers for his minion as the team gains momentum, thrilled that his rigorous training is finally translating into some serious destruction. Zooming in on a skeleton with burning red sockets, it looks like a genuine nightmare beast, letting out a gravelly hiss before striking. The boom, the bone warrior unleashes a fireball that fills the corridor with an inferno, certainly one efficient way to clear out a crowded path. The flames incinerate the enemy skeletons, reducing them to crispy ribs and fine ash, making the blue ruins look like a scorching battlefield. The warquay is covered in pulverized bone fragments and lingering sparks, as Dunhan managed to wipe out a huge chunk of the army. A lone skeletal foot steps through the dissipating smoke, moving with an eerie, measured pace straight out of a low-budget horror flick. Dunhan pulverizes a skull with his staff, leaving the enemy in 1,000 pieces because he definitely does not believe in second chances. Chattery spearmen keep popping out of the gloom with creepy glowing eyes, suggesting this army has a very questionable recruitment department. Dunhan is panting like a tired pug, realizing he's running on fumes while the main boss is still playing hide and seek. He shouts for more action with a grin that screams insanity, fully surrendering to his inner chaos and questionable life choices. The hallway is literally drowning in skeletal remains, creating a boneyard current that looks like a very morbid, crunchy river. Spears bounce off his shield like rain, proving this repetitive combat loop is just a stressful marathon for his dwindling mana supply. One skeleton gets turned into confetti by a massive wallop, showing that his undead defense team is having a truly terrible day. He lifts his staff as purple sparks dance around the skull topper, proving he still has a few cheap parlor tricks left. Casting his summon still brings Bonehead 4 into the fray, costing 10 energy to ensure his front line does not quit their jobs. The fresh recruit clicks its jaw around, clearly thrilled to be tossed into a blender of pointy metal and bad intentions. Dunhan grips his weapon so hard his knuckles vanish, ready to keep poking holes in these things until the universe hits refresh. Adopting his unique style and stance, he finally channels the old master, blending ancient wisdom with his own brand of nonsense. He triggers his pierce skill, glowing like a neon sign while lunging ahead with enough velocity to break a few physics lures. The cobalt blur carves through the crowd as if they were made of cheap construction paper, proving he's a sharp cutting tool. Getting smacked aside does not faze him as he keeps moving, locked in a hyper-focused state aimed solely at that legendary weapon. The shrieking enemies get shredded to bits, showing that Dunhan really does not care about the feelings of his pointy opponents. Covered in sweat and leaning heavily on his staff, he looks ready to collapse despite seeing the finish line within reach. A notification blinks saying the Sun Spear has woken up, and apparently, the weapon is mocking him, which is a new level of sass. Dunhan is genuinely peeved by the snarky system message, glaring at the radiant relic with the energy of a grumpy toddler. He has no clue who this spear thinks he is, so he just clacks his teeth while his skeletons rattle in annoyed solidarity. He reminds himself he survived way tougher dungeons, including that time he outsmarted a guy even a cranky monster could not dent. He tells Bonehead for it is time to go on the offensive, dropping the defensive act to hunt down that mocking piece of metal. He hides behind a bulky shield with his bony buddies, forming a tiny, fragile-looking wall that is ready to start a riot. A giant blowing warning takes over the screen, signaling that the ultimate boss is finally arriving to ruin his afternoon. Seeing a fresh 100 spears approach makes him want to sup, as the endless grind finally tests his waning patience for hobbies. He yells that this never-ending buffet of bones is exhausting, shifting his strategy to just speedrunning toward the exit door. A spearhead crackles with electric blue light as it charges, sounding like a high-speed disaster coming for his personal space. The army hits his barrier like a tidal wave, making his arms shake as he realizes he must sprint through this mess now. He screams for his minion as the shield takes a beating, the loud cracking sound signaling that his cover is about to shatter. He grabs the shield from his skeleton to tank the hits personally, proving he is ready to get messy and handle the carnage. That heady impact nearly flattened him, but he stood his ground like a stubborn goat anchored in a wild hurricane. He barked at Boney Five to manifest an air bubble while the squad covered his tail, basically playing turtle tag. His expression remained stone cold as they ignored the trash mobs, sprinting for the boss room like their lives depended on it. He roared for the team to risk it all, charging them up with a glowing azure shield, essentially betting his entire existence. We see a boot smashing into the floor with a conical thud, cranking the adrenaline meter well past the breaking point. Ding-Hoon sprinted down the hall, screeching at his bony minions to hurry through the glowing corridor like headless chickens. Clattering skeletons chased behind, so he yelled that if the legs gave out, they should crawl with their phalanges. A deafening metallic clang rang out as spears pelted his iron shield, the arc conveying a truly brutal percussion session. He grunted in agony while hunkering down, proving that while his stress levels were spiking, his spine stayed rigid. The skeleton squad got swarmed by incoming strikes, and one bony pal let out a shriek as it shattered completely. Ding-Hoon kept sprinting despite the misery, his cape flapping behind him as he bullied his way through the dense crowd. He mumbled that he nailed it, his brow furrowed with focus as he finally cracked the secret to this dungeon. The mission log lit up with a demand to grab the sunlance, which felt like trying to touch a spicy cactus. The skeleton took a direct hit to the skull, turning into a pile of confetti with a loud, crunchy sound effect. Dunham realized he just needed to boot the sunlance to clear the stage, sweating enough to fill a bucket. The bony warrior swung a blade in a last-ditch effort, doing its best to carve out a path for its master. The skeletal group sprinted ahead, the rhythmic footsteps echoing as Dunham trailed them with his defense firmly held high. He yelled for them to hustle, his face locked in a grimace because there was zero margin for any clumsy mistakes. He pleaded with his own aching muscles to hold together, clenching his jaw as he pushed way past his limits. The blinding flash of radiance exploded at the hallway end, signaling he had reached the goal like a moth to a bolt. He collapsed onto the floor, having survived the blaze but feeling like a piece of overcooked, human-sized barbecue toast. The sunlance pinged a notification, sarcastically mocking his pathetic human form in a way that felt quite unprofessional. The weapon ranted about his embarrassing lack of talent, labeling his species as nothing but conniving, bottom-tier garbage. Dunham groaned, acknowledging that his measly E-rank status definitely made him the ultimate underdog in this cosmic arena. Bony feet stood on the glowing towels, and the heavy atmosphere suggested that a nasty second wave was spawning. Dunham screamed a vulgarity upon realizing the test was merely a warm-up, surrounded by much beefier, angrier skeleton bros. The passage was suddenly packed with armored corpses glaring from every corner, basically a textbook case of bad luck. He appeared completely drained, panting like a dehydrated duck while wondering if this nightmare would ever actually wrap up. The skeleton swung a blade with impressive speed, and he barely managed to sidestep the attack with a clumsy shuffle. The thunderous crash pulverized a skeleton shield, driving home the point that the situation had turned incredibly, hilariously grim. Dunham stands his ground, realizing he only needs to concentrate on his subsequent action, looking quite formidable amidst the clashing bones. He lets out a bellow about the dreadful dungeon and resumes his sprint, his footfalls reverberating through the azure ruins. An immense collision reverberates across the page as something is utterly pulverized, the vivid crimson blood and stark black ink creating a scene of absolute devastation. Much later, we find Dunham gasping for air, perspiration beating on his chin, peering as if he'd just completed a grueling marathon through the underworld. He pauses abruptly, a strange observation causing him to halt mid-stride as he murmurs to himself. A colossal heap of fragmented bones obstructs his path, and a startling realization about these bone fragments dawns on him. These are indeed the remains of his recent adversaries, a truly chilling revelation. He's been going in circles this entire time. His voice trails off as he ponders the nature of this peculiar dungeon, the grim reality beginning to sink in. Holographic depiction of the dungeon's layout materializes, showcasing a precise octagon with an infinity emblem at its core, leading him to gasp at the circular design. A wild grin spreads across his face, the understanding dawning that whether he advances or retreats, will inevitably wind up in the very same predicament. He surveys the lengthy, deserted passage with an air of complete defeat, the full weight of the trap's design settling upon him. He foresees a grim prospect of encountering them once more as a troop of spearmen gracefully emerges from the enveloping shadows. Gripping his skeletal companion tightly, he appears utterly bewildered, questioning his next move with all bravado completely eroded. He ponders the wisdom of engaging or conceding, all while a skeletal foe swiftly advances with a spear, the accompanying sound effect emphasizing the perilously close encounter. He quickly reviews his status, his stamina depleted to a mere 20, signaling he's nearly exhausted and still facing an entire legion, with approximately 30 skeletons remaining. He crunches the numbers, and the outlook for our hero is decidedly grim. He determines that no alternative exists, his skeleton companion emitting a sound of unwavering resolve, and he embarks on a final, audacious gambit. He declares, with a roars, that at this juncture, he'll resort to any means necessary, charging headlong into the fray, instructing his skeletal allies to impede the enemy's advance as much as possible. A maelstrom of projectiles erupts as the engagement reignites with heightened ferocity, the cacophony of impacts underscoring the sheer pandemonium of the battle. He surges forward, hoping to force a breakthrough amidst the skeletal phalanx, desperately seeking any available opening. He lands a devastating blow, pulverizing an opponent's skull with his bare fists, clearly demonstrating his formidable physical conditioning. He rallies his spirit, determined to regain his composure, believing no dungeon can truly conquer him, exhaling audibly with renewed determination. He finally reaches the summit, collapsing against the wall with a profound exhalation of relief, utterly spent and gasping that this endeavor was tremendously arduous. His head whips around as an alert sounds, urging him to surmount the barriers and reach the sunlands. Finding himself back at his original starting point, he cranes his neck upwards, observing a colossal obsidian vortex churning ominously within the ceiling, questioning the precise whereabouts of this elusive sunlands. The dark abyss pulsates and swirls with palpable, malevolent energy, and he inquires, gesturing towards the sky, if that phenomenon could possibly be the target. The skeletal warrior is utterly obliterated by a tremendously powerful impact, the accompanying shriek underscoring the dire urgency of the predicament. He summons his most formidable skeletal subordinate, instructing it to seize him and propel him upwards with every ounce of its might. A truly desperate, last-ditch maneuver. The sunlands taunts him once more, acknowledging his eventual understanding and disparaging him as a naive mortal, daring him to venture nearer. The formidable lance vows to reduce him to mere embers, while Dunhan stands solitary before the swirling gateway. He grunts while gauging the distance, peels digging into the floorboards before his dramatic leap of faith. With a final screech, he launches himself into the void. The skeletal palpunts him skyward, aiming him toward the black hole like a bony slingshot. It is essentially a terrifying leap into the great unknown. The gale screams as he plunges into the swirling vortex, while the encroaching darkness begins to gobble him up like a midnight snack. Two crimson eyes ignite within the spiral, suggesting that whatever dwells inside that weapon definitely has a pulse and a bad attitude. Plunging into the abyss, his cape flutters as he bellows, creating a perfect aesthetic for either his messy demise or a legendary triumph. The golden notification chime celebrates his arrival, confirming he finally snagged the sunlands. He actually managed to hit his target for once. Another ping sounds as his skeletal buddy evaporates, leaving him stranded solo against the boss like a lonely soul at a party. He wears a smug grin of relief, having survived the gauntlet of 100 bony spears without turning into a pinkshin. He hollers a challenge while stepping into a creepier chamber, daring the hidden voice to show its face instead of hiding like a coward. A giant warning box blasts onto the screen, signaling the sunlands as a dark shadow looms over him, making him gasp in sheer terror. Frozen in fear, he receives a sudden mental data dump that feels like someone is forcing a textbook into his skull via telepathy. A sunny yellow box appears to warp him elsewhere, dragging him into a sudden vision, so prepare for things to get weirdly intense. We plummet into a memory bathed in orange dust, where the visual cue suggests the upcoming conflict will be brief and incredibly messy. Behold the sun spear before his bust days, swinging that heavy hardware with such fluid grace that he looks like a tragic fallen icon. The guy is stone cold, taunting his foes about the lack of effort while gripping his pole arm with enough menace to ruin everyone's day. A hooded fighter lunges forward, though it is obvious he is outmatched, stumbling directly into a tactical trap that spells his doom. A savage blow ends the fight, as the spearman roars that these losers were the original instigators of the classroom bullying. He poses with his weapon wrapped in a vengeful dark horror, finally tired of being the outcast and ready to serve some cold vengeance. A red backdrop frames his seething rage as he warns them not to judge his brutality, as he clearly has enough baggage for 10 therapists. Resembling a dark deity with wings shedding wicked light, he has officially reached his limit with the nonsense of mortal existence. Suddenly the locals are kneeling and praising him as a desert hero, which is a massive pivot from the previous tone of the scene. That bald fellow begs for mercy, pleading for the spearman to guide and save them, which seems like a real poor strategic decision. The spearman just offers a wicked smirk, dismissing their desperate pleas for salvation with a cold refusal that says absolutely not. As the crowd panics and the sky turns crimson, he announces that this barren desert requires only one specific thing to keep going. That requirement is total death. Captured in a chilling wide shot of the temple ruins as the impending slaughter begins in earnest, he orders them to brandish their spears, pen tightening on his own grip, as the official start of the massacre gets underway. A forest of spears shoots upward, painting a haunting portrait of a society being weaponized against itself by their own champion. Standing on the pyramid like a scorned monarch, he commands them to execute their own family members without a hint of hesitation. He screams for them to incinerate everything like the scorching sun, turning the desert landscape into a massive, dusty cemetery. His insane laughter rings through the rubble, proving that this guy has completely traded his sanity for a lifetime of pure bitterness. Our hero's vision blurs as we glimpse the winged fiend, presiding over his utterly demolished kingdom. Ding! A shiny alert pops up, announcing the end of the S-rank skill, memory or production. Time to snap back to normal life. Exhausted, Dunham plops onto the floor, panting from the sheer mental gymnastics. He definitely wasn't ready for that much backstory. He lifts his head, eyes glazed, attempting to make sense of the whirlwind he just witnessed. The Sunspear's origin is quite the dark tale. The main villain is hovering overhead, his wings beating a heady rhythm, looking all set to finish off our protagonist. Dunham gazes at the legendary fighter, realizing he's staring at the very essence of the Sunspear. A profound moment for our underdog. The Betty just stares back with vacant eyes, his wings whirring with potent energy, ready to make things seriously intense. Dunham is practically sweating larva, questioning if this dungeon is truly just a measly B rank. The pressure is simply overwhelming. He notices the vibe is eerily similar to that odd old gent from that botched dungeon. The pattern is starting to emerge. The Sunspear sneers, calling Dunham a vile, wicked human and inquiring if he's here to deny his very existence too. Suddenly, the boss leaps forward, moving at a pace our hero absolutely cannot match. Dunham shrieks, realizing he's about to become a human kebab, utterly defenseless against this top-tier warrior. The deadly spear is aimed right for his gut. Dunham's heart pounding, convinced he's doomed with no escape. Hold on, what's happening? A hand shoots into view, snagging the spear mid-stab. Torque about a cliff save. Dunham is gobsmacked, borking at the person who just scored an S-rank attack with the bayonet. It's the Elder. He's standing guard in front of Dunham, looking utterly unfazed while casually stopping the boss. The Elder scolds him, telling him to pull himself together. Dunham is tripping, stammering, "How on earth are you even here?" Dunham realizes he's completely drained, his energy at absolute zero. He barely has the strength to summon a dust bunny, let alone a legendary figure. The Sunspear boss is equally baffled, staring in sheer disbelief that a mere mortal managed to evade his strike. He bellows in rage, questioning if a simple human truly believes they can counter his spear mastery. This guy has an ego the size of a planet. The Elder makes a swift move, his footwork looking like a ballet dancer's compared to the boss's clumsy charge. Plying. The Elder deflects another blow, making a world-class antagonist look like a clumsy beginner. The system chimes. The Master of Mansell has activated his ultimate absolute shield. Danhan can only groan as the force pushes him back. The shield glows a vibrant blue, holding firm. The Elder lets out a sigh, calling Danhan a silly young man. He continues his reprimand, asking how a student could confuse fantasy with truth. Wait, what is he even on about? Danhan looks thoroughly perplexed, twinning through the haze, asking about illusion versus reality, his brain likely doing somersaults. He glances at his hand, noticing it's starting to shimmer and blur at the edges. Something's definitely not right. It dawns on him. He asks if none of this is genuine, and the Elder confirms it, revealing they are inside Danhan's own mind. The Elder clarifies that while Danhan was out cold, the Sunspear chap somehow invaded his psyche. It's a battle of wits. The Elder instructs him to step aside, noting that the current Danhan isn't quite up to snuff for this particular foe. Grinning like a lunatic, he approaches the Sunspear, calling this a stark nightmare of fascinating freak, and honestly, he is stoked for the brawl. The Sunspear radiates a crimson aura, and the Elder admits, perhaps a bit begrudgingly, that the guy actually outclasses him in pure polearm technique. Danhan whimpers, asking if it is truly that dire, but the Elder just chuckles, noting the boss is only a master of one stick, so he is still a total amateur. Drawing his blade for some post-mortem fun, the Elder tells his student to watch closely, as he prepares to put on a legendary tutorial for the kid. We witness an intense zoom on the Elder, his eyes shimmering with mystical might, proving exactly why this dude has such a ridiculously famous reputation. The Sunspear rockets forward, swooping in for a lethal strike, marking the start of an S-rank showdown that is going to be absolutely legendary. The boss shrieks about pesky humans blocking his path, clearly projecting some heavy baggage from his past onto this current, rather violent, encounter. A flashback reveals him bloodied and sightless, wailing about how those heartless thugs snatched away his liberty without a single shred of justification. He bellows that he will force them to mirror his agony, diving down with his spear, proving that this guy is the king of holding long-term grudges. Steel clangs through the mindscape, and Danhan watches the chaotic duel, feeling like the boss's fancy footwork is oddly familiar to his own tired brain. A sudden spark of inspiration hits him, and finally, the gears in his head begin to grind together, forming a bridge between the two mysteries. He recalls entering the pyramid and that weird system alert about a secret link between his unique profession and this dungeon's creepy occupant. As they trade blows, Danhan mumbles keywords about the dead and skeletons, slowly connecting the dots like he's solving a very lethal puzzle. He stares at the glowing spearhead, his eyes widening into saucers as he finally grasps the hidden truth behind this entire aggressive encounter. He recognizes that specific combat stance, realizing it is the exact same weird move he has been forcing his own boneheaded summons to practice. Seeing skeletal figures flickering in the boss's shadow, he gasps in shock, finally comprehending that the Sunspear is essentially just a giant, magical puppet. He mutters the word bones while looking completely floored, having just discovered the boss is just another Necromancer's sheep, albeit very dangerous. Craft project. A golden notification pops up, revealing that suppressing the Sunspear is the final step to awakening his spearman skeleton, which is his main class quest. He hollers at the Elder to pause the deadly dance, desperate to intervene before the Master accidentally destroys the very loot he needs for his quest. The Elder glances back, looking pretty annoyed, and tells the kid to chill since the boss is no match for him and should be left alone. Danhan plants his feet, eyes blazing with newfound grit, and begs the Elder to step aside because he needs to handle this personal mission himself. The Sunspear glares at our hero with murderous red eyes, looking totally fed up with annoying humans and ready to silence him with a sharp poke. A wide shot highlights the massive gap between them, while the sunlight window casts a divine but deadly shadow over this entire psychological battlefield. Danhan flinches under the crushing pressure, and the Elder hits him with the ultimate reality check, asking exactly how he plans to fix this disaster, pointing out that this beast is basically his own summon. The Elder challenges him, saying that if he cannot tame his own pets, he is doomed. Seeing the spearman skeleton projected behind the boss clarifies the bond, and Danhan realizes he must conquer this trial without any outside assistance. The Elder looks genuinely caught off guard, his eyebrows hitting his hairline, clearly shocked by the sudden backbone shown by his supposedly mediocre apprentice. Danhan stumps forward, his boots hitting the floor with a decisive thud, firmly asserting that this stage is his turf, not his mentor's playground. He vows that this is his own mind, narrowing his gaze as he marches toward the warrior, reclaiming the territory that belongs to his consciousness. Standing tall against the winged terror, he promises the Sunspear that he will endure every bit of hate until the boss finally runs out of gas. His boots tap out a confident tempo against the ground, shifting from a defensive scramble to a focused mission. The Sunspear mocks him as a filthy mortal, clearly baffled by this pest having the gall to challenge his majesty. Screaming about human rot, the boss swings his giant weapon with enough force to turn the air into a red warning sign. Danhan lunges ahead, knowing that playing it safe is a recipe for a quick trip to the afterlife against this guy. Visions of past casualties flicker by, prompting the boss to laugh off the idea that any human could grasp his complex trauma. The winged freak howls with pitch-black eyes, cursing all humanity while flooding the scene with an ominous crimson glow. The spear craters the floor like a meteor, proving this guy is less of a boss fight and more of a working millennium of spite. Lunging through the air like a deadly bird of prey, he bellows for the human to meet his inevitable doom. Impact. The hero takes a nasty hit, letting out a pain wheeze as the blade grazes him with terrifying velocity. Crimson spray coats the area as Danhan gets tossed around like a discarded toy inside his own dazed perception. The boss delivers a swift lateral blow, leaving Danhan hacking at blood while being schooled by this ancient warrior. Looming large, the Sunspear lands another heavy strike, forcing our protagonist to fight just to remain upright. Watching from afar, the Master senses a disaster as Danhan screams, his internal psychic agony manifesting as physical wounds. The crushing vertical strike lands, showering the place in gore and delivering a blow that shattered bean curtains. Gasping on the floor, the hero notes his pain tolerance still triggered, admitting it feels like a furnace but he's still ticking. He hauls his battered frame upright, wobbling and leaking fluids while stubbornly refusing to quit this miserable brawl. The winged enemy watches with dead eyes, unpressed while the hero mutters he's fine despite looking like a ruined steak. Dunhan spits out a retort, daring the boss to dump his heavy bit of baggage right onto his shoulders. His palm begins radiating a brilliant golden hue, finally channeling the raw strength required to master this ancient resentment. Standing resolute with his glowing spear, Dunhan basks in the mind-skip blue light, cutting a genuinely heroic silhouette. He demands the boss unload every bit of his hatred, bracing himself with a grim scowl to soak up the chaos. Taken off guard, the creature wonders if the boy really thinks he can handle his volcanic well of pure misery. The boss insists it is a futile effort even if he comprehends the pain, believing his suffering is entirely unmatched. Roaring at the insolence, the creature charges again, the speed barely showing a flicker of fatigue from the lunge struggle. Dunhan dances with a quick pivot, his own footwork mirroring the boss as he starts finding a rhythm in the chaos. Blades ring out in a frantic symphony, turning the encounter into a dizzying streak of steel as he hits his peak. The bone-rattling collision sends him skidding back, but he grunts through the punishment, holding his ground like a champ. With trembling arms, he muses that he has always worked his path alone in this unforgiving and cruel world. The beast shrieks about his cursed hybrid lineage, finally revealing the lonely origin of his intense, even human resentment. Grabbing his weapon with a bloodied hand, he screams for validation, desperate for a connection while actively trying to murder his opponent. Our hero is currently a pink shin for lemon-flavored laser beams, yelping like a kicked puppy as his life bar vanishes faster than a paycheck. The big bad yells that his birthday was a colossal mistake, reminiscing about how his welcoming party consisted entirely of sharp cutlery. Quick replays show our pointy stick friend getting blinded and sliced up, leaving Dunhan to howl like he stepped on 1,000 sharp toy blocks. Villain's mug is contorted into a messy pile of suffering, demanding to know if our brave lad has ever endured such a massive emotional wedgie. Protagonist eats the dirt quite literally, landing on the messy floor, having barely outlasted the most dramatic PowerPoint presentation in history. Dunhan is vibrating like a broken massage chair while leaking juice, barely wheezing out a wee remark toward the fancy birdman standing above him. He mutters how rough things were, which makes the boss freeze up because he expected a roast rather than some lukewarm soup for the soul. Angry guy rolls his eyes despite looking different, confessing that even the nice folks who pitied him were basically trash waiting to happen. He recalls everyone playing tag with knives in his spine, which explains why he refuses to leave this basement without a security deposit. We see a depressing flashback of a tiny bird kid whose feelings evaporated, concluding that humanity is just a collection of working fibs and letdowns. Dunhan gets a free A ticket from another blow, as the boss rages about how society effectively forced him into his current ugly monster phase. Dunhan asks if this violent massage is part of the healing journey, serving as a combat-certified psychologist without the comfy couch or diploma. Squeezing his messy fingers, he notices the beast's anger is draining slowly, though our buddy's health insurance premium is definitely skyrocketing right now. Pondering the monster's trauma while getting nuked, he accepts the beating just so the big guy finally finishes his epic and sparkly tantrum. Floor time happens again, but he looks up and asks if they plan to host a pity party all weekend, wishes some top-tier shade. Pan clutching the weapon with a sticky noise, he decides he is done being the universe's shoe toy and prepares to finish the boss. Screaming through a face full of grime, he tells the target to stop living in the reruns because the show was cancelled years ago, shouting that the core of the agony is obvious. He gets uncomfortably close, delivering a linguistic slap more painful than any actual spear stabbing. Boom, blades are grinding together with lots of sparks, as Dunhan warns the old spirit to stop assuming his motivations so casually during battle. Chinese soldier shuts his mouth and looks karma, asking if the kid actually gets why everything hurts, finally considering reality for once. He rants about being dumped and having his feelings dry up like a raisin, asking what the main man hopes to actually fix today. Dunhan offers a tired grin with a chin leak, acknowledging that history is set in stone while vibing perfectly with his former enemy. However, he suggests starting over from scratch, basically offering the grumpy ghost a fast-track exit from his cycle of perpetual and salty hatred. Dunhan mentions this path is just for him, gazing into those words, handing over a reason to breathe that does not involve generic murder. Golden Spear Dude is flabbergasted with his jaw dropping, whispering a bewildered what, since free do-overs are quite rare in his violent world. Piero drops a logic bomb, pointing out his bulls are already worm food because the Birdman already sent them all to the next life. Winged Warrior looks at the floor, mulling it over, beginning to see that staying mad forever is just a total waste of his time. Glancing at the ancient rocks, he sees this place as just his personal coffin from back when he went on a massive human slaying spree. Standing tall in the sand with frozen wings, he considers a fresh start, looking like a tired old myth ready for a nice long nap. Yup, Dunhan confirms with a steady face, remaining vertical despite the mess, stating he is not there to discuss old news or boring ethics. The artwork depicts the Sunspear's tragic past, a stark contrast to his present. Dunhan admits that human oppression was run, but his own vengeful slaughter was equally misguided, a vicious cycle begging for an end. Dunhan reveals his true motives, his footsteps echoing on a gore-splattered floor, cutting through the melodrama to the wounded spirit's core. Dunhan's intense, laser-like stare fills the frame, having glimpsed the spirit's inner torment and prepared to offer a beacon of hope. The intense conflict briefly flares, a blur of motion and showering sparks as they engage one last time, the air crackling with palpable tension. Dunhan lets out a pained exclamation as a blinding light erupts, absorbing a brutal impact but remarkably remaining on his feet. The panoramic view showcases our hero dwarfed by the immense, desolate desert landscape, the spirit far grander than the vast horizon. The elder master approaches with a beaming smile, his steps confident on the sandy ground, proudly proclaiming Dunhan his true disciple, his growth finally recognized. He commends Dunhan for embracing the child's bitterness, realizing he accomplished more than a mere victory, but resolved an ancient sorrow. The cheerful notification chimes, announcing a level up in pain resistance, proving all that suffering has translated into permanent stat enhancements. Another ping confirms the acquisition of pain resistance grade A, with a helpful note suggesting it's still capable of further improvement, solidifying his transformation into a working fortress. Dunhan offers a tired but genuine smile to his mentor, vowing to endure any hardship necessary to reach the pinnacle of his abilities. The Sunspear's enormous blade crashes onto the ground with a resounding thud, a splash of crimson on the pristine white floor marking the conflict's symbolic conclusion. The winged warrior gazes up at Dunhan with profound admiration, confessing that our hero surpasses any human he has ever encountered. A close-up reveals the spirit's bare feet submerged in a crimson pool, a whispered plea to be reborn signifying Dunhan's message has finally resonated with his very soul. The warrior lowers his head in a gesture of complete surrender, addressing Dunhan with the ultimate title of subservience and unwavering allegiance. The winged spirit reiterates his vow of fealty, formally recognizing Dunhan as his sovereign, as the Sunspear's brilliance softens into a tranquil glow, sealing the pact. A cascade of golden notifications erupts, signifying the successful completion of a secret objective and the definitive resolution of the Sunspear's lingering resentment, ushering in a wave of rewards. The scene shifts abruptly to a lavish party in an opulent ballroom, a striking transformation from the arid battlefield, filled with elegantly dressed patrons sipping champagne. The attendees are reveling in merriment, enjoying what appears to be a typical high society affair for the discerning hunter's elite. A hind cradles a glass of ruby red wine, its contents swirling as conversation flows, marking what seems to be the blue-dilled celebratory bash, though one individual is noticeably absent from the enjoyment. Soyol stands apart, emitting a languid sigh, feeling utterly unpressed despite the surrounding opulence, her thoughts consumed by the sheer tedium of the occasion. She mutters under her breath that her brother's request was the sole reason for her attendance, deeming the entire gathering an egregious waste of her precious time. A well-dressed gentleman attempts to engage her in conversation, reminiscing about the days when such events offered valuable opportunities to interact with high-ranking hunters, but she clearly finds his pleasantries dull. Her mind wanders back to the enigmatic old man encountered in the dungeon, leading her to the realization that, by comparison, everyone present is merely an inexperienced novice. With a weary sigh, she brushes back her lun tresses, eager to conclude her drink and depart, feeling thoroughly out of sync with the unrefined crowd. A voice calls out to Soil, jolting her from her reverie, prompting a suspicious sideways glance at the unwelcome introduction. A beaming gentleman in a tuxedo approaches, exuding an aura of cheerful anticipation, informing her that he's been actively searching and that considerable time has elapsed. He flashes a sharp, self-assured grin, inquiring if she recalls him, projecting the confident demeanor typical of an ego-driven, top-tier hunter. Returning to the ethereal realm, Dunhan instructs the spirit to savor the moment as he initiates the ritual's final phase, the Sunspear looking bewildered and asking for guidance on his role. The spirit inquires about Dunhan's intentions, his obscured eyes scanning the hero's face in search of enlightenment. Dunhan, leaning on his staff like a seasoned pro, confirms to the spirit that for a fleeting instant, he could utterly grasp every feeling from the past. With a flourish of his staff towards the distant horizon, he informs the spirit that his deepest longing was for all of it. Every single ache and yearning was completely understood. In a poignant scene, the winged warrior stands solitary amidst his siege ruins, and Dunhan elaborates that he truly sensed the spirit's former self. He plainly states that he grasped what caused him pain, the very emotions he felt, and precisely what he craved. A dramatic close-up of Dunhan's determined, bloodied visage features him telling the spirit that beneath all that simmering fury, something else was definitely present. Then, a breathtaking vista of a serene desert paradise beneath an azure sky materializes, with Dunhan revealing his aspiration was simply to experience the world. The spirit is utterly flabbergasted, murmuring the word world with eyes wide as saucers while gazing at the miraculous vision. Dunhan articulates the delightful sensation of soft sand caressing one's feet, accompanied by the gentle sound of sand trickling through a hand and the accompanying visual. He further muses that the desert's wandering camels likely sparked his curiosity, as a caravan silhouette glides across the dunes at sunset. We then witness the warrior as a mere child again, his gaze filled with wonder at the world, and Dunhan gently reminds him that this was his genuine spirit before animosity consumed him. A hand stretches towards a brilliantly radiant sun, the gesture Dunhan labels an irrefutable truth that transcends human notions of good and bad. Dunhan queries if that vision isn't compelling enough, prompting the spirit to turn back, his face a picture of utter shock and dawning comprehension. Dunhan candidly confesses that while he can't perfectly relate to the spirit's profound suffering, he felt its echo momentarily, and that shared instant is what truly counts. He explains with sober gravity that he avoids placating the spirit's feelings callously, offering not mere sympathy but a chance for a fresh beginning. He urges the spirit to cast aside all burdens of rage, humanity, and lingering bitterness, essentially telling him to release the anchors that hold him down. Standing tall before the winged warrior, Dunhan simply implores him to contemplate the simple fact that he can now behold the world. A spark of hope ignites in the spirit's eyes as he looks up, his voice quivering with the question of whether this means he can indeed be shown the world. Dunhan confidently affirms, of course, signaling his readiness to serve as the conduit for the spirit's entirely new existence. He then boldly proclaims his true identity, a necromancer, a sorcerer dealing with death, albeit under a curse, as violet flames swirl around his skull-shaped, luminous staff. With the elder master observing from the background, Dunhan clarifies that his personal realm is vastly different from the ancient desert landscape. He begins to inquire, extending a gloved hand, whether the spirit still desires to witness such a world. The Sunspear is utterly dumbfounded and taken aback by this unprecedented offer, having never encountered such human kindness before. Despite the blood smearing his face, Dunhan flashes a charming grin and instructs him to grasp his hand and join him, a truly memorable recruitment pitch. The system chimes, indicating the Sunspear's profound internal turmoil and conflict, signaling a massive crisis of conscience for the boss. The spirit, gazing at the solitary necromancer amidst the mental landscape, inquires if Dunhan is somehow distinct from other humans. Dunhan simply meets his gaze with those unwavering, tranquil eyes, needing no verbal reply as his actions have eloquently spoken for him. the spirit roars of his supreme authority, declaring himself the undisputed monarch of the ancient desert empire, unwilling to relinquish his esteemed position just yet. Envisioned atop his pyramid, wings unfurled, he proclaims his past glory as the celestial body that utterly vanquished the mighty sun. Pointing his radiant weapon at Dunhan, he asserts that he doesn't pledge allegiance to just anyone, intending to test Dunhan's mettle one final time. The spirit adds, with narrowed dark eyes, that this is particularly true if that someone happens to be human, ramping up the tension to maximum capacity. Gaze fixed directly upon Dunhan, he queries whether the fellow possesses the right stuff for leadership, seeing as this represents the ultimate gatekeeper hurdle. Hold everything. A digital prompt bursts onto the screen announcing a secret objective, indicating that Dunhan somehow tripped the dungeon's last surprise toggle. Text directions specify that showing competence is mandatory, since evidence of skill triggers the transfer of legendary Pole 1 lore straight to Bone 2. Curling his lips into a wide grin while pondering the lack of options, Dunhan understands he is on the verge of a serious mechanical upgrade. Luminescence floods the immediate area during his power cycle, signaling his refusal to retreat from the concluding confrontation at hand. Upright with weapon in hand, he inquires about the validation process, currently presenting the posture expected of a seasoned professional. Offering a frozen smell, the entity suggests grabbing the shaft is easy, questioning if the mortal can withstand solar intensity rather than old embers. Clasping the weapon firmly, Dunhan readies himself for incoming projectiles or strikes launched by the historical combatant. That solar staff zips forward so quickly that the ground fractures underfoot, generating a pressure wave during this final offensive lunge, plummeting through the atmosphere with appendages extended and point directed at the protagonist. The scenario reaches a peak dramatic crescendo. Roaring loudly as solar radiation emits from his form, the entity initiates the peak combat encounter while our summoner's future remains uncertain. Amber light washes over urban skyscrapers while chatter regarding a specific companion found during American travel circulates, suggesting elite social ties are being forged. Observe the fair-haired man in formal evening wear chuckling loudly, expressing an eager desire to introduce Soul to his mysterious upper-class associate. Soul stands motionless with arms folded as the dapper fellow offers an introduction, attempting to bribe her with promises of high-end rare beverages. Focus on Soul's expression, which indicates zero enthusiasm as he emits a doubtful noise, signaling no desire for the suggested elite gathering. Wall-mounted timepieces indicate the passing seconds as Soul declares her imminent departure, stating that she has superior places to occupy herself. Tuxedo Man acts surprised because the Gauler is just gaining momentum, yet Soul dismisses his concerns by citing a previously scheduled engagement. Offering a curt acknowledgement of gratitude, Soul moves toward the doors, leaving the host empty-handed as his grand cooperative strategy disintegrates. Exit stage left, Soul strides away with clicking footwear, appearing significantly more relaxed to be departing than she was during the event. Tuxedo's features shift to a frown once she is distanced, labeling her troublesome while questioning the inherent value of her professional status. Pressing his jaw tight to reveal intense envy, he signals that he will likely persist with his schemes rather than quitting. Noting whispers regarding a secret romantic partner, he accepts the gossip as fact and starts strategizing a plan to acquire blackmail material. Whispering about future investigations, he seems poised for surveillance, likely to react poorly if he discovers her association with a low-tier player. Vibrant azure radiance flares from the dimensional gateway when Ding Hoon steps out from his isolated trial, completing a very timely sequence. Passing through the luminous threshold, his shape appears defined against the sparkles, confirming that the B-rank individual mission has concluded. Breathing out heavily as if a weight was removed, Ding Hoon exhibits signs of extreme fatigue yet clearly looks quite glad to be done. Dropping onto the greenery with a distinct noise, his bony weapon hits the soil as he releases air, completely drained from recent events. Laying limbs wide on the turf, he confesses to fearing for his lifespan, acknowledging that the middle-tier challenge was quite arduous indeed. Observing the dimming horizon, he remarks on the lingering daylight, enjoying the deep woodland silence after spending countless hours surrounded by chaotic battlefield audio. Recalling Anjay's estimate of a 6-hour excursion, he verifies the clock and speculates that her arrival should happen shortly. A notification chime signals victory, as Bone 1 begins a makeover, showing that the post-dungeon loot is finally reaching his skeletal interns. Watching his entire bony squad from 2 to 5 undergo a sudden transformation, Dunhan realizes his calcium-rich militia is about to become absolutely terrifying. His jaw drops upon seeing the numbers, noting that every grunt gained muscle and endurance, while the skills surge toward the 8th and 9th tiers. All eyes shift to the spear-wielding skeleton, whose profile now displays the title Solar Spear along with a remarkably healthy health pool of 100. Grinning like a proud father, he observes that this lucky bag of bones inherited to Bus's legacy, essentially becoming the dead king's personality reincarnated. Shimmering in a radiant yellow glow, the undead warrior looks much scarier, rebranded simply as Solar to reflect its newfound status as a mythical unit. Wide-eyed and shocked, Dunhan discovers his favorite servant now possesses all 3 signature moves from the dungeon boss, which is a total game-changing buff. Previewing the moveset, he spots the Solar Combo, the Raging Deserts, and a Dusty Whirlwind attack, making this minion a pocket-sized version of the boss. The Soul Flame ability even accelerates its agility and striking pace, leaving Dunhan staring at a singular skeletal soldier that functions like an entire battalion. He celebrates the sheer competence of his revamped death squad, yet he pours his mitch out, remembering there is still one lingering chore on his to-do list. Deciding that Boney is a bit too generic, he officially picks Sola, which sounds slightly detached but certainly beats being referred to as generic skeleton too. Whispering that the party is just getting started, he interacts with the interface once more, eager to see what other goodies the dungeon left behind. The display confirms his victory over an impossibly difficult floor, congratulating him on a historic feat while the legendary loot begins its delivery process. A shimmering golden mystery crate manifests in his palms, a pop-up announcing his acquisition of an S-rank prize, signaling that he truly won the lottery. He gapes at the fancy container, his chin practically hitting the floor, as he fumbles for words while struggling to process the reality of his luck. Reflecting on his days as a bottom-tier loser who never found anything valuable, he realizes this moment might finally help him pay his overdue rent. Yet here he stands, clutching a high-tier artifact as if it were a fragile egg, still completely dazed by the sheer absurdity of his situation. When the interface inquires if he wants to reveal the contents of the golden chest, Dunhan manages a shaky command, begging the thing to open. A massive, excited smile spreads across his face as the lid creaks, and one can almost imagine the triumphant fanfare playing to mark the occasion. A vertical beam of blinding white and gold radiance erupts from the container, creating a cinematic spectacle for the powerful relic hidden within the glow. The light fades to reveal a majestic, pulsating wizard's rod, as a second notification confirms he has successfully added an S-rank tool to his inventory. Snatching the staff out of the air, he finally looks like a proper sorcerer, holding a legendary relic rather than just some fancy working stick. Witness the Flame Dragon Staff, the top-tier weapon granting a huge vitality boost, a 20% cooldown reduction, and doubling his total magical destructive power. He spots the 100-point health buff and tries to play it cool, though his heart is racing because even a basic S-rank item is totally ridiculous. Rhythmic waves of heat emanate from the wood, which resembles a dragon's bone, and the notes suggest the staff scales endlessly with the wielder's own strength. Calculating the potential resale value, he whips out his smartphone, eager to count exactly how many zeros will soon be appearing in his bank balance. Swiping through the professional Honda forums with focused intensity, he prepares to solicit some professional appraisals regarding his shiny new piece of high-end equipment. After uploading the staff statistics to a public chat room, he waits to see how people react to a lowly mercenary stumbling upon such a godly drop. Predictably, the online trolls immediately accuse him of clout chasing and lying about his rank, leaving Dunhan annoyed and cursing at the toxic behavior of digital strangers. Muttering about whether he needs to post a video to shut them up, he looks ready for a digital brawl while actually typing out replies to the doubters. Dragging out his phone yet again, he resolves to demand their judgment, preparing to record some footage just in case those doubters still refuse to believe his claims. Posting the clip causes an immediate frenzy on the forum, where folks are debating its authenticity while losing their minds over the absurdity of such an S-rank treasure. The online community is spiraling, demanding to know how those stats are possible and calling the item completely broken, leaving him as the torque of the town. Ding-Hoon jumps as his phone starts pinging incessantly, the constant notifications creating a symphony of digital noise echoing throughout the woods as his post goes viral. He stares in confusion at the main page, realizing he has accidentally propelled himself to the top of the national trending charts without even trying. Scrolling through the feed reveals headlines about a mysterious S-rank artifact appearing on the news ticker, making him wonder why his little update is generating such national hype. Breaking into a cold sweat, he prays that the Honda site's security is actually robust enough to keep his identity hidden from the prying eyes of the public. Glancing at his inbox brings a wave of nausea, as 78 messages have already piled up, making him weep over his sudden lack of digital privacy. Clicking the delete button, he decides to scrap his plans to sell the item immediately, terrified that he is nowhere near ready for this kind of intense spotlight. Inhaling deeply to stabilize his racing heart, he freezes as a sudden realization dawns on him. He stares at the staff, pondering that no lore dictates he must wield it right now, so hiding it in his inventory seems like the safest way to avoid unwanted attention. Since his energy is back to full, he decides to examine the deer, gripping the rod tightly while anticipating the raw destructive potential of a genuine S-rank relic. The weapon ignites with a dazzling blaze as if it has gained a heartbeat, and the magical vibrations rattling through the menu interface feel absolutely legendary. With a system chime, the summoning of his skeleton is finalized, so he burns 10 vitality points to drag Bone 5 out for a quick demonstration. The skeleton mage manifests amid a swirl of cerulean and violet light, prompting Ding-Hoon to beckon him closer with a serious expression. He thrusts the dragon staff toward his minion, casually handing over a priceless relic as if he were just tossing a cheap chew toy to a stray dog. The creature snatches the rod and its eye sockets instantly ignite with a fierce, burning heat, clearly acting like it just hit the jackpot of the undead world. Watching the mage emit a raspy, wicked cackle while the staff thuds against its bony grip, he realizes this guy is definitely going to ruin some expensive scenery. Ding-Hoon offers the artifact to his mage once more, an absurdly generous gesture to bestow upon a lowly summon that clearly does not know its place. Without a second thought, the skeleton snatches the legendary rod right out of his master's grip, proving that gratitude is not exactly a feature of the afterlife. The system confirms Bone 5 has equipped the flaming deer, causing the weapon to flare with an intense, fiery aura that perfectly complements his undead companion. His jaw nearly hits the floor watching his minion wield the relic, bewildered that such a scrawny bag of bones possesses the stats to use high-tier equipment. The other skeletons stand around scratching their heads, but he recalls that necromancy rules usually forbid undead from equipping items, making his glitched class quite the anomaly. Rubbing his chin in deep thought, he worries that letting a skeleton play with his first S-rank find might be a massive waste of potential profit. He weighs the benefits of keeping a buffed-up pet against the massive payday, wondering if he should let the creature keep its shiny new toy permanently. Breath starts bubbling up as he considers the mountain of gold that selling this rare prize could fetch, making it hard to ignore the potential fortune. The mage lets out a rattling, triumphant laugh while clutching the staff, appearing entirely unwilling to surrender its newfound source of power. Deciding that cold hard cash wins over loyalty, he demands that his minion hand over the artifact immediately, reaching out to reclaim the pricey equipment. To his utter shock, the skeleton steps back and rattles in defiance, making him wonder if his own summon has decided to start a full-blown labor union. He sighs in defeat, concluding that a high-performing summon might be more useful than gold, especially if it helps him crush those tougher dungeons later. He sighed, telling them to simply claim their prize. The skeletal crew then rattled the bony jaws in a triumphant fanfare, practically beaming with an almost comical self-satisfaction. A slight, knowing smile played on Dunhan's lips, as he mused on the possibility of this particular bony recruit someday reaching a genuine enlightenment, much like his star performer, Sun Yang. He was finally grasping the impressive, long-term prospects of his growing undead legion. Right, time for serious matters. Dunhan gleefully slammed the reward claim button on his system interface, bellowing with unbridled joy that the spoils of victory were finally here. The blinding explosion of golden radiance engulfed the display, ushering in the arrival of a brand new artifact. A triumphant notification then declared that he had successfully acquired the legendary, and rather ominously named, Root of Racial Conflict. Despite its grand title, the item was just a small, faintly glowing chunk of timber. Dan, intrigued, wondered if it was another potent catalyst, much like his past encounter with the Golden Key. The system then obligingly displayed the full specifications for the Root of Racial Conflict. Apparently, this A-rank catalyst held the power to unveil the long-lost chambers of an elusive desert expedition, and rather conveniently, it was exclusively tethered to Dunhan himself. As he clutched the faintly pulsating root, a sudden realization hit him. He had stumbled upon an entirely novel pathway to an uncharted dungeon. What a day, truly. Things just continued to escalate gloriously for our wonderfully fortunate protagonist. Do you recall Soyul's insightful guidance concerning how catalysts invariably pave the way for intricate link quests and singular opportunities? He was finally beginning to grasp the grand tapestry of his unfolding destiny, or at least, his very unusual career path. His mind's eye flickered through a rapid-fire sequence of glittering S-rank emblems and shimmering heaps of legendary treasure, as Dunhan deeply contemplated his imminent future. He was utterly resolute. He would ascend to S-rank and carve his name as an undeniable luminary in the Hunter realm. His thoughts drifted back to a striking mental image of Sun Yang, that formidable winged warrior boss. He mused aloud, or at least to himself, whether this freshly discovered dungeon might somehow connect to other illustrious skeletal figures, perhaps mirroring his exceptional spearmen. A daunting mental picture materialized, an immense phalanx of supremely capable skeletal warriors. He then posed a rather unsettling question to himself, pondering the mind-bubbling scenario wherein all 10 of his bony companions evolved into ultimate entities from their individual planes of existence. A broad, somewhat unsettling smirk stretched across his face as he speculated if such an outcome would render his chosen profession utterly, gloriously over the top. He was finally, truly beginning to grasp the frankly apocalyptic capabilities inherent in his notoriously cursed class. Gazing dramatically skyward, he demanded answers, wondering what cosmic joke had led to this extraordinary situation. He couldn't shake the question of why this enigmatic system favored him so unbelievably much. He summoned his status window once more, meticulously examining his rather grim-sounding Necromancer title and the ever-expanding compendium of his abilities. It remained an utterly surreal experience, as if he were trapped in a fantastic slumber from which he had yet to emerge. He let out a frustrated roar, raking his fingers through his hair, admonishing himself not to intellectualize this absurd fortune. He wisely resolved to simply surf the magnificent tsunami of good luck, rather than question its perplexing origins. His gaze then shifted to a prominent leaderboard, displaying the creme de la creme of global rankers. His objective, now crystal clear, was to ascend that formidable hierarchy and etch his moniker into humanity's collective consciousness. He determined that regardless of the underlying mysteries, he would simply leverage the system to his own advantage, clenching his hand into a resolute fist. He was undeniably prepared to fully engage in this grand cosmic game, and unequivocally, to emerge victorious. Just then, an ominous, shadowy outline of a skeleton materialized, serving as a stark reminder of the sinister capabilities he commanded. He wasn't merely a hunter. No, he was a genuine maestro of the departed, conducting a symphony of bone. The narration clarified that a skeleton was also known as a skullhead. These undead beings possessed nothing but their bony frameworks, comprising their entire, charmingly skeletal forms. A solitary skeletal archer stood silently amidst the trees, radiating an unexpectedly serene aura for a being typically associated with doom and gloom. It was a fleeting, tranquil scene, subtly underscoring the remarkably peculiar essence of Dunhan's reanimated companions. A particular skeleton, armed with a formidable halberd, inclined its skull respectfully and addressed him as my esteemed lord, unequivocally demonstrating its unwavering fealty. This unsettling yet undeniably impressive spectacle truly highlighted the considerable advancements these bony recruits had achieved. Dunhan's jaw practically hit the floor as the skeletal construct astonishingly articulated words directly to him. Its empty eye sockets blazed with an eerie, potent yellow luminescence as it relayed its unexpected communique. The bony messenger straightened to its full, impressive height, its joints clattering faintly as it declared its startling capacity to peer into tomorrow and perceive forthcoming events. Dunhan was utterly dumbfounded, positively shell-shocked by this unprecedented aptitude. He fixed his summoned companion with an expression of unadulterated bewilderment. He mumbled incredulously that it defied all biological logic for a being devoid of nerves or musculature to even perambulate, much less engage in articulate conversation. A close-up dramatically revealed Soyul's polished boots as he strode silently behind him. The sun had vanished, and the atmosphere instantly adopted a far more summer tone. She halted abruptly, her eyes widening dramatically as she fixated upon the disconcertingly articulate, clattering skeleton. A breathless gasp escaped her lips, as she declared it genuinely captivating, her finely tuned ranker senses unmistakably detecting an extraordinary anomaly. She remarked that encountering a conversing skeleton was such an unparalleled rarity, that would undeniably render all other necromancers utterly flabbergasted. Once more, she found herself thoroughly captivated by his ostensibly faulty yet astonishingly capable reanimated companions. Dahan, with a slight huff, challenged her casual reference to it as merely a skeleton, promptly interjecting to amend her terminology. He insisted she ought to address it as Sunyan, explaining that this particular bony sussate was a singular, most cherished companion. Sunyan, with comical decorum, executed a polite bow towards Soyul. She, surprised, returned the gesture, acknowledging the summon as a distinct personage, not merely a tool. Dunhan then inquired if she was genuinely comfortable remaining in such peculiar circumstances, perched here. He expressed a touch of understandable trepidation regarding the presence of a supremely powerful, top-tier ranker casually loitering atop his humble dwelling. With a grin radiating absolute confidence, she tells him to stop worrying, promising to shield him until he finally masters his own abilities. Holding up one finger, she bargains that her babysitting duties end once he hits a rank, which is quite the steal for premium protection. She strolls toward the roof ledge as the breeze plays with her hair, mentioning that his rapid progress makes joining a top build inevitable. Dunhan looks skeptical, muttering that a rank seems a lifetime away when his current D-rank status feels like a permanent anchor. While checking his status menu, he grumbles about being a mere D rank, yet her knowing smirk suggests she possesses some hidden intel. She admits being truly baffled, recalling how he was basically just a professional back carrier when they first met, but things have changed. Glancing at So-Yang, she notes the skeleton already rivals a B rank, confirming that Dan-hoon is leveling up at a truly absurd velocity. He realizes he is right, acknowledging that his bony companion could reclaim its former world-conquering might if given the proper chance. So-Yang turns toward his master, insisting that he requires no personal supervision, as he clearly understands his lord knows best. The skeleton pledges to refine its spear work to honor its lord, which is a surprisingly touching speech for a working heap of calcium. Dan-hoon nods, giving the go-ahead for solo training, and the skeleton offers a stiff, obedient salute before marching off to practice. Watching from afar, he observes the skeleton executing a horizontal slash that kicks up a shockwave, proving it is putting in real effort. Dan-hoon sits alone on the roof pondering his palms, getting slightly twitchy about why his rank upgrade is taking such an eternity. Examining his rank catalyst, he figures the system would not toss him a C rank quest unless a rank boost was actually plausible. He bellows that C rank is the immediate objective, his eyes igniting with a fresh intensity as he prepares for his next big leap. Back home, Dan-hoon is busy stacking cardboard boxes, constructing a makeshift fortress right in the middle of his living quarters. Lee So-yeol peers over the wall looking suspicious, while Dan-hoon insists he really does not have to go to such extremes for his sake. Feeling slightly sheepish, he explains that letting her crash on the roof feels wrong, so he's trying to be a decent, civilized host. He raises his hands defensively, swearing on his life that he will never cross this boundary, desperate to prove he is a gentleman. Pointing to a rolled-up sleeping bag, he tells her she is welcome to set up camp in that corner just like she did yesterday. He chuckles nervously, admitting that even with a high-profile guest, he refuses to surrender his own mattress. Peak E-rank selfishness. Flashing a swag grin, he claims that quality sleep is essential for his health, desperately spinning his stinginess as pure wisdom. So-yeol stares at him with a deadpan expression, clearly unimpressed and questioning why she is currently guarding such a bizarre human. Dan-hoon gestures toward the box barrier and asks what her problem is, insisting that clear boundaries are vital for domestic harmony. He mentions that as a low-tier hunter, the thought of her brother finding out they are living together makes him sweat bullets. A mental image of her brother, the terrifying blue-billed leader, manifests with glowing eyes and a menacing aura strong enough to kill. Slamming his hand down, he insists the cardboard wall is the only thing standing between him and a very grisly, painful demise. So-yeol sighs in defeat, realizing she cannot win this debate against her odd housemate, and wonders how her life became so complicated. Dan-hoon seems totally blindsided by her sudden intensity, barely noticing the metaphorical danger flags flapping wildly in the wind behind him. Looming over the cardboard divider, she looks lethal while warning him that if she wanted to bypass this wall, it would vanish instantly. She claims his head is about to roll, her silhouette looming ominously across the floorboards. The neon blue glow surrounding her suggests this is definitely not a playful jab. Dan-hoon is drenched in a cold sweat, squeaking out a nervous affirmative. He finally grasps that stacking boxes hardly balances the case of bunking with a lethal mercenary. Her features suddenly relax into a playful grin, clarifying the comment was just hollow banter, and her intense aura flickers out like a dying light bulb. Dan-hoon is panting like a marathon runner after that brush with a rebo, wondering if his roommate considers homicide her only meaningful extracurricular activity. He worries about her fractured psyche, realizing having a professional assassin as a roommate is equal parts hilarious and a total nightmare. The thunderous pounding on the entrance shatters the stillness, signaling that the mysterious visitor definitely never learned how to use a doorbell. Dan-hoon and So-Yeon whip their heads toward the portal with suspicious glares, both baffled by who would drop by during such an ungodly hour. A desperate voice rings out from the hallway, the frantic banging making the situation feel like a genuine life or death emergency. Dan-hoon looks completely bewildered, questioning who would dare visit his dumpy apartment at this time. Since he certainly lacks any social life, he figures it is safe to peek since So-Yeon would have surely sniffed out any high-level hunters lurking nearby long before they reached his doorstep. He cracks the door open with a cautious squint, braced for some shady guild thug to be waiting on his welcome mat. Expecting a ninja, he is stunned to find a trembling young woman who looks more like a lust tourist than a professional hitman. Her voice wobbles as she asks if he is Ju Dan-hoon, leaving him totally flustered and wondering if they have ever even met. The poor girl is sobbing uncontrollably, begging him to rescue her kidnapped sibling while looking absolutely shattered by her current predicament. Dan-hoon is completely blindsided, stammering in confusion because this total stranger somehow knows his identity and expects him to be a hero. Her hands shake violently as she hands him a crumpled note, and he realizes instantly that this delivery spells nothing but massive trouble. MC studies the paper with mounting dread, this confusion evaporating as the gravity of this dark situation finally begins to sink in. The note contains a snapshot of a man tied up like a turkey, confirming this is a textbook ransom case that just raised the stakes. He scans the demand to drop off the brother by 8 or face the consequences, chuckling at the classic villainy of this tired kidnapping trope. The truth slams into Dan-hoon like a freight train, and his eyes turn icy as he realizes those pathetic shadow group goons are clearly behind this. MC grunts when So-Yeon materializes behind him to inspect the evidence, clearly peeved that someone has the audacity to cause drama under her nose. The girl gasps in shock, clearly recognizing the legendary Carnage bringer standing right there in the middle of a kitchen. So-Yeon notes their amateur kidnapping tactics are a desperate move, likely because her constant presence has forced the shadow group into a corner. His phone suddenly vibrates with a fresh notification, and his expression hardens into a mask of pure, concentrated fury as he reads it. He glances at a message from Nick checking himself, who claims he is currently causing massive headaches for the pairing guild as well. Dan-hoon mutters that the trap is perfectly set, as the Shadow Syndicate launches a multi-pronged assault to distract all the heavy hitters. So-Yeon is grinding her teeth so hard it echoes, her aura flaring with rage at the thought of anyone messing with her beloved guild. Dan-hoon watches her, realizing she is genuinely panicked for her comrades despite sticking to her promise to protect him, which is surprisingly sweet. He suggests she rush back to help Pairing since they have no other options, leaving her looking completely blindsided by his unexpected command. She shuts down that idea immediately, insisting her brother is far too talented to be easily snagged by some bottom-feeding shadow losers. We get a fantastic shot of her brother, the Blue Guild Master, practically radiating power, and she's utterly confident in his immense strength. Suddenly, her face clouds with worry, and she points out that by comparison, he's all by his lonesome. She frets about what might befall him once she's gone, taking her bodyguard duties quite seriously. Bless her heart. Dong-hoon lets out a sigh, agreeing that the peril is real, but he queries if the primary objective shouldn't be rescuing the poor soul who's been nabbed, revealing his inner hero. He makes a salient point, noting the note's explicit demand for him to show up solo, which screams of an obvious setup, the trap everyone can see coming a mile off. Dong-hoon's eyes narrow in agreement. He's suddenly aware that Hellhound has already cleverly orchestrated his isolation from his usual backup. To your mind, sir, he's no longer a pushover, boasting about the Elder and the Sunster backing him up, essentially assembling his own dream team of legends. He then asks, with a dramatic harsh-shadowed visage, if she recalls a particular pearl of wisdom she once shared with him. He quotes her, musing that existence is a grand expedition, beginning and ultimately concluding with the bonds we forge, truly absorbing her sage advice. A visual of the abducted individual flickers into existence, and Dong-hoon grasps that someone dear to him is suffering because of his predicament, a burden he simply cannot bear. He firmly declares he cannot passively observe this injustice, his resolve hardening to its absolute zenith, signaling his official decision to step into the fray. Standing tall, he informs her he refuses to be a spineless protector, finally adopting the genuine heroic mindset he's been cultivating. With a sharp, determined grin, he asserts his need to reciprocate what he's being given, ready to dispense some well-deserved retribution upon the Shattery Syndicate. So, after a prolonged, pensive gaze, she relents with a weary sigh, understanding that his mind is made up when that particular glint appears in his eyes. She informs him she'll first make tracks for Pairing, swiftly resolve matters there, and then rendezvous with him afterward, though she sternly cautions him to tread carefully, as it's undoubtedly a booby trap. Glancing back, she poses a question. Does he recall her prior offer? She reminds him she was prepared to introduce him to a veritable Rolodex of contacts. She adds with an enigmatic smile that it appears that particular opportunity might be materializing rather sooner than anticipated, hinting that help is indeed on the way. With a flash of incredible speed, she vanishes, leaving behind only a swirling cloud of dust, leaving Dong-hoon alone in his apartment, realizing the true battle is about to commence. The young woman stammers, utterly flabbergasted by the S-rank hunter's abrupt departure. The MC stands in his chamber, his gaze fixed on the empty spot where Soyal had just been, murmuring about the abundance of connections, the meaning of her words finally sinking in. The scene shifts to a summer pier at the dead of night, the warder appearing frigid and unwelcoming, the quintessential haunt for ne'er-do-wells. We see a close-up of sturdy tactical boots striking the weathered wooden planks. The villainous collective has officially reached the pre-arranged meeting spot. The captive brother is slumped on the ground, bound and visibly trembling, looking utterly terrified as the menacing figures tower over him. The ringleader, sporting a rather unsettling spider mask, consults his timepiece, exuding an air of patient anticipation. The plan is coming together perfectly kind of vibe. His watch indicates they have mere minutes until the ultimatum expires, and the atmosphere is so thick with suspense you could practically slice it. The masked individual mutters that his guests will arrive shortly, his gaze fixed on the inky blackness, radiating absolute certainty that Dong-hoon will appear. The steady beat of approaching footsteps reverberates through the nocturnal stillness, signaling someone's arrival with a remarkably composed and unhurried stride. Dong-hoon materializes from the gloom, his countenance set in an expression of unwavering concentration, looking every bit the determined individual on a singular, vengeful quest. The masked adversaries whip the heads around in unison, their eyes widening in sheer astonishment, one of them blurting out that their target is heading their way. The ringleader roughly yanks the abducted man upwards by his collar, cynically employing him as a human barricade, a truly despicable maneuver, if ever there was one. Dong-hoon remains utterly silent, his latent power erupting like a volcano as he strides onto the pier, enveloped in a captivating azure luminescence. The poor fellow grunts, violently slammed back into the grime, the sorry shadow of the fearless hunter he once must have been. The arachnomasked chieftain chuckles softly, thoroughly entertained by the unfolding theatrics, then sneers, querying Dong-hoon's actual presence. Another scoundrel challenges Dong-hoon's bravery, eyeing his summoned skeletal companion before scuffing him off as a mere low-tier necromancer, a truly grand misjudgment. Dong-hoon mentally surveys the assembly, realizing the leading hunters are all A-rank powerhouses, with probably a whole roster of B-ranks strategically scattered across the entire pier, quite the warm welcome committee. The spider-faced commander unsheathes a glowing tactical blade, his gaze blazing with malice, then questions if Dong-hoon shouldn't already understand his summons, his eyes proclaiming negotiations are officially off the table. A sweeping shot captures the nighttime pier, where Dong-hoon confronts three assassins, while a tied-up hostage lies prone amidst the chaos, the blue tinge day thick with a prelude to serious bargaining. The lead assassin, cloaked in his spider mask, visibly loses his composure, clutching his tactical knife tighter and demanding if Dong-hoon has finally deduced the actual purpose of this clandestine rendezvous. Dong-hoon maintains an utterly chill demeanor, perfectly embodying a clueless delivery person, insisting his only motivation for showing up was the note he received, his poker face absolutely unshakable. He extends a digit toward the captive, pointedly reminding the ruffians of their original bargain, claiming his arrival should instantly trigger the poor fellow's release, as if they'd ever play fair. The chief isn't buying this charade for a second, stepping right into Dong-hoon's space, inquiring if he truly intends to maintain this pretense of ignorance when everyone clearly knows better. The tight shop reveals Dong-hoon's hand, where something definitely stirs within the creeping shadows, our protagonist merely biding his time for the flawless moment to unleash his master plan. The leader hoists the captive skyward by his collar, the unfortunate soul screams muffled by his gag, then insists Dong-hoon immediately divulge every single detail of the opportunity he supposedly discovered. The glinting blade presses directly against the hostage's neck, truly escalating a very bad day, the assassin unequivocally stating that if Dong-hoon doesn't spill the secrets, this poor chap is toast. Ding-hoon performs an acting clinic, days lowered, sweat beading, professing his hands are trembling uncontrollably, and humble reminding them he's merely an insignificant ear anchor with 5 thoroughly inadequate skeletons. He conjures a faint wisp of violet energy, feigning utter defeat, pondering aloud what possible course of action he could take, as the mystical energy spirals around a spectral floating skull. The skull emanates an unsettling, spectral glow, and Ding-hoon briefly drops his act, privately conceding that his elusive opportunity isn't precisely something he could simply hand over, even if he desired to. He raises his gaze once more, seemingly capitulating, announcing he'll reveal absolutely everything, prompting the leader to smirk, convinced he has finally shattered the young man's resolve. The leader lets out a patronizing chuckle, informing Ding-hoon this is precisely how he ought to have conducted himself from the outset, believing victory is his, assuming Ding-hoon genuinely values his continued existence. A wide view shows the tension visibly easing, the leader taunting Ding-hoon for his verbose confession, but our cunning hero remains utterly modest, feigning immense gratitude for simply being allowed to live. Ding-hoon's countenance settles into a neutral mask as he readies himself to spin his tale, commencing by declaring his profound secret is actually quite remarkably straightforward. He conjures an image of his venerated master, the venerable old sage, poised majestically atop a celestial mountain of clouds, disclosing the existence of a mentor, signaling a glorious exposition of legendary lore. The assassin immediately leans forward, utterly captivated, asking if this is indeed the very same master Ken Jaehyo once spoke of, the enigmatic figure even D-Soul struggled to contend with. Danhan delivers a resolute nod, clarifying that his master is so unbelievably formidable, even the Dark Emperor himself launched dozens of challenges, only to be utterly trounced each and every time. The leader is utterly dumbfounded by this revelation, finding it nearly impossible to fathom such a monstrosity truly existing, yet he remains deeply suspicious, wondering why he can't observe this master himself. He glances around the deserted pier, dismissively labeling the master as utterly worthless if he's exclusively perceptible to Danhan, a colossal blunder. My friend. Danhan allows a subtle smirk to play on his lips, inviting them into a whispered confidence, mentioning there exists a rather unique technique to render his esteemed master visible to others. He leans in conspiratorially, a smug grin plastered across his face, informing the assassins he can actually share his master with every last one of them, expertly luring them into a blatant trap they're eagerly devouring. The secondary assassin is completely hooked, breathlessly asking if they truly can perceive the master, and if he might even offer them instruction. As avarice proves to be an incredibly potent intoxicant, Danhan delivers a confident, of course, claiming that's precisely the reason the Dark Emperor stubbornly lingered, desperate to acquire that very same forbidden knowledge. The leader shoves his face directly into Danhan's, aggressively demanding that Danhan transfer that invaluable wisdom onto them this very instant, practically salivating at the mere prospect of enhanced power. Danhan offers a polite smile while promising an instant transfer, though his elaborate 30-minute chanting ritual is clearly just a hilarious ploy to stall for time. The clock is ticking down, and that impatient assassin boss looms in the shadows while watching Danhan perform his supposed mystical preparation routine. While he chants away, Danhan sneaks a peek at his mobile device, proving he is scrolling through private messages rather than praying to any gods. Soyeol sends a text urging him to stay safe and avoid reckless brawling, proving that she is watching over him even from her remote location. Danhan notices a fresh notification pop up on his screen, hoping it brings vital news because his precious countdown is nearly at an end. Soyeol mentions those useful allies he noted earlier, promising that they will rush over to provide backup the moment she gives him the signal. The simple objective remains holding the ground for 30 minutes, as every piece of his elaborate plan finally clicks into the correct position. Standing alone on the wooden pier, Danhan stares at his phone and sighs, realizing he is about to endure the longest half hour in history. The assassin leader preps his dunes for the incoming transfer, completely falling for the trick and convinced he is about to receive supreme power. A tense close-up shows the masked leader waiting in total silence, the atmosphere thick with dread as the deadline approaches its inevitable conclusion. Danhan flashes a wicked grin, fully aware that his gamble on their insatiable greed has blinded them to his obvious trail of deceitful lies. He understands that they chose to swallow his bait hook, line, and sinker, and regardless of the outcome, the gears are already turning. Heavy tactical boots stomp against the worn floorboards as the impatient killers narrow the gap, clearly itching to finish this tedious business quickly. Danhan sits cross-legged with eyes shut, faking a chant while his observant enemies note that 30 minutes have officially ticked off the clock. The leader starts feeling suspicious, recalling how Danhan previously used a barrage of useless chatter as a clever tactic to delay the confrontation. A shadow falls over the leader as he connects the dots, sensing that despite the changing circumstances, his opponent is definitely plotting something devious. The leader shouts a harsh command, jarring Danhan from his meditation, but our hero just responds with a casual noise like he was napping. Fuming with incandescent rage behind that mask, the leader demands an end to this farce, finally realizing he is being played like a fiddle. Danhan plays the fragile mage card perfectly, warning that any further interruptions will break his concentration and force a complete restart. What a legend. He offers a small and mischievous smirk, daring to inquire if his confidence is starting to unnerve them just a tiny little bit. He mucks the leader for showing signs of nerves, pulling a brilliant power move by turning the tables on the armed thugs surrounding him. Doubling down, Danhan suggests the coward should just retreat, making the veins on the assassin forehead bulge with pure and unadulterated frustration. The leader reaches his breaking point, drawing a dark blade while his mask radiates intense fury at being pushed around by a mage. He grabs the terrified hostage once more, brandishing the sharp metal as the poor victim struggles and muffles pleas for his own survival. Danhan pretends to look stunned, asking what on earth they think they are doing, fully embracing the performance of her genuinely betrayed ally. The leader notes that the 30 minutes have passed, deciding that since the promise was broken, the hostage must pay the ultimate price. Danhan turns icy cold, telling them not to blame him for their own foolish choices, just as the long-awaited backup finally arrives. The deafening blast echoes through the area as an explosion of blinding light erupts behind the confused assassins, catching them totally off guard. The leader spins around in complete disbelief, eyes widening as he realizes the hunter has suddenly become the hunted in this sudden ambush. The jagged bone spear smashes into the pier before the leader, splintering the aged wood and sending a massive cloud of debris into the air. That top dog gets eaten by pure force, suddenly realizing his game plan just went up in literal smoke. His head pivots like a broken fan through the grime, hollering about whose bright idea it was to start blasting. A spooky bony silhouette towers across the docks, leaving the hired knives absolutely shook at such an overpowered calcium pal. Number 3 stands tall while oozing radiant lemon vibes, appearing quite ready to solo this entire team of Amidon ninjas. Some low-level lackeys stunned that a basic bag of bones almost successfully decapitated their entire miserable payroll department. Dunham rises and wipes his trousers, teasing that while dodging was cowardly, their reflexes were surprisingly not completely trashed today. But the toothless work, he expresses gratitude for their patience, while it finally dawns on those dunes that they got bamboozled. The head honcho shakes with absolute fury while mumbling naughty words, his spicy scarlet vibe beginning to sizzle quite intensely. He howls while questioning if this joker expected easy mockery, spiraling inside a tornado of maroon sparkles at his breaking point. He roars for the squad to converge, demanding they off the prisoner and snatch the brat, turning the dock into total chaos. Dunham maintains an icy unbothered gaze, promising those clowns an expensive invoice for their failed attempts at being sneaky little liars. A calcified heel stomps the pavement with a heavy boom, making the concrete crumble beneath the power of the bony boar. Those rattling frames zoom ahead, resembling ivory streaks diving into battle, shattering the jaws in anticipation of an all-you-can-eat buffet. One dead guy parries a fancy sword with his own steel, making like shows happen as both teams dive into melee madness. Dunham lifts his magical stick, causing a giant grape-flavored beam to shoot skyward as he stops holding back his inner menace. His evil smirk fills the screen, ordering his horde to delete the opposition, which basically guarantees a total cleanup of these rejects.